Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
1. Chapter 1. One of the directors responsible for the operations at one of Umbrella Corporation's secret bases arrived there after receiving a strange call from his subordinates. John Reyes was prepared for anything. The base was testing a wide variety of experimental models of the T-virus, so a reinforced squad of 2.5 thugs shielded their boss with reliable vigilance. But contrary to his fears, he was greeted by his own employees not as zombies or mutants, but ordinary humans, very much alive. John allowed himself a brief sigh of relief and relax. But only for a moment, and only until he was shown the reason for the call, or rather, the consequences of that reason. How? The dead haven't shown such abilities before. And breaking in not to devour the living, but from the object, is strange, to say the least, for the infected individual, he muttered, carefully reviewing the video recording of the incident. On the screen, scientists were administering a series of injections to a man restrained in a metal chair, the restraints built directly into its frame. This method had long been standard procedure, and even tyrants had been unable to break free. Yet this infected subject, who had barely changed under the virus's influence, managed to do what had previously seemed impossible. His characteristics have improved in ways we don't yet understand, but even now, according to preliminary analyses, Subject High F-05 is head and shoulders above the tyrants. As for his intelligence, we used some unconventional methods to introduce the virus. And the injections weren't done with the T-virus itself, but with an analog developed by our colleague the G-virus, which already contained the T-virus embedded within it, implanted before freezing 15 years ago. It was supposed to thaw upon contact with our G-virus analog, one of the scientists explained. He was sweating profusely and constantly paused to take a sip of water. John grimaced in irritation at the professor's behavior. Unfortunately for Reyes, this scientist was irreplaceable. His knowledge was still too valuable to the company. Otherwise the ambitious director would have removed this fanatic from science long ago and replaced him with someone more loyal and controllable. What exactly were the characteristics of these viruses? And what came of the experiment? I can't understand much from the camera recordings alone, he asked, frowning. Our colleague, the scientist began, glancing briefly at the graying professor standing closest to the door and displaying military bearing, unlike the rest of his colleagues, suggested injecting the virus along with the blood of infected individuals. And given the G-virus's tendency to be transmitted through saliva, and apparently someone here had watched too many horror movies, which we still managed to recreate, he used bats as the primary test subjects, both dead and living specimens. While the dead specimen turned into a completely normal corpse, as has been confirmed many times in other animal species, the living specimen began to mutate. Dealing with them wasn't difficult, so the infected genes extracted from them were tested on 5 volunteers from among the contract workers. At this point, John allowed himself a small smile. Yes, the contractors, those who signed a contract with the corporation to provide their services as guinea pigs at the very beginning of Umbrella's release. At that time, no one knew what was being developed in Umbrella's laboratories. And more than 20 years later, the corporation still kept these volunteers in cryogenic suspension. More specifically, Professor, what kind of volunteers were they? Or rather, what did they contain? And why am I seeing only one recording? Where are the other 4 samples? Reyes asked gloomily, watching the scientist once again reach nervously for a bottle of water. 2 of them contained the frozen T-virus. The other 2 were injected with a second dose of the T-virus before the procedure, and the last one was injected with the G-virus. The last 3 couldn't handle it and died of heart failure, but strangely enough, they didn't turn into zombies. The first 2, who already had the virus in sleep mode, were injected with both variants of the resulting hybrid. At first, everything progressed the same as with the other 3, but at some point, the destructive processes began to slow down, and eventually almost stopped. Still, the 2 subjects didn't survive. Their hearts also failed at the last moment. He paused, swallowing. So, the behavior of the subject shown in the recording seems even stranger. While its counterpart simply died without showing any signs of change, High F-05 raised his head again after a couple of seconds even though his heart had not resumed beating. The first thing we noticed was a change in the color of his eyes, and most likely his retina, because he saw us through the one-way mirror and even spoke perfect Russian. How did it go? For the first time, the Russian scientist spoke up, smiling and offering the line his colleague failed to recall. Damn it, Umbrella. I'm screwed in every possible way. I need to get out of here, he quoted with amusement. But the test subject spoke for a minute and a half. one of the scientists behind him protested. Their Russian colleague only smiled mysteriously, unwilling to repeat the uncensored version of the subject's monologue. Yes, that's how it went. Then he growled and jerked upright, ripping the chair off the floor. With the chair still on his back and lower body, he rushed toward the wall, though you've seen that on the recording. We took the liberty of calling you because the infected dogs, the ones with explosive devices implanted sent after him, were destroyed, and 2 of them seem to have been completely eaten. The subject has left our area of responsibility, the scientist finished under John's furious stare. And you kept quiet about it. That's what you should have started with. What if he moves toward Raccoon City? The operation to capture the original G-virus is about to begin there. It may be several hundred kilometers away, but if the target left your area even before your call, and judging by the surveillance timestamps, he could already be near the city, if not inside it. And despite the blockade of the city itself, the surrounding areas have not been fully evacuated. Even if that's not my problem, I don't want to breed more samples. And yes, you said you set the dogs on him. How do other infected individuals react to him? John asked, calming down and returning to a businesslike tone as he typed quickly on his PDA. Ordinary undead ignore him, but animals perceive him as extremely aggressive. Perhaps animal instincts heightened by the virus allow them to identify him as a threat, the scientist replied, shuddering under his superior's gaze. Understood. Then send a squad to eliminate him. I've already issued the order myself. Now, indulge my curiosity, what's the name of this subject? Hi F-05. And you said he spoke Russian? Was he Russian when alive? John asked, surprised, staring at the features of the black-haired man who, once again on the recording, was smashing through a concrete wall with his back still strapped to the chair. No, he was a pure-blooded German and didn't know a word of Russian. We have already checked the available questionnaire and data on this sample. As for the name, I don't know. The scientists exchanged awkward glances. They couldn't admit that their colleague, as the discoverer, had proudly named all 5 test subjects Hedgehog in the fog, hence the abbreviation HIF. And don't destroy him. We've tried to reproduce the results, but nothing worked. We need him here, at the base, preferably intact. Otherwise we may lose a promising direction in the virus's development, the scientist added absent-mindedly, forgetting once more who stood before him. His remark earned a thoughtful look from his superior, who seemed to be deciding what to do with this fanatic. But John nonetheless updated his order to the squad, transforming the elimination mission into a capture operation. Chapter 2. Yes, breaking through the forest had been quite an idea, but jumping out onto the road in my condition would have been completely suicidal. Although, I guess I'm already dead. But that first thought, expressed in a stream of profanity I'm still a little ashamed of, was confirmed even before I finally left the base of those crazy vivisectors. So, by calling them umbrellophiles, I really hit the nail on the head. They weren't just psychopaths or deranged role-players, but real scientists at a real base. At that moment, my desire to run from the psycho role-players turned into a desire to get the hell out of this base before they turned me into a zombie or something worse. However, by the 10th wall I broke through after the chair shattered on the 7th, leaving steel armrests hanging off me, and after I smashed the last 3 walls with my fists and body, I realized that the walls I was breaking down so easily were by no means made of cardboard, as if I had been escaping from cosplay enthusiasts, or even plasterboard, which anyone could break. It was concrete, if not something stronger. I don't really know much about construction materials, but the half-meter thickness alone hinted that a human being shouldn't be able to break through them at all. But because of the shouts behind me and the echoing commands, I didn't have much time to think about it. I really didn't want to stay in those laboratories, so I was even glad I had such strength and that I didn't feel pain from my broken fingers, from which blood was oozing. I realized just how bad the situation was 6 minutes later, after running out of the perimeter and into the forest. More precisely, not immediately after running out, but after crashing into the 6th tree. And no, my coordination was fine, I just couldn't keep up with the speed of my body using my dead brain. Yes, I was moving so fast that everything blurred before my eyes. Only a minute later, when I had not fully adjusted but at least began dodging trees, did I come to a conclusion. I could now easily outrun a truck, but a sports car would still beat me. The realization crushed me. A person simply cannot move like that. But I didn't have long to wallow in self-flagellation, because a dog jumped at me. I managed to raise my hands in time and keep the beast from biting off my head. And it could have. Not only was it a Doberman, it was fucking undead. Or a special type of dog capable of living with one eye missing and half its skin gone. Then I blacked out. When I came to, the blood on my body was being absorbed into me, and the dog's skull lay in front of me. Yep, there aren't even any bones left except for the skull, but what was much worse was that my hunger hadn't gone anywhere. A couple of seconds later I noticed some black, ticking device lying about 20 centimeters from the former Doberman's skull. My associations kicked in instantly, and I jumped back as far from the supposed bomb as I could. The explosion happened the moment I left the ground. No, the radius wasn't large, only a couple of meters, but it threw me back a good distance and slammed me into a tree. There was no pain, but I had trouble controlling my body, like a key had gotten stuck or something. A couple of seconds after I straightened up, something inside me cracked loudly several times, and everything fell back into place. Wow, what regeneration? Or was it because I had just eaten? A significant question, of course, but it seems to me that it should be postponed. The approaching growling, though I couldn't see anyone in the thermal spectrum, clearly hinted that if I lingered, I'd have to deal with the rest of the pack. Ah yes, about the thermal spectrum. Even as I woke up, I noticed that the figures of people behind the glass glowed reddish, and I saw the same when running away from the base. The walls didn't block it, either. That's exactly what helped me bypass the guards. But I saw zombies without any glow, so that worked the old-fashioned way: if I see you, great, if not, your problem. True, I had a better chance of survival than humans. On my way out I broke through the wall of either a cell or a laboratory, and the 3 zombies sitting there reacted to me not at all. But they rushed at the guards, chasing me with enthusiasm. Dogs, however, were clearly after me, so it wasn't that simple. Maybe they were created differently or trained differently, I don't know. But the fact remains, the human zombies ignored me, the Dobermans did not. But I didn't get far before another dog caught up with me. Again, as if spellbound, I smelled its blood, not as enticing as the first time or as with living beings, but still very attractive. This time the pull overwhelmed me, though far less so I didn't lose touch with reality. Although, honestly, it might have been better if I had, because my body seems to have taken on a life of its own. I lunged forward, and the dog that had jumped at me received a powerful blow to the skull, literally smashing it instantly. Then I pounced on what remained of its head and sank my elongated fangs into the mess. What the hell was happening to me? Before my eyes, the dog's body literally shriveled, and my hands worked frantically, throwing already bloodless chunks of meat into my mouth. I tried to spit it out or at least stop somehow, but it was useless. All I could do was watch, as if nothing in my body except my eyes listened to me. And instead of disgust, I felt pleasure, and I disliked that even more. No normal person could eat dead meat and feel pleasure. Although, on the other hand, beef and pork from a store aren't those dead, too? Ugh, I was already justifying myself. Rock bottom achieved. Meanwhile, my body continued devouring the carcass with relish, grinding everything, bones included. Yes, I devoured it in mere minutes. But where did all of that even fit inside me? Chapter 3. As soon as the last piece disappeared into the depths of my stomach and the blood, absorbed through the pores, seeped into my body, I finally regained control of myself. Yeah, I need to do something about this. Ideally, I need to understand what I am and how to proceed. And I absolutely must get this control issue sorted out, or else I'll walk out among people and lose my mind again. Even if not immediately, but at the sight of blood, then what? Ideally, I need to get into one of those vivisectors' laboratories, but if I go back now, there's a very high chance they'll take me apart for parts, which doesn't suit me at all. Conclusion? I need an empty laboratory or some unofficial scientists. So, first of all, I need to find out when I ended up. And then, based on that, I'll decide what to do next. The easiest route would be to head for the hive. I think that's what the lab under Raccoon City was called. Even if I've landed in a more remote part of the universe, I know, I can always try to find something useful there or conduct research. Surely they couldn't have destroyed absolutely everything there, right? The only but quite significant drawback is that I'm not a scientist. So even if I'm lucky enough to find the necessary equipment and instructions, analyzing myself would still be difficult. And that's an understatement. Sure, I have some knowledge. In my past life I was an ambulance paramedic, but on the other hand, a paramedic isn't even a doctor. So you're completely screwed, Alex. Or should I go by the name of the body's original owner now? But Nathan doesn't sound right either. And unlike me, he was a complete failure. He didn't even have a job, which is why he volunteered for Umbrella, despite the fact that the prospects for the first batch of recruits were less than encouraging. I got that bit from the memories of the German whose body I ended up in. Well, the only plus in this entire situation is that now I know 3 languages. I speak Russian and German fluently, and I have conversational English. I had a good grade in it, though my knowledge faded a bit over the last couple of years. And Nathan knew English even better than I did, so overall this left me with a rather respectable level of English proficiency, except I might miss some curse words. But I don't think that's much of a loss. Back to the main issue, I need to figure out where, geographically, and when, canonically, I've ended up, and act accordingly. If it's early, I can take advantage of the timing to give the zombie apocalypse a little push and maybe do something nasty to the vivisectors while I'm at it. If it's late, I'll look for a lone scientist, and I already know one. Wesker. Though that parasite is perfectly capable of betraying me, so I need to pique his interest and make him think that I need him far less than he needs me. I could also look for Birkin, but that's only after the first point, or perhaps the most I'll find is a wild zombie with an interesting virus strain. Fun, in its own way. When I finally emerged from my thoughts and prepared to keep running, staying near this particular lab was dangerous. I realized I had completely missed the explosion. At least I'd had the sense to increase my distance from the bomb. More interestingly, I discovered where everything I had eaten had gone. I must say, Nathan had been rather skinny, but after 2 dogs, my new body now had pretensions to muscle. Just pretensions, mind you, but watching muscle mass appearing so quickly was definitely pleasing. And the fact that the next time I fought the dog, not my rebellious body acting on its own, brightened my mood even more. And this time I limited myself to its blood only, which satisfied my hunger perfectly. I had no desire to become a muscle-bound brute, and the meat from previous victims had already made me sinewy enough. And since I wasn't busy devouring dogs, I had more time to put distance between me and the blast site. So I drank 3 more on the way, while the rest were either recalled if they contained bombs, then there must be some kind of control system, or ran out. And so, after a brisk run, by dawn I found myself on the outskirts of some city, still unknown to me. And yes, because of the dawn, I also added night vision to my list of advantages. I could see perfectly well in the dark and even didn't immediately understand what was happening when the sun started to rise. Also, from my vantage point, I saw military vehicles rushing toward the city and a solid stream of civilian cars fleeing in the opposite direction. One might assume the city is infected, though it's not yet clear how badly, or which city it even is. Sure, one could assume it's Raccoon City, but that would be too convenient for me, and I don't trust convenient coincidences. There weren't any signs with the city name nearby either, which means I need to move in the same direction as the military. I also need to get through the cordons to test a couple of theories. Even if this isn't the same city, it's vital to find out whether regular zombies will react to me. Those last 3 could have been abnormal, especially considering the prime example of abnormality standing here thinking about it. Namely me. An infected city also means I'll have immediate access to food, and at the same time I'll see how I react to humans being nearby. For now, let's go around the traffic in a wide arc. The houses here are empty, except for a couple where silhouettes glow red. Although nothing could be worse than being a latent Korean. Why did I even call myself that? Who eats dogs here? That's exactly what I mean. Now that I've settled on my immediate plans, it's time to leave the forest and head down the hill. The main thing now is not to get shot in the head. Who knows how I'll react to that. Classic zombies didn't exactly handle that well, so let's not take risks, Alex. Chapter 4. I sprint, already darting through the backyards of 1- and 2-story buildings. How fortunate that in America these plots lie so close to one another and that everyone, even the most humble house, has its own small yard. No, maybe it's different in my world, but here it's exactly like that, and I can't help but be pleased about it. I didn't bother trying to knock down any walls first. Their thickness made me doubt I could break through, and second, the noise would be far too great, which is unnecessary in my case. I took the easier route, listening to my newly acquired senses, and if I didn't sense anyone nearby, or precisely, from where I can be seen because on both sides of the buildings a dense line of cars and fleeing citizens stretched, I simply jumped over the fence and landed in the next yard. The main thing in this business is not to overdo it. The first time I jumped, I flew higher than my own height. It's a good thing only a few onlookers noticed, 2 of whom judging by their height were children. Thermal vision can see through obstacles. The police patrols attempting to wrangle this panicking crowd into something resembling organized movement were far enough away and didn't notice my idiotic leap at all. Having learned from those jumps to at least vaguely gauge my strength, I moved on, looking around with care. I didn't need any more excesses like in the case of the first jump. Hunger hadn't returned yet, but the fear of it and the memories of losing control twice drove me forward. Yes, I really need to know who I am and what is happening to me, and only after I learn that can I decide what to do next. After all, who knows, maybe, like some of the infected, Birkin, for example, I'll evolve in several stages. And if at first they can still be called reasonable, then later there is no trace of intelligence left. Yes, I'm afraid. Afraid of going mad, of degenerating into another mindless but powerful creature. Some idealists might be outraged at this approach, but when you're trembling, waiting for the hunger to return, and you know you have no control over yourself, in such moments, somehow, humanity and its salvation are not a priority. Yes, my own skin is closer to my body. Once I figure out what they've turned me into, then I'll be able to play both the rescuer, conversely, the villain. And for now, it's better to be selfish but alive, said the living dead man. Well, let's not dwell on sad things. I jump over another fence and freeze, not immediately understanding what exactly bothers me. After a moment, I notice 2 things. First, with my red-lit vision, I can see the end of the long line of cars ahead, another 200 meters or so and beyond that begin the empty suburbs. Raccoon City itself isn't yet visible, so perhaps this is a distant suburb or even a small town along the way. The second thing is that, lost in thought, I only now register that someone is inside the house whose yard I've landed in. More precisely, I see 3 figures moving hurriedly inside the house. Stragglers or looters. Yes, the latter can make quite a fortune at a time like this. It's a pity I can only make out red silhouettes through the wall. If I could see them with normal vision, I could say for sure who was bustling about in there. But then something unexpected, though, in a way, expected happens. When one of the figures approaches the wall separating us, I feel the thirst for blood rising again. Before my eyes, as vividly as if it were real, I see myself breaking through the wall with a single swing of my hand, grabbing the victim, tearing her out, feeding on her blood, maybe even her flesh. I come to my senses already standing at the wall with my arm raised, fingers curled like a clawed paw. Although it was a clawed paw. Nuthat's not quite right. My hand hadn't changed much, but my nails had grown 3 or 4 centimeters longer, sharpened at the tips, and turned black like an animal's, hinting that they were no longer entirely nails. Damn it. No, this won't eat people. That's not why I'm looking for a way to slow or reverse this reaction, and it's not why I'm heading for the hive. The laboratory under Raccoon City to break down at the initial stage and start devouring humans. You're not human, so why not? After all, it's not cannibalism. We're different species. A frightening thought suddenly whispers in my mind. No, I don't want this. I'm not a monster. On shaky legs, I back away from the wall, trying to suppress the bloodlust. My body obeys sluggishly, as if unwilling to follow my mind's commands, and a quiet, barely audible growl escapes my throat. No, I said. I'm stronger than these damn instincts they implanted in me in the laboratories of those umbrella-worshipping fetishists. My body arches, and I can no longer stand. I fall to my knees, my growl turning into a hiss. Even so, I continue crawling on all fours, backing away, or rather, the lower half of me backs away, farther and farther from the unsuspecting man. That's it. As soon as I can control this, I'll go back to that damn lab and kill them all. Not for footno. To pay those bastards back for what they did to me. I hate them. And then, beneath this surge of anger, something inside me seems to switch. At least, I hope it didn't break. I see again a terrible image, my uncontrollable body unbending and suddenly lunging forward from a crouched position, straight at the wall. And now it's far more terrifying than when I losing control of that zombie dog because there's a living person behind the wall. No, damn it, no, I don't want this. But no matter what I try, my body refuses to listen. My arms bent at the elbows and held level with my head break through the wall, grasping the person standing with his back to me around the waist. From the outside, it might look like I'm hugging him, but my grip is brutal. I know that very well. And the wall, pierced by my torso as I burst through it, certainly doesn't add to the friendly atmosphere. Chapter 5. The other two began to move toward us at the sound of the crash, but sluggishly, somehow unnaturally, as if each step took them 5 whole seconds. My victim, who turned out to be a young girl packing a suitcase, barely managed to open her mouth to scream. But pity was slipping away from me. My consciousness was fading under waves of terrible hunger. When I grabbed her, I tore her t-shirt on both sides and slightly pierced her skin, but the smell of living human blood was too tempting. Control over the body had no intention of returning. My field of vision narrowed until all that remained was a small spot a couple of meters wide instead of my usual wide-angle awareness. And in that spot, my body focused entirely on the pulsating vein in the girl's neck. No, I don't want to and I won't. But another attempt to stop myself failed. I was now merely a spectator. And all I could do was helplessly watch as, with a single backward leap, my body flew over the neighboring fence with the girl in its grasp, covering both the 4 meters from the house to the fence and the 2-meter stone barrier itself. Apparently, my boat had just enough sanity left not to start the feast in front of the approaching help. Or perhaps it was some kind of instinct. I'm not an expert in these things. But the body had already begun its feast, sinking its teeth into the girl's neck with a guttural growl. She let out a frightened moan and went limp. Did she lose consciousness? Good. At least she wouldn't suffer. Though, judging by how quickly the red liquid was flowing into me, and yes, I felt it very well acutely, she wouldn't have suffered for more than a couple of seconds anyway. 3 seconds later, she almost faded from my field of vision, her skin turning deathly pale, and only then did I feel control returning, that it was no longer instinct that was at the wheel, but me. I unclenched my jaw and pushed away the body of the 20-year-old girl, feeling not only disgust and horror at what I had done, not only contempt for myself, but also a faint sting of regret. And I wasn't regretting the girl, no. I regretted not finishing her blood, because I could still see the faint glow around her and feel the remaining blood inside her. Well, finish it. You want to, and it was delicious. My inner voice taunted me again, pushing me toward the wrong decision. And yes, I have to admit it was delicious, and I crossed the line after all, and I don't feel like throwing up. Although, the latter is not surprising. My body would never willingly part with such a valuable liquid. But the disgust, the shame was unbearable. I felt like a worthless creature, a weakling unable to control his own body, someone who had devoured a human being. What now? Will I lose control every time I see blood? Or will any nearby human be enough to set me off? At least I wasn't so pale anymore. I think I could pass for human on a thermal imager now for a couple of hours, maybe. I know, I'm an optimist. The splattered blood, scant as it was, had already been absorbed through the pores of my skin like last time. My clothes were clean, well, as clean as an oversized, light green robe that looks like a mix between a surgeon's gown and a mental patient's shirt can be. No blood, only dirt and whatever else I'd picked up. By the way, I really need to change. I still look exactly like I did when I escaped. If they're searching for me, and they definitely are, then I'm far too conspicuous. Yet another reason to head toward Raccoon City. While I can still be tracked in the surrounding areas, judging by the sheer number of fleeing people, the apocalypse hasn't spread yet and is still confined to one city. It will be much harder to find me inside the city among other monsters. I will be almost invisible there. And then, well, then I'll have to help spread the zombie apocalypse beyond city borders, otherwise the hunt will remain focused entirely on me. True, according to canon, my involvement isn't necessary for the outbreak, but who knows? I shouldn't even be here, so who knows what my presence might change. However, before I could take even a couple of steps away from the corpse, her memories crashed into me like a wave. What the hell? That was the only coherent thought as I saw flashes of the girl's Sarah's, apparently school days. It was insane. I had all her memories, though they appeared faded, like an old movie reel. But still, they were there. Although, on the bright side, it's good that there was no emotional coloring, so they wouldn't feel like my own life. As for how this was possible, I vaguely remembered something about generational data stored in human DNA. Maybe that was it. But this simplified my task tremendously. If this wasn't a one-time effect, then I needed to choose my next recipient wisely. In other words, the scientists I planned to take revenge on would still end up as food. Even if this didn't put it in the skills section, their knowledge, even just as memories, would be incredibly useful to me. Though I should probably keep a couple of them alive. Knowledge is one thing, but eggheads with actual experience, that's another matter entirely. So the plan stayed the same. First, find an assistant in Raccoon City, help them escape, since it'll be easier for me than for a regular human, and then choose a recipient for absorption later. I've really started thinking about some very unpleasant terminology. Recipient, absorption. Great. A little more of this and I'll forget how to talk. I've come to the very thing I renounced. I am a monster. The last of Sarah's memories faded, and judging by the fact that her father and brother only had reached the fence, I must have been in that defenseless state for less than a minute. A relief, albeit a small one. I sprinted away and hid on the opposite side of the building. Yes. I had made my decision. No killing people unnecessarily. Let this be my principle. Because without principles, the only difference between me and the usual creatures would be that I'm slightly smarter, and even that isn't guaranteed. Chapter 6. I jumped and grabbed the window frame on the second floor. Unfortunately, the window was closed. Butas in many houses of this type I'd opened by sliding upward. So it wasn't difficult to extend my claws, which I'd learned to retract almost to the length of ordinary nails, except they were sharper, longer, and remained black, and sharply pry the frame up. A quiet click, and the bottom part of the frame opens. I climbed inside through the opening and found myself in an empty house. Now the main thing was to wait out the commotion in the yard and move quietly. Then I could finally get dressed. And I should close the window, too. A couple of seconds later, the frame looked whole and closed again. I carefully looked around the second floor, searching for clothes and listening to the screams outside. No way, after all the curses and threats they'd hurled at me, I definitely wasn't going back out there. And besides, zombies could come running at the noise. But since there were people nearby, they would be killed quickly and the infected wouldn't even get through those courtyards. It's just me who's so smart, made a mess of things here. After checking 3 rooms, I finally got lucky. I found clothes roughly my size. The house had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. There were enough things here. But before that, I was in the fat man's room and noticed the women's room out of the corner of my eye. The last one I didn't even bother entering. I wouldn't find anything useful there, and becoming known as a transvestite ghoul not exactly my preference. However, a minute later my enthusiasm deflated somewhat. Yes, the clothes fit, but the style was clearly not what I wanted. I needed dark, inconspicuous colors so I wouldn't stand out, yet all I had was a red t-shirt with the words "Suck It" and a downward arrow, white sneakers with a glowing line along the sole, a gray cropped tracksuit, and black jeans. The only thing I had no complaints about were the jeans' thick fabric, black color, a classic. But everything else, what were the previous owners, black Americans with questionable fashion taste. Still, it was better than the ridiculous robe I'd been wearing, so I tore off that ugly thing and changed into what I found. It would have to do for now, but as soon as possible, I need to choose something better. But this can wait until I get to the city, where I'll find something in the empty shops. At least I finally got a proper look at myself thanks to a full-length mirror hanging on the wardrobe. What could I say? I could no longer call myself Nathan. If he had been a tall, brown-haired man with a bronze tan, then the person staring back at me now had an aristocratic pallor, a thinner build than the original body, and black hair down to the shoulders. If the skin tone made sense, death didn't beautify anyone, but why the hair had darkened by several shades, I had no idea. I also had to conclude that if I wanted to pass for human, I needed to stop smiling and avoid opening my mouth too wide. My fangs, though smaller than when biting, were still far too large to belong to a normal person. The red irises of my eyes could be explained. Plenty of things could happen to people's eyes, so that issue was manageable. Honestly, I should get sunglasses. After all, I wouldn't be the only one wearing them. Wesker and I would start a new fashion trend. I'm being ironic, just in case someone didn't catch that. The claws weren't particularly noticeable either, and if anything, I could say someone played a prank on me before the disaster and painted my nails with some kind of polish, permanent. No, of course it would be better to get gloves, but if I didn't have any at hand, I'd stick to that version. And my appearance reminded me of someone, but I couldn't recall who exactly. And my new clothes definitely didn't fit the opera of my new face. At least I wasn't a redhead anymore. I'd had enough of that in my first life, where everyone honed their comedic talents on my hair color, even though it was natural. Okay, enough with self-inspection. Time to get out of here before the inconsolable relatives recovered from the sight of their daughter or sister and called for help. I doubted I could handle armed police officers. Maybe I could, but I didn't want to test it. Better to remain a living cautious coward than a dead idiot. I moved through the house and stopped at a window facing the very building whose wall I had broken. If I opened the window and jumped, accelerating as much as possible beforehand, the people below probably wouldn't see me. Worth a try. No sooner thought than done. I opened the window, took a short run up, and launched myself not from the room but even from the hallway, flying like a swallow out the window and landing on the other side. I rolled forward over my head, thus dampening my momentum and muffling the sound of my landing. Then I sprang to my feet and kept moving without slowing down. I'd lost a lot of time, at least 5 or 10 minutes, which was a lot for me at my speed. Speaking of speed, was it just my imagination, or had I moved much faster earlier, during that fit of hunger? Another task for the ever-growing list, learning to switch into that state without needing frenzy or bloodlust. So many things to do, and so little time, I noted sadly. Hi F-05 didn't turn around and therefore didn't see the strange scene behind him. To his eyes, it appeared as though one of the men lagging behind suddenly hung half a meter above the ground, kicking in the air, while the second began to back away, then sat down on the grass just like the first had fallen onto it. Then both rapidly lost their red glow. 5 minutes later, the vampire, having had her fill, straightened up and followed the scent of the one who had turned her. A fledgling had to remain close to its progenitor, her instinct screamed it. A couple of minutes later her former relatives rose again, but unlike the girl, the two of them were merely ordinary G-virus infected. But Nathan/Alex didn't see that. Chapter 7. Only when I had almost reached the city did I finally understand why I hadn't seen it while moving toward my destination. Only from the hill barricades were being hastily erected around the city and the surrounding area, and in some places they could already be called a wall. And that was damn bad. How was I supposed to get there if the destination of my journey was fenced off? All these thoughts raced through my head as I crouched down, half lying on the roof of the 2-story building closest to this construction project of the century. No, from what I could see, the path was clear either from the park or the forest, and it might turn out that that was where I needed to go as my final destination. But it was still better not to waste time circling around. I needed to get into the city, and the barricades in some places, especially on the roads, were barricades in name only. Actually, from the view that opened up, it was clear that not even all the roads were blocked. But then again, it's quite a distance from where I am to get to them. Should I try to break through? That seemed foolish. But a quick dash a couple of meters from the target and a jump over the fence might work. The main thing was to get as close as possible without being noticed. Said someone in white sneakers with lights. No, I definitely had an exaggerated sense of self-irony. So, the target was set, which meant it was time to crawl. Surprisingly, this method of movement turned out to be only slightly slower than running for me. True, my movements now could hardly be called even remotely human, too smooth, too predatory. Lickers probably moved in a similar way. With bursts of speed and jerky dashes, I managed to get within 2 meters of the barricades and froze in the bushes. There were no more places to hide, and one of the posts. Was I crawling or running after all? Never mind. So when I was near the post, they noticed me. No, that wasn't accurate either. One of the soldiers with the umbrella emblem on his back caught the movement out of the corner of his eye and was now searching for something, gradually approaching my location amid the laughter of his comrades. Mark, you're just scared of cats. Maybe it's time to change your diapers. That's what I'm talking about. But despite the mockery of his comrades, this youngster, who looked even younger than me, maybe 20 at most, stubbornly continued moving forward. God, if you exist and you're interested in the kind of incomprehensible crap that I am right now, then please make sure this soldier doesn't get to me. I don't want to die so stupidly at the very beginning of my journey. Why die? Well, my chances of breaking through weren't that great. The crowd here was large and scattered, so they'd open fire without hesitation, and I have serious doubts that I could survive a bullet to the head. And let's say that thanks to my speed, immunity to pain, and survivability, I managed to overcome the obstacle and escape into the city. They would report me immediately. A dead man rushing into the city, not out of it, would definitely interest the corporation, and it wouldn't be difficult for them to draw parallels and trace a straight line from their base. So, that would let the umbrella guys know exactly where to find me. No, they weren't idiots. Sooner or later they would figure out where I ran and where I was. But better late than never, at least until I had sorted myself out, understood my powers, and could meet them with some dignity before death, added the inner voice sarcastically. No, I definitely had too much self-irony. And at that very moment, a miracle happened. On the other side of the barricades, a group of survivors approached and asked to be let through but were refused and threatened with force. Well, yes, Umbrella would absolutely let someone out of the city. The suburbs were fine, easier for them to catch fugitives there, but not inside the city itself. As for the people leaving, or rather the reasons why they were trying to leave, the corporation could have spread rumors about biological weapons or an epidemic, shown edited footage, put out a relatively safe cover story. Of course there would be no mention of the real situation, or the zombies. No, they could have come up with anything. Really what I imagined was just one possible scenario. But that didn't matter much to me. Step back immediately, or we'll open fire. And automatic weapons were raised across the platoon. Heh, what did I say? Oh, and the survivors had their own pistols, which they lifted. How lovely. Not only had everyone completely forgotten about me, Mark had already caught up with his partners near the first fence, but now I also had a chance to sneak into the city unnoticed. The only unclear part was what the people at the fence were counting on. Did they really think threatening with pistols would get them through, or were they hoping to kill everyone? But judging by the soldiers' uniforms, shooting them would be difficult unless you aimed directly at their eyes. The front line wasn't just wearing uniforms and body armor, they had helmets, and 2 of them had some kind of masks. And I suspected those masks wouldn't be penetrated with a single bullet. A short firefight and it was all over. There wasn't even a single casualty on Umbrella's side, and I won't even mention the dead. As for the survivors, they were completely eliminated. Too fast. I didn't even have time to stick my head out. A herd of sheep, not survivors. Would it really have been so hard for at least a couple of them to retreat and prolong the firefight to distract attention? No, everyone had to collapse within the first couple of seconds. Chapter 8. What if here goes nothing? I tossed the stick lying nearby as inconspicuously as possible since no one was looking in my direction, glancing toward the city, and a muffled "ah" came from the neighboring bushes. So the red glow wasn't just my imagination after all. I'd begun to doubt this feature. Who knows, maybe it was just some kind of glitch in a virus-infected brain seeing phantom glows, and in reality people wouldn't always be where I perceived them. Yes, I had that fear when I threw the stick, because if things went wrong, I could have been exposed. To be blunt and honest, I was slightly afraid of failure. And meanwhile, a reporter jumped out of the bushes opposite me. "There you go. What luck. And here's the cat," said the partner of the soldier who had been walking toward me before the civilians approached with satisfaction, while the journalist covering the portable camera hanging on his chest was saying something about freedom of speech. Excellent. Now part of them was looking toward the city and even farther away, while the rest focused their attention on the journalist. Good luck staying alive, and sorry, Knight of the Pen and Ink, for the setup. You're unlikely to survive after such a filming, but thanks to you, I'll get into the city without running around and wasting more time. With a burst of speed, my blurred figure slipped under the barricades on the road, right at the very edge of visibility. The journalist's eyes widened in fear. Normal vision could still catch me if you knew where to look and got lucky with the timing, but he didn't have time to say anything. A couple of soldiers had already raised their rifles and opened fire on the reporter, or whoever he was. I allowed myself to straighten up only when I was already in the city, hidden behind a building from the vigilant border guards. Phew, the first mission was complete. Hello, Raccoon City. I didn't make it here before dawn after all, but at least I had breakfast. No, this self-irony is getting annoying. Interlude. A short excerpt from a message to headquarters. Today we discovered 2 nimble infected outside the barricade. Both subjects were eliminated, and our scientists assigned to such cases conducted a superficial examination. Both zombies carried an increased dose of the T-virus and were at a stage higher than the usual infected, the so-called Crimson Heads, as our operatives have nicknamed them. Our scientific department also notes that the mutation in them had been initially underestimated. More precisely, according to their assessment, the entity that infected them is at a much higher stage of viral evolution, while the zombies themselves have degraded with the change. Both bodies were sent under guard to the nearest laboratory for detailed study. Additionally, operatives who followed their trail report that there must have been at least one more infected individual at the site. This is because both of these subjects were exposed to the virus on this side of the barricades. After examining the scene, a hole in the wall of a house was also noted, and there is suspicion that one tyrant passed through the perimeter. Photos from the scene are attached. In the evening of the same day, the barricades were breached from the outside. Survivors claim it was done by a girl. This may indicate another type of infected. Please increase the number of teams guarding the perimeter. I got lucky. I was watching the police shootout with the zombies with great interest. The police were winning on points, but in the overall melee, the zombies were the clear favorites. Somewhere off to my side, explosions started going off. Awesome. Especially when seen from the roof of a 5-story building. I wasn't about to save everyone and everything, and people showing gratitude to a monster that's already in the realm of mysticism. I'd been in the city for quite some time now, but I'd suddenly encountered a problem. I had no idea where to go. Not a clue. So, I decided my task was to find someone who knew the way, but the trouble was that looking for any of the protagonists of the series in a huge city was quite the challenge. No, I could trust the strange call drawing me toward the forest, where a half-ruined mansion was visible. Fortunately, I could see it easily from the hilltop thanks to my eyesight. But this feeling of kinship mixed with a call for help and something alluring does not inspire trust in me. Still, it was almost lunchtime, and I'd been here since dawn with no results. So in another 15 minutes, and I'd have to jump into a possible trap. What if the entrance to the hive was right there? Over the past 15 minutes, the zombies had finally finished off the police, but the firefight to the left of my building showed no sign of ending. In the gap between the buildings, I caught a glimpse of the standard uniforms of Umbrella operatives, and I didn't notice anyone familiar from canon, although I saw everyone, since it was quite easy to pick out the red outline of the figure. Just as I was about to jump farther, I was stopped by a tongue. Ugh, damn it, what a mess. I caught the tongue flying toward me with my hand, and something resembling a head peeked out from the opposite edge of the roof. Why resembling? Well, imagine the upper part of a head being nothing but exposed brain all the way down to the nostrils, and below the reddish brown skin and a decent-sized mouth, from which the tongue had shot out. I pulled it toward me, and the liquor, because that's who it was, left a trail of claw marks behind as it slid across the surface, resisting me, the bastard. Heh, and when he wasn't moving, his posture somewhat resembled a frog's, except that he had an almost human body and human proportions. But because of his elongated front limbs, which couldn't really be called arms, not with 10-centimeter claws, it was easier and faster for him to move on all fours. Actually, I doubted he could stand up at all, since his hind limbs had also changed, and their structure most closely resembled those of a frog. Chapter 9. With last jerk of his tongue which I wound around my hand, the liquor flew straight at me, but that fucking creature still managed to swipe a clawed paw through the air. I leaned back and crouched slightly, exposing the monster's tongue to its own strike. How it howled. And then came the blood, spurting from the stump of its tongue. At the sight of blood, my thirst stirred again. What the hell? I'd been trying to determine the limits of my sensitivity, which was why I'd been sitting there watching the fight. But from that distance, neither zombie blood nor human blood affected me. And now, just a couple of drops, I'm exaggerating, but compared to the carnage below, it really was a drop in the ocean, and my mind was already being consumed by a thirst for blood. I would have understood if it had been human blood, but what was I reacting to? A double dose of the T-virus? But the roar of the monster lunging at me cut off my thoughts, leaving me with rather mixed feelings about the situation. On one hand, I had done all this without losing control of my body. On the other hand, the way I ducked and stepped forward, letting its clawed limbs swipe harmlessly over me, was so precise and smooth it felt like I'd done it 1,000 times before. Finding myself close to its body, I simply straightened up and sank my teeth into the liquor's throat, swallowing the blood that gushed into my mouth with a quiet gurgle. The monster tried to resist during the first few moments, but my grip on its upper limbs just above the elbows prevented it from using its monstrous claws, and the rest of it didn't frighten me. True, it smashed my knee with a blow from one of its lower limbs, but I fell forward, pulling my prey under me and completely cutting off its ability to move. 20 seconds later, I rose from the creature's finally dead body and noted with satisfaction that, with the influx of blood, my regeneration was accelerating nicely. Beautiful. Except that my jeans now sparkled with small holes. The liquor had claws on its feet as well, even if they tended to be overshadowed by the ones on its hands. Now it was time to go for a walk to the call, I feel, at least to see what was out there. So, let's go. Jumping across the rooftops where the chances of running into someone were much lower and the speed much higher because there were no obstacles, I quickly made my way toward the forest. Although not without its flaws, this extreme method of transportation was something I was trying for the first time, so I occasionally lost my footing and had to move on all fours. But thanks to my claws, I could easily cling to any protrusions, climbing up walls and onto roofs while leaving small holes in the surfaces behind me. With my acceleration, getting onto each new roof took little time, just like my journey to the outskirts of the city. By the way, it was strange that this place also wasn't fenced off, although I had already noticed plenty of flaws in the barricades and on a couple of sides, there were none at all. But I digress. Jumping off the roof and landing, I spent a couple of minutes waiting for my legs to finish recovering from dropping off a 5-story building. Then I was ready to continue running again. How good it was sometimes not to feel pain. The next 5 minutes of running through the forest were almost paradise for me. What? I didn't stumble upon zombies or anything else unpleasant, and I'd learned to run between the trees at the very beginning of my new life in this world. All I was missing was a basket of mushrooms, and it would have felt like a normal walk. When I reached the mansion, I realized I was a little off the mark. The call didn't come from there, and a short second run led me instead to some kind of pit. From there emanated that strange, inviting feeling, something only I seemed to sense. I extended my claws and began descending headfirst. I didn't experience any disorientation regardless of plane or orientation, so I could move like this even on a ceiling. After half a minute the pit was deep. He crawled down to the very bottom, stopping 3 meters above the ground and staring in surprise at the prisoner of this place. Right in the center of this dungeon stood a vaguely female figure. Why vaguely? Because the writhing tentacles sprouting from the upper part of her body, the bald head protruding from the right side of her humped back, and the corpse-like color of her skin all suggested this could no longer be called a human being. And I didn't remember such a monster. And then she turned around, which had been standing with her back to me. Ugh, damn. She was even uglier from the front. Yes, she had once been a woman, or rather, a girl, but now, even though her face retained its former features, she had 2 heads, the fucking mutant. The tentacles protruding from her left eye and mouth reduced her charisma to a solid negative rating. But what was far worse was the hostility radiating from her, and in that moment I understood who I had stumbled upon. Lisa Trevor, the one on whom Umbrella had conducted its most monstrous experiments, thanks to which both the T-virus and the G-virus came into being. I was in trouble. The professionals in canon couldn't kill her, and even an explosion hadn't worked. So what awaited poor me? Chapter 10. No, I didn't sign up to be a hero. I turned around and rushed upward at maximum speed, but it was no use. I barely managed to move my limbs a couple of times before 3 of its tentacles wrapped around me, squeezing both legs and my right arm. There was no way to dodge them, they were too fast, twisting in midair and making their trajectories unpredictable. In an instant, Lisa turned her body to the left, her tentacles followed suit and slammed me into the wall, which was much farther to my right, about 6 or 7 meters away. Once again, I was glad I felt no pain, because the crunch in my right side when I hit the wall hinted at damage, and not only to the wall. I jumped to my feet, but sadly realized I was too slow. Miss Trevor was already within arm's reach and delivered a powerful backhand blow to my right side. Even though it wasn't a fist but fingers spread like claws, it still knocked me back like a feather. My body hit the wall again, this time with my back, and I prayed to all the gods that my spine wasn't damaged, because while I'd be regenerating it, they'd tear me to shreds. I struggled back to my feet, noticing that my long-suffering right side was almost completely unresponsive. I wondered how many ribs she'd broken, or rather, were any of them still intact. And my right arm was hanging limply. What? How was I supposed to climb up now? Even with 2 hands, I couldn't get away from her tentacles, and now it was even more impossible. Since my arm wouldn't obey me, I wouldn't be able to climb at all. I needed both limbs for that. I climbed using my claws, and now that I was clinging with only one hand, what was I supposed to hold on to? With my feet? Although why not? Lisa wasn't rushing to attack yet either. She was hesitating, or something else was going on, but since she was standing there so nicely, I decided to take advantage of it. Not wanting to bend over and expose my head or back to a possible strike, I stepped on the sole of my right foot with my left and, almost taking off my sneaker, hurled it sharply at the cave prisoner, hoping it would distract her, and I quickly repeat the operation with the left one. That, however, was not what happened. When the right shoe was just a few centimeters from the monster, almost hitting it in the face, it simply flew past without encountering any obstacle. Lisa was already standing a meter to the right and half a meter ahead of her previous position. Only the settling dust indicated that this wasn't teleportation after all. Now there weren't 4 meters between us, but 3.5, and the second shoe was already flying toward the target. I turned my back on the monster, a deadly move, but a necessary one, against my legs, and jumped as hard as I could. With injuries like these, my body wasn't listening to me as well as it should, so I wasn't betting on the height of the jump, but on its speed. More than 3 meters, that was the distance I flew upward before starting to climb, securing myself with my toe claws and pulling my body up with my left hand toward the exit visible above. I had only one advantage: the monster didn't immediately realize where its prey or who I was to if it gone. By the time it raised its head and noticed me, I was already at a decent height. Still fearing its tentacles, I accelerated even more, squeezing literally every last ounce of energy out of my body. And, as it turned out, it was worth it. Its tentacles fell just a few centimeters short of my feet, and the relief was incomparable. But how Trevor howled below. My eardrums almost burst, or maybe they really did from the acoustic shock. Most interestingly, though, not a single drop of blood spilled from my body. Yes, it would defend this precious liquid to the very end, and I agreed with my body on that point. It was thanks to my recent snack that I was still alive. If not for that liquor I'd eaten about half an hour ago, who knows what would have happened to me. Once I reached the surface, my right arm finally started moving again, just in time, damn it. A quick examination showed that I'd climbed the last few meters with my ribs intact, but my hunger began to rise, even without any external factors like someone's presence nearby, and that was bad. But what was much worse was that my body had chosen the creature from the well behind me as its target. No, I don't deny that the progenitor of most viruses might be very nutritious, or maybe not, but I wasn't ready to go back down there now and deal with it. I'd rather go after the entire Umbrella Corporation with my bare fists than descend into that pit again. So much for just going to check who was there. But real genius, that. 11, Chapter 11. And my clothes are ruined. My track jacket is literally torn on the right side, the sleeve is completely gone, and there are obvious holes in the back through which my t-shirt is visible. The t-shirt itself miraculously survived all the hardships, though I wouldn't mind replacing it. The jeans weren't damaged, but after the encounter with the liquor, they now have holes that clearly weren't part of the design, so they need to be replaced as well, though not as urgently. What else? Well, at least now I'm walking around barefoot. I don't feel any discomfort, I don't feel anything at all, but I don't like walking without shoes purely for aesthetic reasons. In general, clothing has become more of a symbol for me now, a kind of statement that I haven't sunk to the level of an ordinary, unkempt zombie. By the way, speaking of sinking, Lisa was supposed to be smarter, yet here she'd acted more like a regular zombie. Even those moments of freezing didn't fit with intelligence, because there was nothing to think about at that point. Throwing sneakers was the only odd move, and she froze even before that. Either her intelligence was exaggerated in the canon, or I'm missing something. Or maybe she didn't survive the explosion completely unscathed. Who knows? With these thoughts in mind, I moved steadily toward the city. Screw this mansion and everything else, I'll climb into the sewers and from there make my way into the laboratory beneath the city. Or maybe I won't have to, because there will be crowds of people running around here, both protagonists and antagonists alike, and every second person will have a strain of the virus at one point or another. That's a decent bargaining chip in any negotiations, especially with Wesker. When I reached the city, the first thing I noticed was a store. No, not a clothing store otherwise, that would have been almost mystical, but something far more mundane, a grocery supermarket. Without thinking twice, I decided to check whether I could eat normal, human food. Slipping past a couple of slowly wandering zombies, I entered through a window that had been broken long before I arrived. After giving the place a critical look, I headed for the produce section. Why there? I have a chance to eat meat even now. Fish falls into the same category, especially now that I could consume these products raw without any issues. So the simplest option was to try the same tomato. Fortunately, there were washed ones available. I took a bite, and nothing. In fact, unlike meat and blood, it had no taste at all. Following by an eaten tomato, I decided not to try another and reached for something else. A carrot shared its fate, washed and peeled, followed by an apple. It was called the produce section, after all, and there were fruits and berries there as well. I didn't have time to continue the feast, however, and for a very good reason. It felt as if a red-hot poker were being stirred around inside me. I started to choke, my stomach twisted with pain, my lungs refused to work, and, reflexively collapsing to my knees in another spasm, I simply emptied my stomach, returning the vegetables my body had rejected. The moment they left my system, all the pain vanished. Damn it. A complete failure, not a normal diet for me. Then I decided to run another experiment and went to the meat department, where I sliced off a small piece of pork with my claw, judging by the label. I swallowed it, noting with some relief that I could taste it, and that cheered me up a little. I waited half a minute, but no cramps followed, so I happily ate a decent portion of meat. Just like that, my hunger receded, and I realized I could eat more than just monsters and people, which was a definite plus. Now I just needed to find out whether fried or smoked meat would work as well. If so, that would be ideal. In the meantime, I headed for the fish department. What can I say? Learning as much as possible about the needs of my own body is definitely a priority, and I've always loved fish. The tests, as I proudly called my curiosity, showed that fish was also suitable for me, at least when raw. To my delight, my body didn't reject smoked fish either, though the taste was already somewhat dulled. Sausage, on the other hand, turned me off completely. The conclusion was obvious: too much soy and not enough meat. Damn semi-finished products and meat substitutes. After snacking on some more raw meat, this time chicken, and satisfying the hunger that had returned after the sausage fiasco, I moved on. Naturally, I didn't take anything with me. It seems silly to carry food around when almost the entire city is listed in this column. No, testing the suitability of various products was also idiotic, but I could excuse that with curiosity, and with the fact that I might have to pretend to be human someday. You never know what life will throw at you, and I won't be wandering alone forever without communication, or I really might go crazy. So, with some stretch, I could count all of this as a necessary experiment. The next store on the same street was a gun shop. On the one hand, I should buy something. On the other, let's say I bought a pistol, then what? I didn't know how to use it. I'd never fired a gun before, and shooting would be noisy, which meant drawing attention. What was the point? Right, I could handle things on my own, and if I couldn't, a pistol wouldn't really help me anyway. Besides, the shelves in the store were half empty, which I could clearly see from the street, as well as the zombies staggering around inside. So, after weighing the pros and cons, I moved on. I'd never had any admiration for shooting toys, and I lacked the skills for anything more serious. No, of course, I could absorb a soldier or a police officer and try to learn shooting skills from their memories, but I was sorry to say that people with the knowledge I needed weren't lying around in the street, and zombies didn't have anything like that. I thought about it sadly as I stepped around the living corpse. An absurd phrase, if you think about it, of a police officer crawling along the road. 12, Chapter 12. After 20 minutes of wandering around the neighborhood, I finally stumbled upon a clothing store. At last I'd begun to think there wasn't one here at all. Entering the store, I headed straight for the men's section, silently cursing the zombies who had knocked over most of the racks, leaving the place in utter chaos. Still, after finding clean, undamaged clothes, I began selecting items that met my criteria: dark, inconspicuous colors. I needed to blend in, not shine like a garland in the night. The result of my search and the agonizing indecision that came with it was a new pair of black jeans that had proven themselves well, and a dark gray, almost black windbreaker with a hood, which is quite deep. So now, if I stood close to a building, I'd have a real chance of remaining unnoticed. I couldn't find a decent t-shirt, though, so I kept the same red one. By zipping up the windbreaker, however, I managed to hide both the eyesore color and the annoying slogan. Next, I went to the shoe department and chose a pair of black athletic shoes. I decided not to wear socks. If I had to get rid of my shoes in a hurry, slippery socks would only get in the way, and it would be easier to go barefoot. Besides, they couldn't rub my feet, or rather, they wouldn't cause me any discomfort at all. Satisfied with my outfit, I went outside and, using my claws again, climbed onto a building. The view was the same as before, a joyless atmosphere of despondency, smoke rising from certain areas, and gunshots echoing from different parts of the city, clear signs that the skirmishes with the survivors were still ongoing. Maybe I should take a walk toward one of those places. At the same time, I could see who was so nimble over there. Maybe I'd get lucky and it would turn out to be one of the characters, though I didn't really believe in that kind of luck. After thinking it over for a while, and noting that dusk would fall in a couple of hours, I headed toward the nearest shootout. So, what did we have there? Through the building, I could see figures glowing red as they ran, and the one in the lead suddenly turned around in a doorway and froze. Strange. The others too were standing opposite him, not moving forward. Although what was that fluttering? Ah, I see, one of them was pounding on the door, another had climbed onto something high, a cabinet or something similar, and the third had been knocked down and was being eaten, judging by his twitching and the gradual fading of his color. But what a scoundrel there was among them. Still, he survived and continued the race, while another of the remaining ones was dragged down and beaten severely, or whatever was happening. It was hard to tell, since in this spectrum I could only see the living. While watching all this, I didn't forget to move closer to the building. After mentally mapping out the path of the quick one, I crawled through a second-floor window, immediately twisting my body and letting the zombie's carcass rush past me. What the hell was this? There were no living people here, ordinary zombies didn't react to me at all, and that one had been far too fast for a normal dead man. Good thing there was a window behind, might flew out through it like a swallow. The approaching footsteps, however, didn't encourage me to look at the corpse outside, which had finally come to rest after meeting the asphalt. I turned around and saw its kin approaching me a little too eagerly. The claws on their hands hinted at a higher degree of viral infection than in standard zombies. What were they called? It was somewhere in my head, but I couldn't quite remember. Aloe. Now what does a plant have to do with it? Scarlet? Closer, yes, that was it, scarlet heads. The next stage in the evolution of ordinary zombies. Much faster, far more dangerous, and their claws worked pretty well, too. I couldn't recall much else about them, but I didn't need to. There were only two, and this wasn't Lisa. I had no doubts about myself. Having finally decided whether I was a threat or a snack, the zombies started running. Well, let's see who's faster. I sprinted toward them, closed the distance in an instant, and smashed their heads with my regrown claws. Yeah, I sure felt better about myself after beating up a bunch of nearly ordinary zombies, but on the other hand, I'd deal with a licker too, and I really didn't want to mess with monsters right now. I automatically licked the blood that hadn't completely soaked into my claws. Yum. These were decent food as well, but after my encounter in the pit, I had an irrational desire to snack on someone stronger. But Lisa wasn't suitable for that yet. I wouldn't even have time to close my jaws before she turned me into mincemeat, and it wasn't certain I could digest her blood with all its viruses anyway. So for now, I needed something lighter. I'd come back to Miss Trevor later. I continue moving forward, noticing that more figures illuminated by a red glow, only they are somewhat dim, were emerging from somewhere on the opposite side, presumably from the sewers. Interesting. I needed to take a closer look, but carefully. And the person who had caught my interest was heading straight there. Chapter 13. After reaching the end of the room and knocking out the lock on the closed door with a simple punch, I'm a perfect burglar, no lock, no problem, I jumped up to the ceiling, away from prying eyes and the main zombie horde. No, they didn't react to me, but why bother weaving through them, suffering and waiting for stronger varieties to attack, when it's much more convenient to stay on the ceiling? I don't know either, like I don't have anything else to do, why make my life harder? Quickly moving my limbs, I crawled to the place where some special forces in black were meeting with Nikolai Zinoviev. Now that was a twist. Interesting equipment, to it seemed to jam thermal imaging, albeit not completely. So what's going on here? Did he betray his own people? He's really going all in, comrade. Though it's hardly my place to lecture him, considering I'd enjoyed watching the police being slaughtered by zombies earlier today and hadn't even thought about intervening purely for the sake of an experiment. So which of us is the bigger degenerate is still up for debate. Still, this was a rather interesting group. I crept closer and listened to their conversation. Don't shoot. He's from UBCS, said the woman who appeared to be their leader. And this, where exactly was he from? What did that abbreviation even mean? Nikolai Zinoviev, Delta Platoon, Section B, my compatriot introduced himself. Though I doubted that was quite the right way to put it anymore. Both sides were still pointing their guns at each other, but Nikolai was alone, while the squad he'd stumbled into consisted of 6 people. Let me count only 2 in the doorway with my normal vision, but my thermal sight through the walls showed exactly that many dim red silhouettes. Are you from the Umbrella Security Service? The bosses must be desperate to send you, Zinoviev said skeptically as he entered and lowered his rifle. That's none of your business. What are you doing here? The woman leading the negotiations snapped. There was plenty of suspicion in her voice, despite her lowered weapon. My team was sent here to rescue civilians, but there's no time for that, Nikolai said with a smirk. Was he lying? There's chaos in City Hall. I'm just trying to find a safe zone. Oh, really? This time, it was his interlocutor who sounded skeptical. Are you scared, you coward? Came a snide comment from another female voice. City Hall is full of infected and unidentified military personnel. The latter are clearly looking for something. But that's none of your business, right? So why are you here? At those words, I began to scan the surroundings more carefully. And yes, somewhere in the distance there were blurry red silhouettes, but they were, to put it mildly, quite far away. I suspected they'd only just arrived, meaning Nikolai might be the one in charge here. But that was just my guess, and the Umbrella Squad had no way of verifying his words. Enough. This was a man's voice, and it sounded strange, as if he were speaking through a transmitter, and the silhouette of the speaker is the hardest to make out. Is he wrapped up in their jumpsuit with his head covered? I suggest eliminating him, calmly, in short phrases, said this overcautious person. And he even approached Nikolai from behind. Great. Take him out, and I'll have a bite to eat afterward because, remembering Zinoviyev's skills, I wouldn't stand a chance against him in a fair fight. That's not our business, their leader said, turning toward the exit. I pressed myself even closer to the ceiling. It was so dark up there that it was obvious the building had serious lighting problems just like the rest of the city. And they gathered in front of the stairs. Is it worth mentioning that the distance between us was considerable? I'd crawled from the second floor up to the ceiling for safety, while they'd come up from below ground level, the sewer. Just in case, I was ready to flee, though curiosity gnawed at me. Maybe I should follow them. At the same time, I could kidnap someone at the right moment. As I'd already noted, I couldn't handle Zinoviev. Maybe I could, but it would be 50-50, and I didn't want to risk it. But snatching a mercenary who lagged behind the group and absorbing his knowledge, that would be a gift from heaven. Who knows, maybe I'd finally learn how to use a weapon, even if only in theory. Let's see. If they don't notice me, I can carefully trail the group and let them clear the way. And they're definitely heading somewhere. All I can think of are Umbrella's laboratories, with their scientists and viruses. Beautiful, in a word. Fine. Let the zombies deal with him. Good luck, the second speaker said as she headed for the exit. A hand. She was blonde. And what an interesting mask she was wearing, something like a gas mask, only a newer model. It wasn't pulled over her head, but fastened with straps. Although, their commander's mask is something between this and a diving mask, with blue glass covering the entire face. Well, good luck with your mission, Zinoviev said, in a tone that sounded more like a curse than a wish. He'd make a great actor. 14, Chapter 14. Next came the one who had suggested killing Nikolai. Yep, I'd guessed right, was fully uniformed. While his colleagues had some exposed areas of skin, especially the women, this one was completely covered, even wearing something like night vision goggles over his eyes. Two others followed him into the passageway. Hey, Reveller, you're in the way. Move aside, said a petite figure in a polite tone. Who? Another woman, but the one she was addressing was really big. Yes, ma'am, he replied jokingly, and the girl with the most open face passed through the doorway first. Only the lower half of her face was covered by an urban-style air purifier, the rest was open. Oh, no, it's just that the upper part of the mask was transparent. Otherwise, it was the same model as the captain's. Following her into the passageway was a burly man, about 2 meters tall, literally wrapped in a cartridge harness over his uniform. His face and head were also covered by a mask, but you could tell it was reinforced. Only 2 blue eyepieces like gas mask lenses remained visible, through which you could probably see his eyes and part of his face. Why probably? Because I couldn't see clearly from where I was, to put it mildly, quite far away. Bringing up the rear was someone roughly my build, holding a knife and a pistol. In addition to his standard uniform, he wore a sturdy-looking black and gray jacket with a hood. At that point, I'd made up my mind about my target. I really wanted to apply the law of looters to the man in the rear and take his jacket to replace mine. And his skills with a pistol and a knife, the easiest weapons to come by in the city, would be useful. Since he held them ready rather than clipped to his uniform like the others, it was safe to assume they were his primary weapons, which meant his proficiency with them was likely quite high. Suddenly, the guy with the goggles began turning from side to side, bringing his rifle up into position. Was he having some kind of psychotic episode? I would have understood if he'd noticed me, but he hadn't raised his head, and I was hanging right above him. To spot me, he'd have to tilt his head fully upward, and that's not an instantaneous motion. I'd have about a second and eternity at my speed. Enough time to escape if needed. For now, though, I watched with interest. What's the matter, Ghost? The commander asked, raising her rifle. Interesting call sign. My instruments show an infected person where I'm standing, but he's not there, the owner of the goggles replied curtly. So, since you spotted him, maybe I can set off a little boom. The big guy Reveller laughed. He really was a merry fellow. The nickname suited him, even if his jokes were corny. At least they were something. Enough chatter. Move forward with caution. There are plenty of floors here, so the infected could be above us or below. What's the threat spectrum? First, she established discipline, and it was hard to argue with that commanding voice. Then she asked the question. Yes, she was definitely in charge. Red, Ghost the Master of Words answered briefly. And the entire squad headed upstairs. They passed the second floor, and after a short exchange where the commander suggested clearing it and Ghost insisted they go higher if they didn't want to leave a red-level threat behind, they continued upward, but not for long. Why so? Because the space between the second and third floors was so tightly barricaded with furniture that it was impossible to pass through unless you could move along walls and ceilings. The squad realized this and returned to the entrance of the second floor, where Ghost once again warned them about zombies behind the door. Meanwhile, I began a leisurely descent. I had no intention of staying there any longer. Yes, it was risky, and their devices could detect me, but it was worth it. Especially since it was obvious that zombies weren't a familiar enemy to this squad. Anyone who'd encountered a situation like mine would have started checking the walls and ceiling. After all, even moderately experienced fighters had already dealt with liquor sand. They moved the same way I did. The main striking force of the group, Reveler, was the first to enter the floor. By the way, when he climbed a little higher, toward the barricade, I finally realized what had been bothering me about his appearance. I hadn't seen any heat signature on his left leg. It seems like he has a prosthetic limb. But judging by the zombies' howls and the confident crossfire he was laying down, you couldn't call him weak. He moved with complete assurance, so exploiting that supposed weakness was out of the question. My goal remained the same. Besides, the big guy's clothes wouldn't fit me anyway. So, let's crawl, Alex, and learn how to fight and stalk without being noticed. 15, Chapter 15. I ran quickly across the ceiling, following the group that had gone ahead, because I didn't want to attract the attention of their ghost, and I couldn't lose sight of them even if I wanted to. After passing through the shaped corridor, I stopped in front of the doors leading to the hall. There was an interesting scene unfolding there. The fighters of this squad were engaged with the special forces mentioned by Nikolai. And judging by their insignia and, more importantly, by the absence of corporate emblems, they were ordinary troops, not affiliated with the corporation. Great. Maybe here I can get everything I need and also use my opponents to strengthen myself, accelerate regeneration, and gain knowledge. Oh, the times. Oh, the customs. Wasn't that how it went? Yeah. Less than a day ago, I felt disgust for myself when I drank that girl, and now I'm cynically choosing whom to use for food and eyeing the clothes of a future corpse and nothing. No remorse or anything like that. Just lovely. I've hit rock bottom, but I don't feel like killing myself over it at all. I'm far more inclined to go inside and watch everything closely so I don't miss anything and gain the necessary knowledge. The shooting down there is already dying down. So, I was wrong. When I crawled into a huge hall, something like a reception room, I realized that the fight hadn't stopped but had moved up a floor. Right in the center stood a grand antique-style staircase, and the squad was now climbing it, with me following close behind. I was safely hidden by the next floor, which protruded from the sides and served as a convenient support point for me. The ceiling is everything to us. There were plenty of special forces corpses, and on the opposite staircase of the hall I even sensed one that was half alive. Could it be that the Umbrella's fighters overlooked him? Or did they consider him dead because of his wounds and decide to let him suffer instead of finishing him off? Perhaps. But the corporation's fighters themselves hadn't suffered any losses. Only the blonde's left arm was bandaged, which was interesting, since she was the only one carrying a first aid kit. How did the squad manage to expose their only medic? I'm certainly no expert on such matters, but shouldn't she be protected as the most critical asset for survival? The upper level on both sides turned out to be blocked by steel plates, so the corporation's fighters went back down. Yes, the shortcut didn't work out. But why didn't they breach the door right in front of them at the top? Strange. The Umbrella representatives who had descended turned left and headed that way. I breathed a sigh of relief. They didn't notice me, otherwise they wouldn't have exposed their backs like that. I was now directly opposite the doors they were entering. More precisely, I was hanging above the entrance on the ceiling, while they'd gone in the opposite direction. Great. Time for a snack. Oh, so much blood and all of it passing me by. It's almost suffocating not to drink it all right here, but if I get carried away, I might miss the moment. I've already missed one fight by being overly cautious. Although not one, but two. Even though they scattered the zombies deftly, despite the decent number of the living dead, it could still be considered a fight. Shots rang out again from the neighboring room, but there was no need to rush there. There were only 5 special forces soldiers left. If these brave guys had taken out more than 2 dozen here, they could easily handle 5 more. I crawled farther along the ceiling and, changing my angle, moved to the 2nd floor. I couldn't help wondering why they hadn't gone straight through this door. I pulled the handlight was locked. No, that wouldn't have stopped them. I twisted the handle harder and heard the lock creak. Done. The break-in was successful. The lock was flattened and twisted. I tried to open it, but the door wouldn't budge, even though it should have opened that way. I pushed it slightly, and a rumble and clanging came from the other side. Clearly, there was another barricade. If they'd approached it with the same momentum as on the stairs, I would have had a hard time opening the door. The question was answered, but it was still unclear how they'd figured out so quickly that it was barricaded. Experience? Or specialized training? Although, what difference does it make to me? On the other hand, it does make a difference. If it's a skill that can be taught, then I have a chance to learn it at least in theory while drinking the enemy. I turned to the still-living Special Forces soldier lying in another part of the hall, directly opposite me. He was looking in my direction now, but he didn't even try to call for help, either because he mistook me for a human, or because he didn't want to draw other enemies here, or perhaps because he was no longer able to speak. Who knows? I was much more interested in how to get to him quickly but quietly. Because I have to cross the hall from wall to wall, and on the left side the Umbrella fighters were finishing up the battle. I could crawl, of course, but that would take too long, and the bastard might die. Crawling at full speed would be faster, but probably too noticeable on the ghost's device. Walking across the hall would be suicide. Should I jump? With acceleration, it would look like instantaneous movement to the ghost sensors, so in the heat of battle he might not notice. At the same time, we'd continue convincing the soldier that his equipment was malfunctioning. I just hope he isn't paranoid. I took a slight step back and jumped at full acceleration. I flew almost to the opposite wall, exactly as planned, and the movement itself turned out to be even faster than I'd expected. Everything blurred before my eyes for a moment, but my reaction finally came close to the limits of my body's capabilities. Am I developing or is the virus developing? The first would be a plus, but the second assumption makes me hurry up and find a scientist. 16, Chapter 16. But for the moment, those thoughts only flickered through my mind. I was far more concerned with whether my landing had been heard in the next room. Why was I so worried? The problem was that I landed on my feet but failed to account for how slippery the tiles in this hall were. As a result, I fell flat on my back and slid a couple of meters into the wall, seriously damaging it and breaking my legs in the process. So there I was, lying there, regenerating while simultaneously pulling my lower limbs out of the wall, where they were buried knee-deep. What a bummer. I crawled over to the Special Forces soldier, deciding to combine business with pleasure and have a bite to eat to speed up my regeneration. The cloudy eyes of the almost dead man stared at me. Don't walk near me, monster. A hoarse wheeze. Yes, I'd worried for nothing about him calling for help, really couldn't speak in a full voice anymore. I'm not walking, I'm crawling, I replied, unable to resist. What could I do? I hadn't had anyone to talk to since I arrived in this world. But this wasn't the time for conversation, or he'd die right here. His eyes were already bulging. Although it seemed you could count the number of talking dead people around here on the fingers of one hand. I shoved my thoughts and lengthy arguments aside, because I'd already crawled over and was now pulling myself up to the Special Forces soldier's neck. He tried to resist, but very sluggishly, which only made me hurry. And finally the moment of triumph, I sank my fangs into his throat and began to hastily drink his blood. A couple of seconds passed, and my legs were fully restored. But I continued drinking from my victim, sinking deeper and deeper, until at some point there was a crunch, and my donor's neck was severed, his head torn off. Oops. The feeling of regret at such an ending to the meal didn't even have time to fully form before I fell into my victim's memories. At first, I tried in every way to block or skip them. I really didn't need his first steps or first words, lest I become sentimental and shed a stingy man's tear. But why not? After all, I remembered him as a little boy. Yes, sarcasm crept in again, but what can you do? For paramedics and doctors, it's second nature. We become callous when we see and help or transport people with broken bones and other injuries every day, so you could say an unhealthy sense of humor is a professional trait. After some time and effort, I managed to speed up the flow of memories pouring into me. So, quickly skipping through to his training, I began to look more closely, now actively trying willing to make his knowledge and skills my own. Since I'm no brainiac, I had to rely entirely on desire and willpower, and even then it was mostly at random. So to speak, I'd wish for something, and whatever happened, happened. Unexpectedly, though, this approach worked. At times it genuinely felt as though I was living those moments alongside the Special Forces soldier. And the soldier himself turned out to be a tough nut to crack. More precisely, from the standpoint of his service record, he was exemplary. He served his country. A patriot. But his mission to help the Special Unit Echo 6 obtain evidence of the Umbrella organization's involvement in what was happening was especially interesting. The government was eager to pin all the blame on the corporation, but while there was plenty of circumstantial evidence, there was still no direct proof. And without it, Umbrella could get away with everything. That was why the brave soldiers needed survivors who could testify. As you might guess, they couldn't just grab the first person they found. The more information a witness had, the better. But rescue operations were being conducted throughout the city, even though Umbrella was actively interfering with the government's efforts. That was probably why not all parts of the city were sealed off by the company. American commandos controlled some areas, while the remaining few percent seemed to have been forgotten by everyone. Still, it would be wrong to assume that everyone in America was so altruistic. Ordinary civilians might not know much, but with fragments of information, it was possible to assemble a fairly complete picture. Silencing one person was easy, silencing 100 was difficult, and several hundred was already unrealistic. So here, too, a clever undermining of Umbrella made sense. And then there was one poor ghoul in the middle of all this beauty. What to do? It seemed to me that the plan was being expanded, and now it even felt realistic to frame Umbrella on my own and in the foreseeable future. Still, I wasn't abandoning my earlier plans. After all, someone else will find a way to bury the corporation without me, but my priorities were knowledge, possibly skills and scientists, first and foremost, as well as technologies. Following the corporation's squad of fighters was quite profitable. They were sure to visit at least one laboratory, or at least I hope so. And if not, I'd still gain skills along with knowledge, and weapons along with armor. And if I was feeling really optimistic, what if I got lucky and managed to absorb them all? I'd even settle for one at a time, with long breaks in between. So what? None of us are perfect. Sooner or later they'll make a mistake, and then I'll be there. This is where a villainous laugh is supposed to go, but what I don't know, I don't know. With that thought, I snapped out of the memory viewing because I'd seen everything and noticed that the world was floating before my eyes. What was this? Was something wrong with me? Judging by the fact that I was alone in the hall, it seemed so. But I didn't feel anything. Then again, I don't feel anything even when something is broken. Hello, everyone. The future of this story depends entirely on your support. Every power stone counts. Goal: 150 power stones by the end of the week. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 17, Chapter 17. While I was thinking, the picture came back, and I realized I was hungry. I also suspected that this slight discomfort was related to what I had done to the recipient's memory. That's what returned to me. Yeah, my brain boiled over. Yes, sarcasm again. I'm incurable. After tracking the movements of the corporation's team of fighters, I realized I had withdrawn into myself not for long. The brave soldiers passed the neighboring room and engaged in a firefight with one survivor and two newbies in the room next to mine. I paused, thought for a moment, and realized just how hungry I was. Since that was the case, I didn't want to jeopardize the plan because of a potential attack of thirst. I quickly moved to the corpse next to the dried and decapitated one, and began to drink it. What can I say? The dead man was less varied and appealing in taste, but still better than the dogs. Although liquors were clearly in the lead. Out of curiosity, to see how much I could consume, after 7 seconds I broke away from the already dried up body and moved on to the next one, wanting to check if I could eat my fee or at least stock up. 40 seconds later, I tore myself away from the 7th person I had completely drained and realized that I didn't know where it all fit inside me, but I felt like I could drink all the corpses in the hall to the bottom. The strangest thing was that I didn't even swell up, even though I had consumed a lot for my build. And blood is thicker than water, so I should now look like a barrel of blood, but no, my stomach was still slightly sunken, just as it had been before. Let's hope at least my thirst would be satisfied for a long time after this. I got to my feet and noticed that I was leaning to one side. What the hell was this? My body felt strangely familiar, and after drinking all that blood, I experienced a strange euphoria. I thought I was just drunk. Well, at least I wasn't completely wasted. Thinking this, I jumped onto the wall on my third attempt and crawled toward the squad. The room beyond the hall was large, with a door in the left corner. Right in the corner. In other words, once I entered the room, all I had to do was turn to the right. What did you expect? I was upside down and rushed forward. Due to a certain euphoria, I somehow missed the fact that, despite the presence of dark corners, the squad I was chasing was still there right where I was rushing so quickly. And only when I entered the control room did I realize that I was not alone here. Why did I decide this was the control room? What else could you call a place with a bunch of monitors receiving information from surveillance cameras? Then it dawned on me, if there were monitors showing all this, there must also be cameras sending the information. This was bad. All I could do was pray that the soldiers wouldn't notice me on the monitors and connect my movements behind them with the radar of one of them. Meanwhile, the Umbrella soldiers had just finished off the last survivor and were checking the pulse of the others. There were still no casualties among them, but now the commander was also covered in bandages. Where had she managed to injure her hands? But despite her injuries, she held her rifle confidently. She used to have an automatic weapon. Although, I wasn't the only one who preferred looting. As soon as I appeared in the room, Ghost and Fue's eyes immediately began to spin around, scanning the area. Okay, the first one was understandable, but what about the second? Although, maybe she had a radar or something similar, just with a more limited range. And why not? A specialist is good, but if something happens to them, then what? So it was logical that someone else in the squad had a radar too. Either I had finally sobered up, or the intoxication of blood didn't particularly affect my consciousness. Of course, I could check how steady my footing was by climbing down from the ceiling and walking across them at full height, but I'm no suicide bomber. Ghost, Fue's eyes. The nameless commander said briefly, referring to the behavior of her subordinates. Sonar has gone mad, Ghost replied insinuatingly, while the second person simply nodded, confirming both his words and my thoughts. That's not important, right? No, we've reached the recordings. The second part of the sentence was accompanied by interference. Radio, excellent. Now you can get into the server room and completely destroy the city archives. A man's voice came through the commander's receiver. Look at the monitor over there. That's today's recording from the security cameras, said Ghost, pointing to one of the monitors. It showed the events I had observed through the walls while still outside the building. Nikolai really had closed the door behind him, and Zinoviev's squirming subordinate was shot by him. Handsome. Wow, our handsome guy set up his subordinates, the blonde said with some strange intonation. Is she a pervert or something? They didn't put up much of a fight. Oh my god, I thought he couldn't talk. The one whose suit I had noticed spoke up. Fue's eyes, said the squad leader again, in a commanding tone. The recording has been copied. Let them deal with him at the base. The girl in the mask with transparent glass and the second radar operator in their group understood their boss correctly. Hello, everyone. The future of this story depends entirely on your support. Every power stone counts. Goal: 150 power stones by the end of the week. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 18, Chapter 18. Look. She pointed to another monitor and displayed what was happening there on the main screen. And again, events I already knew about from my fights with the Crimson Heads. From the outside, the way I dodged and then hurled the first one's body out the window looked pretty cool. I'm even a little ashamed to admit that if it hadn't been for the instincts I'd acquired thanks to the virus and a bit of luck, 2 living dead would have gone flying out the window. Still, I was proud of myself for the second fight, because that time I acted on my own. Strange. Some kind of new monster. Did the corporation drop someone into the city? The leader said in surprise, then briefly reported what she'd seen over the radio. Delta Team, your mission parameters have been expanded. Upon encountering the new High F-05 development, capture the target. Do not divert from the primary objective, but once the object is secured, its delivery becomes a priority. Consider it your ticket home, someone said curtly over the squad's radio. Oh, I'm screwed. If these guys who, judging by the ticket home comment, can't extract themselves knew where the object was, I'll show them object. I'd already be packed up and tied with a bow on top. A gift, for crying out loud. Did everyone hear that? The squad commander raised her voice. If we encounter an unusual zombie fighting other infected, restrain it and be careful. I know you fuckers, you'll kill it first and think later. This applies especially to you, Beltway. Lupo, so I learned the commander's call sign. I insist that searching for this object be treated as a priority. The infected who moves albeit awkwardly, but is clearly more intelligent than standard zombies. This is a breakthrough in virology. What if it's intelligent? We need to capture and study it immediately. Oh, I really don't like Fue Aiza's tone. But then again, that fanaticism and the way she framed the question, is she a scientist? It certainly looks like it. Luck smiled on me again. Stand down. You heard the order yourself. Our mission hasn't changed, it's been supplemented. If you want to dig through corpses, be my guest. Lupo said this while making an inviting gesture toward the 3 dead Special Forces soldiers. Her subordinate snorted in dissatisfaction, accompanied by the snide laughter of the blonde and the Beltway. Christine Yamada. Call sign, erudite. They were laughing at me again. God, I'm so tired of all this. Maybe I should go look for this object myself. Noth odds are too slim. Still, I'm really exhausted by these stupid faces around me. I should have become a scientist. I have the right background for the corporation, I am a virologist. But because of my physical abilities and combat training, I was assigned to these brainless mercenaries. I'm sick of it. This is not what I wanted. But when you have a pedigree like mine, a scientist father and a military mother, they drill you in both disciplines. A pedantic Japanese man for a father, and an impulsive Russian woman for a mother, both celebrated in their own fields. Yes, my mother is Russian. That's how unusual I am as a child. But I inherited my love of science from my father, and no matter how hard my mother tried to instill the same passion for martial arts, weapons, and military doctrine, nothing worked. Because of that, she even had several serious arguments with my father, accusing him of raising the wrong child. Eventually, she found a solution. She said that if I could surpass her, then I would be free to choose what I liked and what I wanted to do. Needless to say, the child I was agreed immediately, and out of sheer stubbornness, I never abandoned physical training or military disciplines, showing unprecedented zeal. Perhaps my mother hoped that, over time, dedicating so much effort to self-improvement, I would come to prefer her path, or at least develop the same affection for it that she had. But that never happened. By the age of 17, I defeated my mother in a fair fight, and she kept her word. But my joy was short-lived. My exceptional physical abilities, combined with the reputation I'd already earned thanks to my mother, did their job. I was denied a scientific position within the corporation and instead offered a place in the wolf pack. No, the squad itself isn't that bad. There's mutual support among its members. But this place isn't for me. I want to be there in a white lab coat studying new viruses and making great discoveries, not here hunting zombies and soldiers. Until recently, though, these were nothing more than dreams with no chance of becoming reality. But alone, with so little information about the target, my odds are slim. So how do I convince these stubborn idiots of the importance of this task? Even a fool can see that if Umbrella is willing to extract Yuz, who already screwed up during the G-Virus operation, and even consider cancelling this mission while it's still in its infancy, then the object must be extremely important. But no, the rest of the squad are like blind men. How do you deal with that? After all, until now we didn't even know whether we'd be pulled out at all, or how long we'd be cleaning up Umbrella's mess, because even a fool can see that our assignment won't end at City Hall. So I need to steer them toward this idea. And after capturing the target, I need to delay the squad somehow. After all, if I get the chance to study the object, I'll gain trump cards and a place on the laboratory staff almost instantly. As for my teammates, they can be sacrificed once everything is over. Science requires sacrifices, and I am willing to provide them. Karina Lesperu. Call sign, Lupo. Internal communication. Vector, keep an eye on Fue Eyes. It seems the latest news has agitated her a bit too much. The squad leader carefully chose her words, though both interlocutors understood their true meaning. We don't want her doing anything stupid. Watch her. The life of the squad is more important to me than that of a single member, especially one who is far from the most reliable. One step to the side and well, you understand. Yes, ma'am, the one who was about to be robbed by the object of unrest within the group replied briefly. Excellent. Proceed. And the secure communication channel was cut. Hello, everyone. The future of this story depends entirely on your support. Every power stone counts. Goal, 150 power stones by the end of the week. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 19, Chapter 19. I continue moving along the ceiling behind the group of soldiers. Fuei Eyes has grown somewhat nervous and keeps quietly hissing on her radar. It seems I'm getting on her nerves. She should follow Ghost's example. He's as calm as a tank, and unlike her, his devices have been signaling my presence for much longer. No, maybe she's just relieving stress in a banal way, but she doesn't seem like the type to get stressed by an operation like this. They look too professional, said the almost amateur. Infected again. Forward. Ghost, who had opened the door to the left of the monitors, spoke briefly and immediately started shooting. The rest of the squad joined their sniper searcher, and the hooded man who was closest to the doors. If he damages my clothes, I'll bite him literally, knock the heads off 2 zombies in police uniforms with a couple of knife blows. My newly acquired memory told me I'd made the right choice of recipient. His movements and technique were even better than those of the drunk Special Forces soldier. Quickly slipping into the next room, Beltway, Ghost, and my future victim continued firing there. Considering that I could see nothing but their silhouettes illuminated by the lights, it wasn't difficult to guess they weren't fighting any lurking Special Forces. Beltway even went too far, tossing a couple of flashbangs, for which he earned a reprimand from Lupo. By the way, the girls who'd been left alone didn't waste any time either. They ran straight ahead and were already climbing the stairs in the next room, which led to the floor above. Maybe even higher, but if it started right in front of the entrance, just a little to the left for the squad and to the right for me hanging from the ceiling, then I couldn't see the rest, because the first flight ended in a right turn, followed by an upward climb. And I couldn't see through walls more precisely. The only thing I could say was that there was no one alive there. However, that didn't stop the girls who had passed behind the guys from opening fire. How many zombies are there here? Said the ghoul in the city of the undead indignantly. Yes, it's better not to look at the situation from that angle. Then the guys who'd finished cleaning up followed their comrades. And somehow my hooded friend moved very quickly in that direction. Is he worried or something? I finally crawled into the room myself. What can I say, it used to be a place where the people watching the monitors could relax. Why did I think that? Well, a couple of comfortable couches, tables, and computers, with a soda machine right by the stairs, gave exactly that impression. Following my future knowledge and everything else that came with it, so to speak, I realized my assumption was absolutely correct. The corridor after the turn led into another room, though it was more like the corridor widening to the size of a room. In the corner stood several vending machines with drinks, one of which had been literally gutted. But that wasn't what bothered me. Nor were the umbrellas standing below me. Not even the 2 Special Forces soldiers posted by the doors, which were designed as if they led outside the building. On the 3rd floor maybe there were just different rooms beyond them. Judging by their posture, they were shooting with their backs to us. I couldn't see what they were shooting at, so the conclusion was obvious: zombies. And even the excessively large bloodstain to the right of the group below me. And the absence of a corpser even too, considering the splattered wall and floor. No, what confused me was the smell. Liquors. That's what the thing that attacked me had smelled like. The scent dissipated fairly quickly, and I hadn't paid much attention to it, just as I hadn't paid much attention to the fact that I could smell anything at all. But setting aside the oddities of my body, a corpse with a sense of smell among a bunch of more formidable counterparts somehow doesn't stand out. I seriously wondered how many liquors must have been here for the smell to linger until now. According to my modest calculations, I could say with certainty that either a herd of 2 or 3 dozen individuals had rushed through here no more than half an hour ago, or there had been about a dozen, but they'd crawled away just recently. No, there's also the possibility that there are 3 of them and they're still here. But first of all, I have 2 walking radars right under my nose, and they're showing nothing. If monsters were here, they'd at least be on alert and warn the others. In fact, they should have gone to full combat alert, but it seems my constant presence on the radars has seriously undermined the mercenaries' faith in their electronic toys. Second, I'm occupying the ceiling, and I don't see any competitors there, and that's exactly the surface liquors prefer to move along. Sure, maybe they use the floor and walls too, but everyone would notice them on the floor even without devices, and my neighbors and I have already checked the walls. And all of this is really starting to get on my nerves. No, of course I want to test my abilities in real combat against a worthy opponent, but even if the liquors are weaker, they'll simply overwhelm me with numbers. A scandalous thought even flashed through my mind: to spit on the mercenaries and run, but the realization that I might miss out on a very promising knife fighter, and most likely a hand-to-hand combatant with extensive knowledge and excellent equipment, immediately chased that thought away. Besides, I can't see any liquors or any other infected with my vision illuminator, which means I have a chance of running straight into them on my way to the nearest exit, and I won't have a squad to sacrifice. So what's the conclusion? I'm going, crawling, with the mercenaries, right behind them. Hello, everyone. The future of this story depends entirely on your support. Every power stone counts. Goal, 150 power stones by the end of the week. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 20, Chapter 20. Ghost opens the doors as quietly as possible and, with 2 shots from the sniper rifle having switched weapons efficiently and without fuss, takes out both Special Forces soldiers from behind. Beltway, following close after him, quite literally blows away the zombies left over from the fight with the Special Forces with his ram shots. His partner, meanwhile, secures his weapon behind his back again and switches to a faster-firing rifle. The rest follow the pair, myself included, crawling along. Fortunately, the height of the ceilings allows me not only to move freely but to do so unnoticed. And considering that I am now positioned directly above my victim, the poor owner of the beautiful jacket has already been covered by the barrels of both Ghost's and Fue Aiza's weapons more than once. I'm rattling their nerves and teaching them that their squad mate radiates the wrong kind of light. I have a couple of thoughts on this. First and foremost, of course, once he is separated from the squad, it will be possible to deal with him without fear of reinforcements arriving due to the radar signal. After all, he is already lit up. And with my thought about the street, I almost guessed right. We exited the building and ran, roughly speaking, along a balcony that had been converted into a corridor. So technically, I could have escaped, but since everything was going so well, why leave my prey to someone else? After running along the balcony and briefly conferring in front of 2 doors, the mercenary squad proceeded as follows. 3 charges, apparently designed for indoor use, were thrown into the side door, which Beltway had previously kicked open with his foot. His army-style steel prosthesis is no joke. There was a short roar, and then everything fell silent. Clear. Dead end, reported the hooded man, peering inside. Apparently, it was just a staff room or something similar. Though I may be mistaken, since I can't see it from where I am and there's no point in going in if it really is a dead end. While I was thinking this over, the 2 silent ones, as I'd nicknamed my victim and Ghost, because the others talk when they talk, but these 2, even when engaging in dialogue, get by with just a couple of phrases, took positions on either side of the large wooden doors. They opened them sharply and entered the room with weapons raised. Lupo stood between them. Beyond the doors, something resembling a fork in the road awaited them, 2 rather small doors on either side, which, according to Ghost who was checking the scanner, were clear. Straight ahead lay a passage with no visible door, just an open doorway. Beyond it stretched an oval corridor filled with Special Forces, though the Umbrellas who hadn't advanced further didn't know that yet. Surprise, guys. And then a competent passage on both sides of the corridor from the mercenaries and the final pair of Special Forces, almost right in front of the Umbrellas' noses, hide in the doors opposite the ones we'd entered. And apparently, that was exactly where the squad needed to go. Beltway, Lupo said, and the entire squad immediately took up their positions. The 2 silent ones covered the door again, just like last time. The rest of the squad spread out slightly, while the big guy covered the doorway in the right places. Where else? I may not be a demolition expert, but he's clearly not carrying explosives around for no reason. Set the charge, and blew the door. In the hallway beyond, 2 Special Forces soldiers were already being devoured by a couple of the same kind of nimble zombies, with their strikingly red skin, crimson heads. This next stage in the evolution of simple zombies was eliminated almost immediately. As I understood it, they'd attacked the Special Forces from behind while the latter were waiting for us to appear, but the Umbrella squad quite literally riddled their opponents with lead. The last one, shot in the leg and thus robbed of much of his mobility, was finished off with a precise lateral strike from the hooded figure, who plunged his knife straight into the zombie's head. A quick sprint down the corridor, a sweep of the side rooms, and the squad was already at the next door. Another run this time, apparently for variety, down an empty corridor, though splattered with blood, and we entered, or rather, some of us crawled into, a room filled with processors or something similar, stacked neatly on shelves. A server room? Apparently so. And that's it. What about the liquors? Where's my chance for treats, knowledge, and all that? Although the smell of liquors was present here and strong. Even so, despite the very bright lighting, the mercenaries didn't notice anyone, and I, peering into the room, didn't see anyone either. Why didn't I crawl in after them? With lighting like this, they'd spot me immediately. But there is something interesting here, besides the servers and their data. It must be Nikolai's squad, Ghost said in 2 short breaths. Who knows how many people he fed to the infected? His mind is clouded, Lupo replied with a grimace. Fun, of course, but we have work to do. Remember. The blonde snorted, a strange intonation in her voice. A sadist. I'm starting to think so. Stop dawdling. Everyone, focus your fire on the servers, came through Lupo's comms from command. To be honest, I didn't even notice when she activated the channel or whether she managed to say anything herself. The sound of short bursts, quiet mutters of barbarians. From the clearly dissatisfied Fue eyes apparently, someone wanted to take some of the information for themselves, and then a concise "done" from Lupo. Most likely, she reactivated the comm again. Okay, now get into the archive and finish the job. The same voice, accompanied by a faint squeak of something on the soldiers' helmets. Updating coordinates, I suppose. Aren't they afraid of wearing all these gadgets? One short circuit, and it won't be pleasant at all. Hello, everyone. The future of this story depends entirely on your support. Every power stone counts. Goal, 150 power stones by the end of the week. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 21, Chapter 21. Did everyone hear that? Damn it. Somehow the last line sounded very different from the rest. However, when the mangled soldier lying near the entrance began to rise, I realized there were plenty of corpses in the room, and the virus had only just started to affect them. But how much time had passed? 10 minutes, half an hour, or more. I think somewhere between the first and the second. For me, though, it feels like more than a day has gone. That's what constant tension does. Yes, as soon as I get the chance, I'll finish off the squad and crawl straight to Birkinto get my nerves treated. It's better to grapple with an almost indestructible mutant carrying the G-virus than to fray my nerves like this, waiting every second to be discovered and have my carcass ventilated with bullet holes. But as I'd counted when I crawled into the room myself, only about a dozen zombies delayed the squad for barely half a minute. And judging by the severed limbs and heads, the hooded man took out most of the attackers. Well, yes, shooting when zombies are standing between comrades, with a real chance of hitting the wrong one, is but mildly not a good idea. So the squad dealt with those who were in favorable positions, and my dinner finished off the rest. I crawl into the corridor behind the squad. Oh, lucky me. Not only is there no one here, but judging by the dissatisfied comments of the increasingly irritated Fue eyes, there isn't much light either. Conclusion, no one will notice me here, so I take up my position above our victim again and wait for the right moment. Still, the amount of blood really bothers me, considering how fresh it is. We move down the corridor and suddenly find ourselves back in its counterpart, the one we'd left just a couple of minutes ago. Damn it, are they going in circles? Then again, what makes me think we need to go straight all the time? The archive is definitely somewhere else, that's obvious. And before this, they'd been heading for the server room. What the hell? Beltway said in surprise. Shall we cut it? The blonde said it a little too cheerfully as the squad stopped in front of a breach in the wall. Yeah, maybe I should just leave. After all, lickers aren't strong enough to break through walls even as a group, and I don't want to stumble into another nasty surprise. A tyrant would most likely crush me like a lamb. Nemesis is a monster among monsters, and hunters may not be roaming around alone. And by the time you break through the scales of those reptiles, you'd be completely exhausted. I don't want to attack them head-on either, where their softer they'd tear me to pieces with their clawed paws. After all, these monsters will be stronger than likers, and their paws are more impressive. It could be dangerous, Fue Eyes said. Girl, you read my mind. Is the lab assistant chicken out? The blonde teased. I'll kill you first if you get everyone into trouble. Noon the one hand, that's what I need, but on the other, I don't want to run away from too much danger, and with nothing to show for it. Let's go. Lupo gave a short nod and stepped through the breach together with the silent hooded man. We climbed another flight of stairs and found ourselves on the next floor, in a similar arched corridor full of special forces. Now I could appreciate up close both the coordination of the umbrella mercenaries who had taken cover and their armor, which calmly withstood the occasional hit. How did that blonde manage to injure her hands back then? Although, considering her inclinations, I don't even want to know. Maybe she strangled prisoners with her bare hands and finished off the wounded the same way. But if they still try not to take unnecessary risks even with such armor, then it means that it has a limit of durability. Which makes sense. And normal person would still get bruises from repeated impacts, armor or not. When I put on that miracle, I won't care, shoot me point blank if you want, but for living people, it's unpleasant at the very least. And if a shot slips through, it's fatal. While I was thinking, the umbrella squad had already finished and moved on. I decided to stay a while longer, and after climbing down from the ceiling, I drank my fill of blood again. There were no survivors, but first, I suddenly felt hungry again despite my last hearty snack, and second, my ass was hinting at an approaching threat. Or maybe I was just too nervous and saw danger everywhere. And really, why let 36 fighters go to waste? Besides, I'd picked up some important information. It turned out that Echo 6, whom they were supposed to assist, would arrive in the city in only 40 minutes. These fighters had been sent from the cordon surrounding the city to gather preliminary information and secure a foothold in order to support the incoming detachment. Apparently, some of them had decided at their own peril to dig in at City Hall. But I did get a bit carried away and lingered too long, so I rushed after the squad through corridors, rooms, and stairwells, practically galloping along the walls and ceiling. I only caught up with them at the entrance to the archive. In the meantime, moving by the light of their silhouettes, I easily determined from their tracks that they'd encountered special forces twice more, small groups of a dozen and fewer. Apparently the military Undead had clashed with zombies at least a dozen more times. In one place, the corpses of the infected lay piled on top of each other. The Fue Eyes and Ghost turned around again, but once more, not seeing me, they decided to open the archive door. Yeah, they wouldn't remain so careless for long. Their first encounter with the lickers would teach them to watch not only the floor, but the walls and the ceiling as well. Bonus chapter for 50 power stones. 22, Chapter 22. I see the archive, let's go, Ghost said again, opening the door and stepping into the dark hall. Judging by my complete switch to night vision. Fortunately, this time I caught the moment, though I couldn't replicate it myself. Now find the evidence and destroy it. Once again, I managed to miss the moment when Lupo activated communications with her superiors. Ha, boom. And the big guy hurled 3 grenades deep into the rather large room, which, admittedly, made sense. The archive here was quite extensive. True, after 2 explosions, everything was scattered, and when the incendiary grenade went off, it all caught fire as well. Beltway. Lupo was clearly dissatisfied with her subordinate's behavior. The archive is destroyed, he replied contentedly. I was genuinely glad that the ceilings in the archive were very high. So even with the light from the fire, the light didn't reach me. What if your explosions had caused a fire or collapsed the room? The commander continued to scold him, though judging by her tone, she had already calmed down. You know me, I've got it all figured out. Beltway shrugged, clearly showing off. Or maybe not. If only I could see his face, then I could judge by his expression and eyes whether he was actually boasting. As it was, who knew? The task is complete. Now let's get out of here. The hooded man reminded that he, too, was capable of speech. The instruments beeped again, and after exchanging glances, the mercenaries headed for the far exit of the hall, opposite the one they'd entered through. Either there was another objective, or the exit was closer on that side. Still, something was bothering memory precisely, making me nervous. In the room behind the archive, there were apparently a couple of crates that hadn't fit inside, which Beltway promptly mined, this time with the commander's permission. Meanwhile, Fuei's was quietly downloaded something on a computer in the far corner. Quietly, yes, but with imperceptibility, a failure. Besides me, perched on the ceiling with a clear view of everything, my subject for knowledge acquisition noticed it too, placing hand against the underside of his helmet. Lupo mirrored the gesture, immediately turning around, and after a couple of seconds during which the unsuspecting Fuei's was held at gunpoint, she shook her head. Instantly, both mercenaries pretended nothing had happened. How interesting. So what's going on here? Is everyone ready to betray everyone else, or has Fuei's simply fallen out of favor with command? Meanwhile, events continued to unfold. The squad, unaware of the actions of some of its members, quickly descended another stair tunnel to the next floor, and an explosion thundered behind them, accompanied by a powerful jolt. Someone had clearly overdone it with the explosives, but I wasn't about to complain, lest they hear me. The blonde did that for me, whom the offending demolitionist promised to kill, because she turned out to be too toxic. The squad went down another level and sprinted through the corridor, running straight into yet another door. I waited for them to pass, then crawled through myself. This time, the doorway was of a normal size. I quickly climbed up to the ceiling and settled into the far corner. Not only was the lighting good here, but the entire place reeked of liquors. Still, that wasn't why I'd chosen an even more concealed position. The mercenaries emerged from the side directly onto a stage. Or rather, this being City Hall, it would be more accurate to call it a podium for official speeches. However, there were no audience stands, though that was understandable. In the center of the hall, to the right of the mercenaries who'd come through the doors, stood scaffolding. Apparently, restoration work was underway, and Zinoviev was standing on one of those scaffold structures. I decided not to let him see me just yet. Given his position, if I crawled out of my corner now, he'd be at the same height as me. The ceiling above the podium was lower than in the rest of the hall, and he might react in a way that wouldn't end well for me. And honestly, no matter how he reacted, it would be a disaster either way. Nikolai, what does all this mean? Why did you kill your squad? The hooded man was one of the first to spot him, drawing the rest of the squad's attention to the Russian with such a simple way. Ha ha ha, they played their roles perfectly. And the same awaits you. Nikolai jerked back sharply and fired somewhere above the squad. Damn it. The severed rope, something the umbrella mercenaries hadn't noticed, triggered the hatches along the entire length of the hall. Quiet hissing and crackling followed, though it was drowned out by echoing laughter, shouted words, and the shot from one fraudster. Stay where you are, my subject for acquiring knowledge spoke up again. Only then did the mercenaries finally hear the hissing and look up, staring at the liquors crawling out of the openings. Well, 5 of them were already pouring out of just one hole, and judging by the noise, there were more coming. There were only 3 openings above the podium, but I couldn't even count how many there were across the rest of the hall, and creatures were crawling out of every single one. And then another problem arose. Fuei's glanced suspiciously at her wrist radar, then up at the liquors on the ceiling, then back at the radar, and finally turned sharply in my direction. The other mercenaries noticed this and followed her gaze. That's what you call bad luck. Now, Alex, calculate how long it will take the liquors to orient themselves by the sound of the mercenaries and attack, and whether these umbrellas will have time to shoot at me. What's that? The blonde said in surprise. That's it. The sound has been made. All that's left is to buy myself 10 seconds, and I even know how to do it. Time to put on a show called The Talking Undead. Bonus chapter at 100 Power Stones. 23, Chapter 23. Are they intelligent? There you go. Now digest my ability to speak a completely coherent sentence, and what I actually said. The main thing now is that they don't dismiss it as an empty phrase. The Fuei's hands trembled, and I heard a quiet, "It speaks and may be intelligent." But if I read her intonation correctly, it would be better for me to fight the hooded one than to fall into this woman's hands. She'd dissect me like a frog. They seem to have frozen for too long, and I really don't like that they're still aiming in my direction. No, I'm flattered that instead of the lickers of whom there are already 100 in the hall they consider me the greatest threat, but that assessment is wrong. Even if I can escape on my own, and even then, only from the lickers, but to stage a massacre here and emerge victorious, no amount of regeneration or luck would be enough for that. No, if the lickers attack them, then the mercenaries will have no time for me, I hope, who is inactive. They were the first to raise their voices, and the lickers are blind, and the monsters would prefer to eat living creatures rather than their own kind. So now I just need to change my position and do it quietly, in such a way that none of my potential opponents, on either side, can track me down. There is a downside, though the lickers can sense me just as I sense them. At least, I wouldn't rule out that possibility. Still, even the mercenaries' sluggishness can be turned to my advantage, especially now that they've more or less shaken themselves off. After all, that was exactly what I wanted, to throw them off balance. The jump from one wall to the opposite one was impressive. I covered about 6 meters in a straight line. No, in the hall with the half-dead Special Forces soldier I jumped even farther, but that time there had been preparation and acceleration. Here, it was raw execution. Of course, only the performer could truly appreciate such a feint. Me kin are too stupid for that, and to humans I'm just a monster who is supposedly capable of even worse things. Flying in a jump over, although, they are on the ceiling, then under 2 lickers, clearly aiming for the spot where I had spoken, I managed to slash their defenseless brains. Their mutation played a cruel joke on them here, and both carcasses dropped straight onto Beltway. That was the spark that ignited the bacchanalia that followed. My target, whom I fully intend to devour during this incident, quickly shoved the bodies off his teammate. The mercenaries formed a tight circle, backs to one another, and began moving toward the edge of the platform, intending to descend. Along the way, they shot down the most agile of the lickers, while I watched and memorized the weaknesses of both the infected and the squad. This knowledge will be useful in my future life. I already possess information on weapon usage, not yet a skill, merely someone else's memory, but soon I expect to acquire first-class data. But for now, patience. They will not reach the building's exit. I promise myself that. The Umbrella troops reached the edge fairly quickly, as expected of professionals who had cut through a Special Forces unit 3 times their size like children. But then a problem arose. There was no way down, and the platform was about as tall as a person. They could jump, of course, but that would mean half a second suspended in the air, completely unable to resist, followed by another moment after landing to re-enter combat mode. So they couldn't all jump at once, and even with covering fire, anyone descending could still be shot. So Lupo quickly ordered Beltway and Vector, I finally learned my target's call sign, to jump down first and provide cover from below. The 4 jumps blended into one. I note with some bitterness that the lickers can still sense me. Otherwise, I can't explain why one of them broke away from its comrades rushing toward the gunfire, or why it leapt toward me, standing perfectly still. But I was already accelerating, aiming to catch the exact moment when the descending mercenaries were most vulnerable. Beltway landed heavily, and honestly, I never intended to make his massive body my victim. A frame that large, loaded with gear and explosives, that was too much of a risk. I might not have been able to move afterward. Crashing into the lighter Vector, on the other hand, was far more preferable, both tactically and strategically. So, spreading myself out mid-air and stretching my arms forward, I managed to kick the big guy, twisting his trajectory and forcing him onto his back. He was immediately swarmed by 4 lickershes. Landing had been loud. At the same time, I slammed straight into his partner. I don't think I inflicted any serious injuries. I heard no bones crunch, and if there was blood, the suit concealed it, but after flying another 3 meters, my victim and I smashed straight through the scaffolding. Unfortunately, we were instantly yanked apart by licker tongues. A significant portion of the pack surged among the scaffolding, while only a smaller part of the total group was drawn toward the gunfire above the podium. Still, I was almost grateful to the monsters. After all, with 7 tongues wrapped around my torso and arms, I was only being slightly dragged toward the cluster of abominations. Meanwhile, Vector, who had managed to pull out his combat knife, twisted as he landed and nearly stabbed me in the head with it. So who among us is the monster after that? Then literally went flying, wrapped in only 5 tongues. Even better, he dropped the knife. 24, Chapter 24. Turned around, and now I was more tightly entangled now, but at least I was facing my enemies. And entangled, but what do I need claws for? 2 sweeping strikes with both hands, and I was free, while the lickers growled and squealed in frustration. I lunged forward, literally diving beneath the trio of lickers, slashing in every direction. My claws calmly sliced through bone, muscle, and tendon until, with an especially appetizing crunch, my right arm went limp, and one of the 4 monsters still in front of me swung its raking limb again. Yeah, what a mess. I've already given up on my instincts. They've been screaming about danger from every direction since the moment I entered the hall, so they're useless. And the animal reflexes of the body I have inherited are not enough for me to evade every attack. As for the reflexes of that Special Forces soldier, unfortunately, I'll have to develop those myself, or find a way to turn borrowed memories into actual skills. Yes, I'm not nearly as cool as I'd like to be, but I'll suffer for it later, if I survive. I leapt back, kicking my opponents in the chest as they rose, sending them flying 1.5 meters before they slammed into the wall. A pity they weren't dead, but the recoil gave me extra momentum, and my jump carried me much farther than expected. And I almost reached WoW. I flew straight toward Vector, who had already shot 2 lickers, managed to grab a pistol, and judging by his posture had snapped another one's neck. So, out of the 5 that had attacked him, only 2 remained. I even felt another stab of envy. Here I was, a mutant ghoul, but Vector was the one efficiently neutralizing his enemies, and I was just retreating, trying not to draw attention. Well, jumping away, more precisely. By the time I landed, I saw my target, though now I was starting to doubt who was hunting whom, calmly finishing off the last 2. And if the first went down with a single bullet to its exposed brain, the second turned out to be unexpectedly agile. The bullet struck its body and lodged there, causing any particular harm to the creature. Yes, I'd already noticed this during their descent sometimes. When fighting lickers, the squad had to empty half a magazine if they couldn't land a headshot. The creatures were absurdly resilient. While I was distracted, Vector, who hadn't noticed me jumping into the shadow of the wall, redirected his fire toward the lickers trying to tear Beltway apart. Judging by the torn-off prosthetic, the situation was clearly not in Beltway's favor, and Vector realized it too, ceasing fire. He reached for a fresh magazine. Now, I jumped from the wall at an angle, landing to the mercenary's left just as his instincts caught up with him. With a two-handed blow, I literally smashed his right side into the wall. Fortunately, my right arm had already regenerated and was ready to go. I may have overdone it. The wall swallowed Vector's body with a wet, unpleasant crunch and, after struggling for a couple of moments that felt like an eternity to me, spat him into the next room. Well, what was I thinking, I wonder? Not his reactions really are monstrous, as is his mastery of both weapons and his own body. But even if we assume our reaction speeds are equal, and why not? I still catch myself noticing that my mind sometimes lags behind my body, then a couple of my punches will settle the matter. Let's say he manages to break something of mine, so what? All I need to do is shield my head with one hand and strike with the other, and everything will be fine. After all, even if he takes such a blow to the block, I won't even feel it. No, it's perfectly understandable why I was careful and didn't use my claws. I needed his clothes, and his motorcycle, and I didn't want to ruin them. But I could have hit him with full force from the start. He wouldn't have torn him apart, because they calmly took bullets from the regular US Army in their suits, so why bother with small stuff? After this little internal briefing, I stepped through the breach and, not allowing him to rise, brought my clasped hands down directly onto his spine. The crunch that followed was music to my ears. And yet even that didn't go perfectly. The bastard managed to aim a gun at my knee with his far hand and fire at the exact moment my blow landed. So although the damage regenerated fairly quickly thanks to the blood I'd loaded myself with before entering the hall, which was still amplifying my abilities, but still, for 5 seconds, I lay across Vector, who was trying to move, and trying hard. He almost twisted my head off, but a sharp strike to his left arm made it crunch and fold at an unnatural angle. The mercenary clenched his teeth, stifling a scream. Judging by the complete immobility of his lower body, though, I had broken his spine after all. How could he endure all these injuries? The pain must have been hellish, yet he only ground his teeth and hissed softly through them. 25, Chapter 25. But 7 seconds later, I was removing the gas mask, albeit a modernized one, from Vector's face as he tried to twist away. Still, I couldn't break his neck, otherwise I might not be able to absorb his knowledge. But I broke his other arm with great pleasure. Finally overcoming his resistance, I removed the hooded mask first, then carefully unbuttoned the top of his suit so as not to damage the collar. And anyway, I would have to strip this corpse completely later anyway. I needed everything he had. Now, without the mask, I was staring at a man who, judging by certain facial features, was a compatriot of my current bodier, to put it simply, a German. And then the long-awaited reward. I sank my fangs into his throat and began greedily swallowing the crimson liquid. At the same time, as before, I consciously willed myself to absorb everything, but this time, as skills. If I managed to scroll through memory in an accelerated manner last time, why shouldn't such a trick be possible? And the consequences? Who cares about them? If I feel sick, I'll just down a couple of liquors. I'm not picky, anymore. You reap what you sow. There's no other way to put it. I hadn't even imagined the trap I'd set for myself, and the hole in the wall, or the 2 hostile groups nearby, had nothing to do with it. The cause was far more mundane. While I was able to calmly digest the life of that suburban blonde, it was more challenging with the Special Forces soldier, and then there was that inexplicable kickback. And now, I almost drowned in a flood of information. Roughly speaking, I tore myself away from Vector's throat, or rather, Jacob Sand froze in shock. The reason was simple and terrifying. I perceived the corpse in front of me as myself. After a few seconds, the obsession began to recede, but by then I could no longer say for certain who I was: Alex, Nathan, or Jacob Nightroad. And if almost nothing remained of the second except his body and accumulated knowledge, then in the struggle for dominance, Jacob's iron will had nearly overwhelmed me, Alex. And now all 3 names felt foreign, just like the lives attached to them. So this is where it's led. It won't be long before I develop a mental disorder. Although that assumes my brain is even functioning at all. If parts of it aren't working, disorders in those parts are unlikely to affect me. But then how do I think? Something pulled me in the wrong direction in my thoughts. While my thoughts drifted somewhere far away, my body acted on its own, efficiently stripping the corpse and beginning to change clothes. It did so with alarming speed, as if it had performed this routine hundreds of times before. And, most interestingly, my initial assumption about size had been correct. Nathan and Jacob were built the same. That was deeply satisfying. The same applied to the knowledge I absorbed, although, let's be honest, it was more like the personality I absorbed. The personality turned out to be too strong-willed, and I won't even mention the richness of his life. All of this fit my body perfectly. In other words, there was no need to relearn or adapt anything. Of course, it was still worth checking. It might just seem that way immediately after absorption, but at first glance, everything functioned flawlessly. Even more interesting was Vector's suit, now mine. Or perhaps it had always been mine, if a stubborn part of my consciousness was to be believed. Maybe I really should stop absorbing living beings, or one day I'd realize that I was my own victim again. The suit had something resembling optical camouflage like the Predator from the movie. And those sophisticated gas masks were packed with features, communications, sensors, and even recording capabilities. And I knew that everyone in the squad had them, but only 2 people actually used the recording function, Vector and Ghost. Which meant I now possessed one very interesting file. It clicked behind me, and a gun was pressed to my head. Ha! The hunter becomes the hunted. But I'd noticed you earlier, Fue, eyes back when I were just stretching thanks to my eyesight. Stay where you are, High F-05, she ordered, her voice firm, without even thinking about lowering the weapon. Yes, now I know what scientists call me, but I don't like that name, although it's not even a nickname. In the meantime, let's surprise my future information source. At least, I hope she'll be that. With my speed, reflexes, and vector skills, I could move my head aside before she even pulled the trigger. In fact, given how smoothly the absorption had gone, an accidental shot right now might even be beneficial. With that thought, I transmitted the conversation between the real Vector and Lupitha, one that took place immediately after they reviewed the cameras where I'd been spotted, straight to her comm device. What does this mean? Why, Yamada said. She flinched when she received my message, but not only did she not shoot, she also didn't give me a chance to slip away to a more advantageous position while she was listening to it. Only that your team doesn't trust you, to put it mildly. And I suspect the feeling is mutual. So I hope you won't mind if I play a little prank. I said with a chuckle, once again appreciating my choice of attire. Now, with my voice muffled by the mask, I sounded like the real Vector. Bonus chapter for 100 power stones. The next bonus chapter will be for 200 power stones. 26, Chapter 26. Oh, really? And what's in it for me? After all, if I hand you over to the corporation once the mission is complete, I'll get much more, and the mission is almost over. Since she's bargaining instead of just killing me, she must be hoping to get something out of this. I wonder what. No, I have a pretty good idea, but I won't let her dissect me. Still, I'd gladly submit to less painful if not lethal tests. But I shouldn't tell her that, or she'll skin me alive for it, even though she needs my samples herself. What will you get out of it? I said aloud. For starters, all the credit. You won't have to share it with anyone. A peaceful opportunity to conduct experiments, which I will agree to, of course, in an environment where you won't have to persuade the squad to wait or pacify the monster. I chuckled softly. I'm talking about myself, in case you hadn't guessed. You have to admit, the chance to study my samples under calm conditions is worth a lot. And your commander doesn't give a damn about that. You, on the other hand, could gain quite a bit out of it. Okay, Christine said, still keeping the weapon pressed to the back of my head. That sounds tempting. But what's in it for you? I'm sorry, but as you yourself pointed out, I don't believe in the altruism of monsters. Cover, I replied calmly. I can't handle all my problems alone. Understanding what I'm made of, I have to admit, even if that knowledge doesn't change anything that's already happened, my curiosity about what kind of creature I am hasn't gone anywhere. And judging by the data in Vector's suit among other things, which I won't be sharing, it was you who infiltrated Birkin's lab and nearly secured the G-virus samples. I need those samples, but finding my way into the lab on my own will be difficult. Vector didn't memorize the route, he focused on threats. Everything else was irrelevant to him. But I'll blame my ignorance on the lack of proper records, and the SUDI really only contains voice logs. And I couldn't find anything more detailed anywhere else. Let her think that. Weak arguments, Yamada said flatly. Both in your defense and in what you're offering me. I could almost feel the seconds ticking down before she pulled the trigger. Stop. Wait. I snapped. You can kill me, but then what? I doubt the corporation wants a corpse instead of a living specimen. And getting out of here with a body won't be easy. Think carefully, Umbrella is covering up everything that happened here, and you know too much already. But if you join forces with me, you can leave the city, not end up alone, surrounded by monsters, or lying in a ditch with a hole in your forehead. I felt the hand at the back of my neck tremble. Time to press. And once you're out with rare specimens, maybe even the G-Virusia won't just be rehabilitated. You'll be able to dictate terms to your former employers. And a grateful partner, I smiled inwardly, can help you with that, once we're outside the city. That's more interesting, she admitted. The barrel, however, didn't move. But taking a monster, even a thinking one, out of the city on my own. She snorted. That's not even funny. You know, I don't need a walking carrier of an epidemic that could surpass even the bubonic plague. And that's where your genius comes in. I countered quickly. There is a way to control my instincts, isn't there? An antidote, or something similar. And if their ISNTWO says it can't be made. Besides, I've already tested something myself. I can feed on meat. So you can cross the cannibal issue off the list, if that's what worries you. I chuckled again. And I wouldn't advise you to take too long deciding. Your teammates are almost at the exit, even though they lost Beltway. How do you know that? There was unmistakable suspicion in her voice. Once you study me, you'll understand, I replied, deliberately fueling her curiosity. And I could tell she was interested even without Vector's analytical abilities back there, at the monitoring center. Fine, she said at last. But if you try anything, I'll destroy you myself. The girl threatened me. Oh, no, I answered calmly. You'll still be useful to me, given the situation I've outlined. But I don't need the rest of the squad. I watched her reaction closely. But instead of the expected attempts to restrain or protect her people, I felt the barrel finally lift away from my head. A faint snort followed. And you'll need my help with that, of course. She asked, half question, half statement. Which one of us is the monster now? I've been asking myself that a lot lately. Maybe I'm trying to relieve stress before what comes next. No, people usually do that differently, not by asking stupid philosophical questions. Of course, I said. But first, let me ask you something. Can you detect me through the suit? Only within 2 steps, she replied. As for Ghost, with his longer range but less specialized sensor, you'll be invisible to him until you make physical contact. She immediately understood what I was implying. That's perfect, I said. What else was there to add? The important thing now was simple. Don't shake hands with Ghost and avoid physical contact altogether. Better yet, remove him from the equation entirely. As for Fue Eyes, it was obvious to everyone that she was plotting something, but I still needed her. I'd leave the city alone. For now, the key was not to become unnecessary to her before she became unnecessary to me. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 27, Chapter 27. Heading toward the breach and preparing to join my squad, I glanced furtively at Fue Eyes. Yes, I would have to watch my back to make sure she didn't pull anything, and it would be best to take the squad out one by one. No, maybe I should have rushed the remaining mercenaries outright, but the Likers around me, even though they'd been thinned out by the fire that spread through the room after the big guy blew himself up, remained a serious obstacle. I had to at least postpone the showdown until we were farther away from here. Not only could I get shot before I got close to the squad, and I'm not sure I'll survive with a bullet in my head. And even though the scientist mercenaries' relationship with the rest of the squad was, to put it mildly, not very good, in the event of a fight, or rather, its open phase, I couldn't be certain she wouldn't decide to stand up for them by shooting me in the back. Taking them out one by one had a completely different psychological effect, especially if I made her an accomplice. No, again, I could ignore the infected. There weren't that many here, unless I was missing someone, and rush forward to crush the squad, but I was still in the process of digesting Vector. So, there was no guarantee I wouldn't stumble over the same Lupo, giving a chance to finish me off. After all, the commander and her chain dog were by no means in a strictly professional relationship. And if I did everything quietly and gradually, by the time only Lupo was left, I don't count myself for obvious reasons, and I still needed Fue Eyes, I could calmly wring her neck or something else. I hadn't figured that part out yet. And how should I address you? Yamada asked, standing a couple of steps away from me. For now, Vector, I replied, surprising myself. It seemed I wouldn't have to get used to the role. I'd already acquired the laconic manner of a mercenary, even the intonation. Vector, Fue Eyes? You took your time, Lupo said in clipped sentences, glancing at me. I was slightly behind Fue Eyes, making a gesture that meant watching and controlling. After all, Vector had been tasked with keeping an eye on the scientist. Meanwhile, in my mind I was turning over the spontaneously born name, one that suited me perfectly. I took Jacob's surname Nitroid. With this deep assimilation, if not Vector's laurels, then at least those of his relative were now mine. We even shared the same blood. Yes, sarcasm was creeping in again. And remembering everything I'd done, along with the movies about vampires, since I'd compared myself to a ghoul many times before I decided to take the name of the first such creature, Cain. So, in less than 3 days, I had a name of my own, Cain Nightroad. Only later did I draw parallels with an existing character. No, there were no real similarities, though I could try that persona on for size. It's time to go, said Ghost in his hoarse voice. Another taciturn creature, but as a potentially dangerous one, he would have to be dealt with first. Zinoviev. I wanted to ask for more details, but the mercenaries, accustomed to my Vector's manner of speaking, understood me from a single word. He's gone. Climbed into one of the holes in the ceiling and disappeared silently in that direction. Although the ghost sensor is messed up, it clearly showed that the bastard had made it onto the roof. And he was alive, so he got away, Lupo added irritably. We rushed for the exit, Ghost and Lupo in front, Bertha as the medic in the middle, and Fue Eyes and I bringing up the rear. As we climbed the stairs, I tossed a hand grenade without looking back, aiming precisely at a jagged weakness in the wall I'd noticed earlier. My new reflexes and skills were impressive. The explosion collapsed the passage behind us, cutting us off from the Likers and our way back. Fine, I didn't need to return anyway. We emerged into the hall where I'd eaten a still-living Special Forces soldier after crawling out of a service passage hidden beneath the stairs. And hey, they were already waiting for us. Where did all these rotten bastards come from? We already cleared this place. Bertha said irritably. Heh, just say you don't like something, you sadist, when there's someone else here you can chop up. I quickly took out the nearest pair with my pistol, noting that both bullets hit squarely in the head, though one landed slightly left of where I'd aimed, and kept moving with the others. We crossed the hall in a box formation. These were ordinary zombies, not even redheads, so no one noticed the oddity of the dead not reacting to me. In fact, a couple of zombies ignored us entirely, busy eating the bodies of the Special Forces. I shot them again with my pistol, without any fuss. Meanwhile, Lupo and Ghost were clearing the passage ahead under Bertha's cover, while Fue Eyes and I finished off the remaining infected in the hall, securing the squad's rear. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 28. Chapter 28. And at that very moment, the entire squad heard a half-howl, half-squeal coming from the destroyed, burning room. There was something about it that felt familiar to me. Nonsense. I had never encountered anything like it before, a sound that literally blew out eardrums. I even had to pretend, like the living, that I was uncomfortable, bending over and covering my ears. What the hell was that? Bertha said irritably, instantly turning toward the sound. Probably that what's it called. Hi F-05. And something tells me we shouldn't go back, Lupo said, reloading as she finished off the last zombies on the other side of the door. No, I replied to Fue Eyes, who was glaring at me, through the highlighted connection. Well, it was easy to understand her concern, but none of my victims seemed to have risen again. Here, all of them were drunk, laying there exactly as they had been, even after so much time had passed. And even the one who had been alive didn't come back. Then again, I'd literally bitten his head off, so how exactly was he supposed to revive? By the way, it was high time to conduct an experiment to create someone like Methoff. I was afraid to. I was what I was thanks to chance, but a monster created deliberately by altering an original person could be dangerous for me too. And clearly, now was not the time for such experiments. For the same reason, I still am immediately drunk Yamada. I couldn't take any more, in terms of digesting personalities. Yes, I'm no altruist, I'm dragging the mercenary along on a voluntary compulsory basis so she doesn't run away or die before I can get her knowledge. No, drinking her wasn't entirely rational anyway. Once I found another scientist, then yes, that would be a different matter, and an additional reason. After all, it's easier to control a simple scientist than a mercenary who can cause problems. But tying her up and hiding her wasn't an option either. The infected have a phenomenal sense for the living, or perhaps they see them, the way I do. So if I left her and came back later, I might find a gnawed skeleton, or a girl dead of starvation. She has her needs, and my diet wouldn't suit her. I'm taking a risk, damn it. But what else can I do? Fuck, it's blocked. Damn UBCS. Lupo cursed. It seemed we wouldn't be able to get out the same way we'd come in. The door was blocked so badly that even an explosion wouldn't help. There was nothing to make a precision blast with, and even if there were, clearing the debris behind the door would take too long, while a powerful explosion would damage the surrounding walls. With a sigh, the commander headed for the door leading to the workrooms on the right. That was when I truly appreciated the power of teamwork from within a squad like this. First-person shooters are relaxing, especially when you know no one can beat you anyway, within reason. Of course, I still hoped they hadn't dropped tyrants into the city yet, and when you can safely take out the one person you need. We literally mowed down the unfortunate zombies we encountered along the way. The only truly inconvenient moment came on the staircase, when a horde of zombies simply knocked down the barricades from the upper floor and rushed us. That was probably the only time I switched from pistol and knife to an automatic weapon. No, it had a good rate of fire, and even an amateur wouldn't miss in such a crowd, but it just didn't suit me. I must have picked up some of Vector's quirks. And so, carefully retreating backward, we pushed through the entire floor under the pressure of the onslaught and emerged on the second floor. The way back down to the first floor, however, was blocked by those kind special forces. So we had to trudge toward the city hall exit on the second floor. That was when I noticed two special forces soldiers standing at the entrance. Oh yes, so many of you survived. Inspiration struck at that very moment. After contacting Fue Eyes, I briefly now it's briefly with me for a long time outlined my plan. The situation was quite convenient. Let's see what you choose. Ghost, there are two special forces soldiers at the entrance, Fue Eyes said. It's not really a problem, of course, but it's better not to waste ammunition or suit energy. Could you take them out? Approaching the window, she made a perfectly logical suggestion. The fact that it had actually been my idea was best left unspoken. Drawing attention to myself wasn't wise, and Vector was just an executor, and he would have charged straight into the fight rather than suggest something like that. I know that for a fact. I can't. The opening's inconvenient, Ghost replied curtly, assessing the fighters visible through the window just as I had. Unfortunately, their positions made a clean shot difficult. Still, my vision definitely had more advantages than a normal human's. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 29, chapter 29. So let's from the room, and Vector and I will cover you unless the commander objects, of course. Fue's eyes finally got to the point. If Lupo refused now, there might not be another such chance. But she merely waved it off, busy trying to contact her superiors. After that, everything went smoothly. Leaning on the windowsill, Ghost took out the 2 Special Forces soldiers. Really, anything can happen in an open confrontation, and no one is immune to accidents. Then I touched his left shoulder. He jerked toward me and received a knife to the joint between his neck and shoulder on the right. Well done, accomplice, I teased Yamata. Everything had gone exactly as expected. My touch had indeed triggered the sensor, just as Fue's eyes had warned, briefly throwing Ghost off balance. And for professionals, even a single moment can mean everything. Now it's your turn, she said through the secure channel. Uh-oh, the windowsill's pretty shaky, I remarked casually and kicked. A chunk of the wall, along with the windowsill and Ghost's body, collapsed outward and vanished below. A shame, really, that I couldn't drink him, but that would have been too much. I could easily drown in the flood of knowledge. What happened? Lupo burst into the room at the sound of a piece of wall crashing down. And at that point, I removed myself from the conversation. I had warned Fue's about this from the very beginning. Breaking character now would be a mistake, and if I tried to explain the situation myself, I might slip up. So the pocket egghead would have to take the rap. Well, who else she is? Scientists are like that everywhere. So, all I had to do was confirm Fue's florid explanation about the damaged outer wall and the instability of the structure, which I did. -1. Lupo frowned, of course, but everything sounded plausible. And considering that I confirmed it as well once again, I was glad I'd chosen such a successful victim. She wouldn't have believed anyone except her chain dog. My Napoleonic plans, however, were cut short when the superior finally made contact. I repeat, the task is complete. When will the helicopter arrive? Lupo said again. I thought hard about my next move. For some reason, I hadn't seriously considered the possibility that the mercenaries would actually be extracted. You stay there. If I were alive, I would have breathed a sigh of relief. But due to my lifeless nature, that wasn't necessary, and in general, I sometimes had to remind myself to make small movements, because I was far too still for a living human. What do you mean, stay? Lupo snapped. It seemed she had considered this option too and had even worked out a way for us to get out. You destroyed the city hall, but there are witnesses. The fewer people evacuated, the better. First, you need to cut off the city's power so the witnesses can't contact the outside world for as long as possible. No one should connect what's happening here to Umbrella until all traces are covered up, Interlocutor explained. Then came the briefing. I didn't listen. I had promised that no one would leave the building, hadn't I? So luck was on my side again. After the connection was cut and until the moment when the squad must reach the power station, what happened to the wolf pack will be a surprise to everyone. Well, convinced now? I said over the internal channel, pressing Fue's harder. They're not taking you out of here. First, all the dirty work, and then they'll just leave you behind. Even now you have avoided that fate only thanks to Umbrella's fear of data leaks. The response was tense silence. I'd hit a nerve. She'd been thinking along the same lines herself and had even said as much in front of the squad, back when she wanted to capture me. You'll say no, or will you just keep obeying the corporation and Lupo? I continued. How many more people will you lose on missions like this? After all, Vector was doomed in that room anyway, and no one doubts Beltway's fate. As for Ghost, even with him, you wouldn't have lasted long. Or have you decided to die heroically? I added, with a faint note of mockery. Shut up, monster. What do you know? Fue's almost hissed. Not quite the right reaction, but okay. A lot. And unlike you, I've been in this mess for more than a day. I just want to live. What's wrong with that? And I need an ally. Even I can't get out of here alone. There are situations where one fighter, no matter who they are, can't decide anything. I offered her a half-truth. But even a lie detector would have struggled to tell where the lie ended and the truth began. Though, of course, it wouldn't work on a dead man at all. But that's just a figure of speech. 30, Chapter 30. Do you really need me that much? The girl decided to bargain. Yes, you figured it out quickly, but you're no longer in a position to play such games. Back there, next to the corpse of the real Vector, you could have flexed your muscles. Now that moment has passed. I let out a short laugh. No, of course not. I need a scientist and a partner. You just happen to combine both roles, but they can be found separately. For example, I could go with you and wait until only one of you is left. I don't think Same Bertha would hesitate to accept my offer. And I could find a scientist among the survivors down there, beneath the city. Or among the Echo 6 squad sent here to deal with you. I'm sure there's at least one brainy guy among them. Oh, you didn't know about them? I did overheard special forces. I'm lying. I pulled it straight from memory. You are dead, you just don't know it yet. I am dead, but I know it and I refuse to accept it. Funny, isn't it? That's right, girl. You're valuable. Very valuable, in fact even though I deliberately underestimated your worth. But you're not irreplaceable. So what do we do? The irritation was replaced by the soldier's clear voice. Good. Another small miscalculation on my part but that only made things better. As soon as Lupo finishes her conversation, we'll get rid of the ballast, I said evenly. At the same time, we'll eliminate your competitors for the vacant position, so I suggest you don't hesitate. After that, I'll take a look around from above or rather, we will and you'll guide me to the nearest descent. I need a proper virus sample, the one you couldn't obtain, and you'll be happy to study it, right? The equipment down there is clearly better. While we're scouting, you'll run preliminary analyses on one magnificent monster. I paused. Still, I'm curious about what they made me into, what it means for me and whether the process can be reversed. Cured. Since I'd already started lying about that back there, I might as well continue. Though, in truth, I would like to get rid of the thirst for blood and the hunger, and maybe become a little more alive. I don't enjoy being undead even if I'm not decomposing, still part of my senses are gone. But I don't want to give up my power either. I just can't even imagine how I'd survive as a human, especially among the infected. I understand, she said quietly. Our conversation ended just in time for the final transmission from headquarters. Proceed with the task, came the voice on the other end of the line. But there wasn't much authority left in it. Yes, Lupo replied. Yes. With this long delay in communication and the refusal to extract us after completing the job we'd been hired for, our employers had shaken any remaining confidence in a normal outcome. So what are we going to do? Bertha snorted. Die, I said before the commander could answer. My army knife slid neatly between the shoulder blades of the squad medic's suit. Still, my speed was something else. Ouch. With a sharp burst from her gun, Fue's eyes knocked the weapon out of Lupo's hand just as the commander tried to shoot me. I told you her senses would fail her. Yamada, already primed for action, was half a second faster than the stunned Lupo. The commander of the now dead squad tried to use her machete. The attempt ended with her left arm broken and me acquiring a decent blade. What does all this mean? Lupo demanded. Why are you with her? She wasn't in shock, but the betrayal of her chain dog had clearly caught her off guard. It's not me with her, I said, removing Vector's mask and letting my red eyes show. It's her with me. Your lover is already dead and has been for about half an hour. That was the last thing Lupo heard. Fue's eyes shot her cleanly through the temple, deciding not to waste any more time. I understand she's no longer a threat, the girl said calmly, but we have a lot of work to do. And unlike you, I do get tired, so there's no point in wasting time. Accepted, I grunted, pulling the mask back on. After all, I could only use the optical camouflage mode while wearing the full uniform. Interlude. In the room where the lickers had recently prowled, only a single figure remained, methodically devouring the remnants of the infected. The young vampire longed to meet her father as soon as possible, but she did not wish to appear weak before him. What if, seeing her weakness, he decided he no longer needed her? A brief delay was more than compensated for by the strength she gained from her feast. Yet her instincts soon began to urge her onward, whispering that her progenitor would soon require her help. She could not afford to linger over her meal. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 power stones. 31, Chapter 31. A couple of minutes later, Fue's and I left the City Hall building and, passing by the dead Special Forces soldiers at the doors, headed toward the place where the Wolfpack squad had once exited the underground laboratories. But I hadn't taken into account one inconvenient detail: my companion was alive. So not only did we have to move slow pace, but we also had to fight off, or rather, help her fight off the zombies. No, we could have taken the upper routes, but again, my companion was human, and carrying only a conditionally allied unit on my back could be slightly dangerous. And I didn't want to reveal all my abilities. It's better to be considered a strong zombie with some liquor ability as a transitional stage, really, than some kind of monster, which is what I actually am. But when we turned from yet another alley onto the main street, it happened. First, my companion warned me that a crowd of monsters was approaching. I even felt a bit sorry for my fellow creatures. It seems I had drunk too much blood earlier, and my thoughts were still wandering in the wrong direction. Still, we quickly fought off the crowd of frenzied zombies. Only some of them turned into crimson heads. That was an unpleasant surprise, but let's go into a little more detail. Hey, hi F-05. My companion called out to me, but I interrupted her. Please, just Kane. I am still a full-fledged person, and I find such treatment offensive, I said softly, but with confidence. After all, the skills I'd learned from my last two victims were definitely useful. Even the theory of persuasion was in there. Never mind. Some of the signals from the zombies we killed haven't disappeared from my radar. What's more, they've moved into a more intense spectrum," she said, and with a sharp movement brought her rifle behind my back. It's clear that there's nothing unclear here, especially considering that a zombie also had risen behind her, its flesh shifting to a blood-red hue as it lunged sharply in her direction. I shifted to the right with a light, practiced motion, as if I'd done it hundreds of times before. In the same movement, I pulled my army knife from its sheath, grabbed it by the blade, and sent it flying, straight into the head. Definitely I'd learned these skills subconsciously. But the only truly controlled action had been stepping away from my previous position. Meanwhile, Yamada opened fire, clearing out the group in front of her, the one I'd already dealt with. Well, go figure what this virus does. It seems to be defeated, but if you don't destroy the head, there's a chance even a regular zombie will rise again, and even stronger. Annoying. I leaned forward and slipped past Yamada, giving her a better view and the opportunity to clear my flank. At the same time, I pulled the knife out of what was now unquestionably a corpse, drew a second blade, and rushed toward the slightly lagging relatives of this twice, or should I say 3, dead. I dodged the claws and closed the distance with a sidestep, kicked sideways, shattering the second one's leg, and swung my crossed knives cleanly severing the first zombie's head. I spun, driving the blade deep into the back of the skull of the one-legged creature trying to rise. The second was done. Definitely, these skills were incredible. True, there was some delay compared to ideal execution according to Vector's memories, but I compensated with my own speed. And once I got used to it, who knows? I might even surpass Vector himself in close-quarters combat. I should have taken Lupo's machete. I turned, and the zombie reaching for me lost both arms thanks to a combined strike from my knives. TSK. I really needed to measure my strength, or I'd snap the steel or dull it on bone. And while I was enjoying myself with the regular zombies, I somehow forgot that everyone else reacts to me. Yamada, having already burned through her rifle ammunition, didn't waste time reloading and instead drew her pistol. Well, yes, you reload when your comrades are covering you. But there were only 2 of us here. Besides, she's the only one fighting from a distance. I handled close combat. It seemed someone was reveling in their power, and that someone was definitely not a mercenary. If it were possible to become human while retaining these abilities, or at least something like Wesker, that would be remarkable. I dodged another zombie's grasp and, as I passed, slashed its throat before driving the same blade into the back of its head. I turned, flipped the knife into a reverse grip, and buried it in the temple of the armless zombie. Another lunge forward, and both knives pierced the skulls of 2 redheads from below, right at the base of the jaw. A little farther ahead, Yamada stood calmly reloading, having already taken care of the rest. Quickly, apparently, 1 bullet per zombie. No, she'd done this before, but here the situation was clearly more dangerous, and still she moved with measured precision, shooting in her own distinct style. The part of me inherited from Vector appreciated that immensely. Why didn't you finish them off? I nodded toward the last pair, from whom I'd just retrieved my knives. I crouched and wiped the blades on their clothes. I was curious to see how you'd handle them. Your style is very familiar. It's getting more and more interesting. That last sentence even made me flinch. Not physically undead don't flinch, but mentally. Reflexively. I don't even know how to explain it. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 power stones. 32. Chapter 32. I see. Shall we move on? I am calmly interested, but even in that short phrase I could hear familiar to Fu Ai's intonations, and for me as well. After all, I hadn't merely watched Vector's life, I had lived it. No, it's time to get down to business. Now I'll collect samples from the zombies and their next stage and analyze them quickly. Don't worry, the mobile lab will be enough for that. And then, while the data is still hot, we'll check your tests. At the same time, we'll compare the 3 different stages. Actually, even 4, because I managed to obtain some liquor DNA particles when we encountered them. She said, and there was a slightly fanatical note in the lady's voice. We'll change scientists at the first opportunity, and I'm even afraid to absorb her, just in case this particular brand of madness is transmitted the same way. I have no desire to become a mad scientist. While the girl enthusiastically took samples 2 of each type, to rule out errors, as she put it, I tried to understand what I was feeling. No, that's not right. What a strange feeling has been growing inside me for the past hour, since we left City Hall. To be precise, it had appeared even earlier. Anticipation, apprehension, something along those lines, but I couldn't interpret it. Nor could I understand where it was coming from. And then, just as Fu Ai's was finishing her work with the syringe gun, at least, that's what it looked like, extracting samples from the redheads after having dealt with the ordinary ones, it happened. 3 zombies emerged from the backstreets. Nothing extraordinary, really, except that I didn't even have time to get close to them before they were crushed by something very fast that leaped out after them. No, the speed of this something was comparable to mine. That alone was enough to shock me. But what truly froze me was the fact that I saw, albeit not clearly, what attacked them. It was not human, which was expected, and not a tyrant, hunter, or licker. The latter, as far as I know, don't attack ordinary zombies. That realization caused me to lock up. Or rather, to slow down unnaturally. Still, the zombie killer looked closer to them. Yes, she was drenched in blood, but her speed and her pale yet remarkably well-preserved skin could even be called beautiful, at least to someone with a different aesthetic sense. For me, the blood in which this creature seemed to be bathing, along with its tattered clothes, completely ruined any appreciation of the spectacle. And the paleness seemed even more pronounced than mine. No more like the same, but only until the first meal. All of this threw me off so badly that I didn't even react in time when she attacked me. No, that's not the right word. When this female individual knocked me off my feet. I only truly started reacting when she tried to pull down my pants, and a bizarre thought flashed through my mind. Can zombies, even unusual ones, have an instinct to reproduce? Perhaps I would have been raped. I wonder how, considering that I'm essentially a corpse, so that bodily function shouldn't work, and the sight of a blonde zombie did nothing to encourage the performance of a certain organ. Still, it might be worth checking its functionality someday. The charms of an impotent existence are definitely not compensated for by any superpowers. That outcome was prevented only by Fue Eyes, who raised her gun and fired at my attacker. No, this individual should really be called a rapist. But the only effect of the shot was that it forced the undead creature off me. Well, her reaction time was no worse than mine, possibly even better. Dodging a bullet, I'm not sure I could pull that off myself. The individual who leaped off me wasn't in any hurry to stand upright. She remained on all fours just as she'd landed and even growled. Pure instincts. But I had no intention of getting involved in this any further and risking the only scientist we had on hand. If Fue Eyes became the first victim and she was alive, so that was entirely possible, and I wasn't fast enough, the consequences would be unacceptable. The backward jump with my pants hastily pulled back up turned out to be surprisingly dramatic. Landing beside Yamada, I grabbed her by the waist and jumped first onto a lamppost. Then, pushing off with all my strength, I launched us onto the roof of the nearest building. I glanced back. It worked, and I hadn't even believed it would. The undead repeated my maneuver of jumping onto the pole exactly, right down to the choice of lamppost. But here was the problem: I had deliberately pushed off in a way that would destabilize it. Still, I expected something like this from someone who wasn't inferior to me in speed or strength, otherwise, she wouldn't have knocked me down in the first place. As a result, the leaning pole began to fall and crushed the blonde undead beneath it. Even if you were Hercules, gravity would still win, especially with the added weight of a collapsing streetlight. I gained a couple of seconds. By the way, she reminded me of someone. But it didn't matter. It's silly to stay and waste those few seconds thinking about it. So, grabbing the squealing, I'm not a sack of potatoes. Yamada, I leapt across the rooftops and got us out of there. Yes, when faced with the choice between hiding my strength and abilities or running away from that thing, I chose the latter. I'm not a coward, but I am cautious. Phew, what was that? Yamada asked a few minutes later, once we were far enough away. And by the way, next time carry me more carefully. You shook all my insides. Even jumping out of a falling helicopter has less G-force. Bonus chapter for 100 power stones. The next bonus chapter will be for 200 power stones. 33, chapter 33. Something I definitely don't want to deal with. If even a dozen of these creatures gather in this city, things will be pretty bleak for you and me. And don't look at me like the Tuiri in the same boat anyway, so I don't see the point in sugarcoating the facts. True, if there really are a dozen of them here, how can I put it? They don't seem to be like ordinary zombies in terms of their parameters, so it's quite possible this is your umbrella having fun. And in that case, you're definitely written off, regardless of whether your squad completed the last mission. I won't even mention the current one or not. I shrugged, standing calmly beside the girl, who was bent over and catching her breath. Well, sometimes it's profitable to be a corpse. Phew. Okay, let's drop it. What's done is done, and I'm already playing on the other side, albeit with good prospects in the finale. Better tell me this: could you defeat her? Samples of this creature could give me a lot. Who could doubt that the scientist would immediately get down to business? If you want, you can walk back to the interesting specimens yourself. I highly doubt I could beat her, at least not while covering you. And leaving you alone, well, you understand. There are only a handful of safe places left in the city, and leaving you on a roof, what happens if the zombies come pouring out of the building below? That's exactly what I mean. And going down inside isn't a good idea either, there's not enough room to maneuver. I said all this in as soft and calm a voice as possible. Still, I definitely like this soft manner of speaking. Okay, then let's get back to where we left off. I think this roof will do. I'll analyze the samples I collected in my pocket lab, and I'll take a little blood from you as well, Yamada said, unhooking a black rectangle from her back that I had initially mistaken for part of her gear. It really was a lab, mostly computerized, but still. In some ways, this world was definitely ahead of mine. Or maybe I'd just never heard of such things. While the girl rattled test tubes and devices, I tried to recall where I might have seen the creature we'd encountered, but nothing came to mind. Then Yamada took a sample from me. And then I leaned over her shoulder with interest and immediately put on a thoughtful expression, because I didn't understand a damn thing she was looking at. I'd have to wait for an explanation in normal language. But as Yamada read the data, her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed, strangely and menacingly. So, I asked when she stepped away from the field lab, what did you find out about me and the nasty thing living inside me? It's definitely nasty. You know, your infection level is even higher than a liquor's. No, I admit I might have overheated the samples a little, but still. Actually, this is roughly what the structure of the G-virus looks like. Fortunately, I had some time to dig into it at the base before we escaped. It's a pity this information definitely wouldn't satisfy the corporation, otherwise I would have contacted them long ago, waved goodbye to the rest of Wolfpack, and avoided getting dragged into this shit. Removing her transparent mask, Yamada spoke wearily, massaging her temples. So now you're going to try to pay homage to Umbrella with my samples. I smirked, but just in case, I tensed my legs, and I'm still only a couple of steps away. But the girl noticed this too. Her free hand rested lightly on her gun, as if hinting, no, baby, I'm faster. Now, after meeting that strange creature, I'm sure of it. Relax and don't do anything stupid. Those are just your hasty conclusions. Not only is this information insufficient for my purposes, but your virus, how can I put this more clearly? It's wrong, clumsy. As soon as she noticed that I'd relaxed, well, as a corpse it's easier than easy to portray, why strain the girl? She returned to her interrupted task, rubbing her temples again. Maybe you could explain that not only clearly, but in detail. I said calmly. And I doubted my vocal cords were even capable of producing a scream, so swearing was definitely out of the question. In detail? Fine. Here are the details. If in its original form, the G-virus causes constant mutation and adapts perfectly to its host, continuously developing it in response to external, say, threats. In other words, those who fall more often will become sturdy. Other parameters also increase as the virus develops, though not as dramatically. That's the simplified version. In your case, this process is almost constant every second. Normally, in someone infected with the standard strain, this manifests as a transformation broken down into several stages, each with a specific bias. But with you, when you break a leg, it heals and becomes stronger, yet that strength doesn't come from nowhere. It needs building material. And, for example, when your left leg becomes stronger, your right arm may lose some of its strength in exchange. Or when your body strengthens overall, you lose something else, while the normal version of the virus accumulates everything little by little, but evenly, and until now, a drop in parameters seemed impossible to me. And with you, it doesn't happen in stages. It happens constantly. In other words, if we compare your data at the very moment of creation, but there's no better way to put it, and your current data, we're looking at a completely different creature. End of chapter. Good day. Your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 200 power stones. 34, chapter 34. What's more, I'm sure that some of your old abilities may actually exceed your current ones. But this isn't a decline in power, because other abilities will be even stronger than before. It's a bit confusing, but I've never seen anything like this before, and it's difficult to explain some of these concepts clearly in ordinary language, Yamada said. I see. Is that bad? And should I try to stabilize these fluctuations somehow? I replied, showing nothing outwardly. After all, I'm a corpse but feeling a faint nervousness inside. From my perspective, the picture her analysis painted was far from rosy. It can't be called good, no matter how you look at it. But at least it explains your uncontrollable urges for blood and, in special situations, for flesh. Building material. It's also a very interesting observation. I even waited a couple of minutes to be sure, but it's true, when you drink blood, you can almost be called conditionally alive. Yes, even your heart starts beating, albeit very slowly. So slowly that ordinary devices can't detect it. But as the blood diminishes or cools, both terms are inaccurate, but I can't explain that part to you properly. I'll just give you the essence of it. If you don't drink blood for a long time, there's a chance you'll turn into something like the creature we saw. She paused before continuing. The blood of lower-level infected is useless to you. So, strange as it may sound coming from me, humans, lickers, T-103s, and hunters are suitable food sources. Well, and Nemesis, especially him. His blood is your salvation. Don't stare at me like that, your red eyes are annoying. Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't want to become like that, I shrugged in response to her last remark. I understand, but it's still unpleasant. As for this, salvation, I think that, given your peculiar form of bloodlust and consumption, though from a scientific standpoint it's a bit different, but I won't bore you with thutso, considering this peculiarity of yours and your calm consumption of other infected as food, it can be assumed that your body actually needs it. So to speak, it develops your own virus using external sources. At the moment, I know of only 2 carriers of the pure G virus, the monster that came from Birkin, and Nemesis. You need the blood of one of them, preferably both, for your evolution to proceed normally, or at least stabilize. As far as I know, Nemesis is in the city right now. And to be honest, he's far preferable to Birkin in this scenario. Maybe the effect of his genes will be weaker, but he himself is a less dangerous creature. After dealing with him, you can return to main objective. You can't handle it right now, Yamada finished wearily. Listen, you're already falling asleep on your feet. Maybe we should go down into the building so you can sleep for at least a couple of hours. Otherwise, you're useless. A few more hours without rest, and you'll turn into dead weight. According to Vector's memory assays, you already figured that out, since you brought up absorption. You've been on your feet since you arrived in Raccoon City. And during that time, the same mess with Birkin would get on the nerves of even seasoned professionals. And how many hours has it been? A day? Maybe 2? No, stimulants are great, sure, but you're still human, and you get tired. You told me that yourself when we were dealing with our former allies. So I'll quickly clear the floor, you can choose a cleaner place to sleep, and I'll keep watch. I don't need rest anyway, and a couple of hours won't make any difference. I used my soft voice again. Why are you so concerned? Yamada asked with a hint. Have you decided to have a snack while I sleep? Oh, I just don't want to wait for the moment when you start nodding off, get irritable, miss your shots, and react inadequately to danger. A couple of hours of rest will do you good. I don't need it, so I'll watch over my ally because, as I already told you, even I would have a hard time surviving here alone, especially considering the new factors that have come to light. And as for a snack, you're not my type. I added with a quiet chuckle. Well, watch out, because if you turn yes, you're capable of it. The tests confirmed that I won't need 2 subjects to study. Yamada threatened me, as if I wanted to. Okay, don't get clever. I'll go downstairs. You can't sleep on the roof, it's uncomfortable here, to say the least. No, I don't doubt your ability to sleep here, but it'll be much better on a soft bed, and we won't go below the top floor. I headed for the door. It was a pity I couldn't scan the building. There were no living beings inside, and my kin, well, half-kin, considering I'm half-dead, couldn't be detected by my vision, so I'd have to do this the old-fashioned way. I approached the door leading downstairs and, with minimal effort, pushed my fingers into the wood near the lock, then simply tore it out. I don't have time to test my rather modest lock-picking skills. You could have let the lady go first, Yamada said, tucking the long line back into her hair. Right, a reminder that not all memories are mine. I'd somehow forgotten that she could have picked the lock easily. And again, I wanted to use my strength because it's intoxicating. More intoxicating than blood. Probably, if the downsides of my current existence were fewer, I might have gone mad from the feeling of omnipotence. But my memories were still vivid: the bombs in the Cerberus, dead dogs, my ass, my encounter with Lisa in the pit, and all the other misadventures. A very sobering set of thoughts. Let's go, I said, heading down to the top floor. 35, Chapter 35. Are you still offended? And this is the mutant and the terrible monster? Goodness. Fue's eyes snorted. It didn't hurt, but it hurt my feelings. There you have it, the true face of humanity. I exclaimed dramatically. Come on, it happens to everyone. Put yourself in my shoes. I'm woken up, I wake up sleep deprived, by the way, and see red eyes right above me. What was I supposed to think, especially considering where I fell asleep and what kind of monsters roam around here? And I'm still human, and on edge. My companion protested. Or is that how she apologizes? Okay, let's move on. I waved her off and continued on our way with the freeloader settled on my back. And yes, we were moving across the rooftops. More precisely, I was jumping, and she was sitting comfortably on my back. What could I do? She refused to be a potato sack, so I had to carry her. 3 hours is clearly not enough even for a trained body. Well, or maybe the previous few days on feet had taken their toll, so she stole a few more minutes of sleep on me, pointing out the direction and a couple of noticeable landmarks whereupon reaching them I should wake her up. And what she apologized for happened about half an hour ago. It all started when, instead of a couple of hours, I let her sleep for 3. An extra hour wouldn't hurt, and it would make things a little easier for the girl, because I really had no intention of carrying her. And so, after those 3 hours, fortunately, the equipment in the suit could track timer. To be more precise, the suit included a watch. I began to wake her up. Carefully gauging my strength, I shook her shoulder, and she, barely opening her eyes, tried to kill me. Surprisingly, all this was done on pure reflex, because there was definitely no mind in her eyes at that moment, but I could clearly read the sleepiness and fear of the red-eyed wonder. This consequence of my improvement really annoys me. Even more interesting was the fact that I, also acting on reflexes that came from nowhere now, eat whoever you can, almost dodged the blow, so that the strike to the forehead merely grazed me. No, there was no physical pain, but I was outraged by her actions. Let's just say that I'm still outraged by her gratitude for a good night's sleep, as well as by the fact that I didn't slip into acceleration, even though I'm in a constant state of conditional rest, slightly faster than ordinary people. But these are just ordinary people. It's another matter entirely with pros like my companion. And the jumping parameters get on my nerves. So now we're moving toward the Sewer des Centaires, more precisely, closer to the place where they connect to the laboratory, because I didn't really want to wander around the sewers themselves, where God knows what might be lurking. My companion agreed with me on this. Who knows how the virus affected various creatures, and I remember what kind of creatures can be found here. Neither Fue's nor I had any desire to run into something worse than a tyrant. No, of course, there may also be creatures in the laboratories comparable to me or even to Lisa Trevor, but there's no choice here. And still, the laboratory, whose floor plans and some compartments are known to Fue Eyes and me from borrowed memory, would be preferable to the labyrinthine sewers, the map of which the brave wolf pack burned in City Hall. What's this? What's the matter? Why are you standing there frozen? I bumped into you. I was just dozing off again. TSK, what are you made of? It feels like I hit a wall with my face. Hey, where are you staring? We still have 20 minutes of high-speed travel to go before we reach our destination. Fue Eyes began to get indignant. Either someone relaxed, which I don't believe, or they're playing it well, which is more likely. Or perhaps the girl is slightly overtired, which has affected her critical perception. Still, I'm not her partner, more of an ally by circumstance, and getting upset at a monster that can do something it doesn't even expect of itself, which implies what seems to be a temporary lull in hunger and loss of self-control, would be, to put it mildly, out of character for her, judging by Vector's memories. There, ahead, a group of people is cutting across the streets. About 6 people, just like in your former squad. Judging by their posture, they're armed. I can't say for sure, my eyesight isn't good enough for that. One person is running toward them, or rather, across their path. Perhaps a survivor, or their spotter. These are just assumptions. However, judging by his frantic running and seemingly evasive movements, I suspect he's being chased, and that his encounter with the group will be completely accidental. Also, considering the fact that we're actually moving into the area where Echo 6 was supposed to land, it could be them. As for the runner, I don't know. But judging by the fact that I don't see a pursuer, he may be running away from something he's seen, but that isn't pursuing Heimer from infected of any kind. Well, except for the one we met. It's weak, but it still glows, and since I know that, I know what to pay attention to. And even if it were our friend, even you, with all your training, wouldn't be able to escape from it. No offense. I chuckled. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 36, chapter 36. Well, what can you do? Better to be human than a monster, even if it's a strong one. I saw the tyrant's characteristics in the lab, impressive, of course, but I wouldn't want to become something like that. No offense. Fue Eyes mimicked my intonation. Well, she'd definitely be tired. What if I am aggressive and can't stand such jabs? After all, we've only known each other for a short time, and it's a bit silly to judge me by human standards. So what do you suggest? Help them? The girl looked at me skeptically. No, just watch what they do. After all, I can easily pretend to be human in this outfit. And maybe it won't be necessary. If the zombies eat them, then so be it. And if not, we'll take it from there. And what if it really is that squad? The probability is quite high. And we definitely don't need such distractions. Especially if they find out about might could become a problem, better eliminated right away. And I'm also curious about who the survivor is running from. He moves very strangely. Sometimes it feels like he's dodging something bulky, and other times it seems like he's being shot at, I replied. It seems Fue Eyes also grew curious, and I suspect that a significant part of that curiosity was driven by a desire to test my words, because even if it was light-hearted test, it was still a test of me and my abilities. As for me, let's just say that I still hope to meet, if not the scientist, then at least one of the key figures in this mess. And if this really is a government squad, it's a real gold mine. Thanks to the passage of time and the presence of people nearby, that was enough to awaken a still weak but hungry desire. So, let's go and watch, Fue Eyes said again, with that frightening enthusiasm. No sooner said than done. Actually, we weren't really walking but running, as I slightly adjusted my course toward the people who had caught our interest. I managed to arrive at the meeting between the group and the survivor right on time, if not a little late, in my opinion. And yes, luck smiled on me twice. Not only was the larger group from Echo 6, at least according to the Special Forces soldiers' memories, but the survivor, or rather, the survivor turned out to be Jill Valentine. No, she was somewhat different from the game version, at least in that she was more tired and grubby. After all, only in games can you avoid getting dirty and exhausted, and on top of the outfit I already knew, she was wearing a bulletproof vest that completely hid her figure. And to be honest, for some reason she seemed younger to me, although the place also leaves its mark on a person. So, in fact, she may not be that old at all, but she looked like she was in her 30s. Hey, do you like the girl? Or is it just gastronomic interest? Yamada whispered teasingly, noticing my attention. No, I'm just curious to see one of the surviving STARS members. They're the local elite, after all, I chuckled. Did you figure it out quickly, or did you already know? Asked Yamada, watching from the roof. Their uniforms are very noticeable. And despite the similarity in colors, they're much better equipped than the police, but not reduce maneuverability like its colleagues encased in bulletproof vests. I shrugged, still watching what was happening below. Using there was something to see. Jill ran at full speed onto a car next to the wall and even took a couple of steps up the wall itself. Why such acrobatic stunts? It was simple, she was running away from the bus that had hit her, or rather, rolled over her. That's right. Nemesis. Now that was truly impressive. The strongest bioorganic weapon, BOW, of the Umbrella Corporation. An improved tyrant. I honestly don't know how, but even a blind could tell that it was related to the tyrant project. Despite Nemesis's extreme ugliness, its height and build were quite similar. In fact, only monsters of the tyrant project tower over humans by a good meter and more. And the closed suit, something like armor or a vest, was also a hallmark of these creatures, at least of Nemesis. Umbrella still protects it, unlike the tyrants, who are already resistant to gunfire and are not produced in single copies. Unlike this more perfect monster, which now stood calmly on the other side of the bus blocking the road, to the left of the alley the people had come from, staring at the Echo 6 squad. By the way, if they're the 6th, then there must be previous ones. And if so, are those squads here too? The Special Forces soldier had no memory of this information, unfortunately. You need to run. Jill waved her hand, gesturing toward Nemesis, who was still calmly watching them. Yes, this creature would be stronger than the tyrants. What the hell is that? Asked one of the two girls on their team, the one with short blonde hair. Blonde. TSK. That's a really good question. Said the black guy from the same team, who was aiming his gun at the monster but hadn't fired yet. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 37, chapter 37. I don't know, this bastard has been chasing me for 2 blocks. Nothing affects it at all, and the passages between the houses, and the houses themselves, only delay it for a short time. It's simply monstrously strong. As she explained this, Jill didn't forget to retreat into the alley along the route of the squad, and the fighters followed her. After them? Fue Eyes asked, with a strange anticipation. I guess so. Grab hold, you cowgirl, I said, and the girl didn't keep me waiting. A jump across the street, and we were already on the other side, watching the shootout from above. Or rather, the shooting of the zombies that had poured into the alley toward the Special Forces as soon as they appeared there. Well, yes, flimsy house doors won't hold even a crowd of ordinary zombies for long, they'll be blown apart. Not to mention bigger creatures. I look back and see Nemesis quietly, almost unhurriedly, crossing the street through a neighboring alley, already coming out onto the squad's future route. Well, yes, doubling back would mean a long fight, and along the squad's route zombies are slowly gathering, drawn by the gunfire. The Special Forces, clearly not prepared to deal with zombies, are making far too much noise. Going right, jumping out of the alley won't work either, because if I'm seeing this correctly, there are many barricades left by survivors. The zombies. They'll crawl underneath, and who cares if it's too low for a living person? A couple of dislocations and fractures won't bother them. They'll keep moving slower, yes, but still moving. And zombies can easily get around such barriers, but the Special Forces have no chance there. Climbing over would take too long, and where would they even go? Into the unknown. What if there's a horde of the dead behind the barricades? They can't go into the buildings either, it's private property, and the buildings are fenced off from the street by their facades. No, it's possible to break through or blow it up, but the first takes too long, and the second would definitely attract Nemesis's attention. The only option is to run left, and on that side, slowly but inevitably, the culprit of this deadly race emerges from the alley. Formerly a dead end. The monster seems to have taken that philosophically. Damn. Jill, who was the first to run out, blurted out, even managing to sprint a short distance down the street, clearly intending to turn into the passage between the houses on the right when Nemesis appeared on the left. And then he released a real tentacle from his arm, as thick as 3 human fingers, and began pulling one of his targets toward him. Well, Yashay seems to be exterminating everyone except Umbrella personnel, and he has a special fondness for STRS. But despite the swearing, the government squad quite quickly freed Jill from this tentacle. There is no other way to describe it. Damn it, I want a device like that too. I don't even know why yet, but I want it. The blonde girl who cut the disgusting thing off Jill's neck dragged her to the wall. Seriously, how did you manage to get yourself into such a bad situation? The blonde was clearly left behind to cover their backs, while the others started shooting at the massive BOW carcass, but the shots didn't bother it in the slightest. It didn't even bother protecting its head, although unlike the tyrants, the bullets clearly entered the monster's flesh. So, I muttered, you're telling me I should eat this? I can already feel this coming back to haunt me, but there's nothing I can do about it. I snorted. Fue Eyes, take the top floor of this building, just in case. Cover me with fire both from the monster and from our allies. It's not often we get the chance to use someone to eliminate, or at least temporarily disable, a creature like this. There won't be a second chance. But I'm not going to hold back. I've wanted to test my abilities for a long time. I paused, then added coldly, so if the government fighters react inappropriately, or rather, appropriately, to me, do me a favor and send them to a better world. Poser, Yamada snorted. Go on. I'd be interested in getting his DNA, so I'll grant your request. She headed for the door leading down from the roof. I approached the wall and jumped down into the alley from which this BOW had emerged, walking calmly toward him. What is an Umbrella agent doing here and alone at that? Are they mocking us, sending a monster and a mercenary after us? I heard the fighters' voices, along with the wheezing of the big black man who had just been dragged out of the tentacle's grip. Heh, such guys always die first, it's a law of the genre. I continued walking slowly toward Nemesis, who had begun to turn in my direction. I remember that he doesn't react to Umbrella representatives, so if he attacks before I do it will be further confirmation for Fue Eyes that the wolf pack has been written off. Or that he somehow recognized that I'm not human, but my assistant doesn't need to know that. So it's better if he attacks first. It'll only reinforce my point. The monster didn't keep me waiting. A tentacle shot out in my direction. And Fue Eyes had just taken her position at that moment. She took her time and I was walking so slowly because of her. Well, that, and because it's more dramatic this way. I lazily extended my arm, bending it at the elbow, and the tentacle wrapped around it. If he throws me, I'll survive. I have experience after meeting Lisa. But I still want to test my strength. So, let's begin. Time to test and compare the performance characteristics of 2 BOWS. 38, Chapter 38. What's that? Came from one of the Special Forces soldiers, who resembled a deflated, younger version of Schwarzenegger. Is he even human? That question came from the black man, who had finally regained his breath and was now fully aware of the force with which the monster was pulling its victim. And me? I'm fine standing with my feet planted on the asphalt. Beneath me, it begins to crack, just like under Nemesis. Not as rosy as I would have liked, but better than I feared. Our strength is equal. He can't pull me in by coiling his tentacle, but my attempts to drag him closer are just as fruitless. Ha, you really are very strong, Nemesis. This will be enlightening. I grin inwardly. It seems this is called excitement. I've never experienced anything like this in my entire life, but now it's just rushing over me. Is this another trick of the mind, or is it the virus affecting my body? It's talking. It looks like I've already been classified as the same kind of monster as this filth in front of me. Which, to be fair, is accurate but somehow still offensive. I can sing, too, so put your weapons away. I said aloud. I don't like being targeted. And I'm not a monster, I just stole a very interesting suit from the lab. So maybe you can help me deal with this. Or rather, continue. I kind of came to your aid. I tried to sound as peaceful as possible. After all, they can always finish me off later. I hope that's what they're thinking, but they'll definitely want to talk to a potential lab asset and dig up whatever dirt they can. That's their real goal, after all. Well, they definitely don't need to know that only 2 of us are leaving here alive. As for the 2 alive ones, they are Yamata and me. Conditionally, of course. I am not entirely sure what I'm referring to right now, but I'm hoping the G-Virus will sort it out eventually. This way, there's at least a chance they won't run and will take advantage of my help, even if it's only out of self-interest and the intention to kill me afterward. What an interesting costume. I think I'll take you up on your offer, said the not Schwartz, apparently their leader. Judging by the way he gestured toward the monster while keeping an eye on me, thanks to Vector's memories, my proposal had been accepted. So, shall we pretend to be some bizarre mix of Batman and the Prophet? The Special Forces squad opened fire on the monster. If only they knew who was nearby, though they clearly intended to conduct an interrogation after the battle. I might not wait for it to end. But only the red-haired guy, oh no, wait, it was the 3rd girl in the squad, managed to land clean shots in the head and the bare left arm, along with a solidly built, bald man with a thick black beard, vaguely reminiscent of a biker. Swap his Special Forces uniform for a leather jacket, and the image would be complete. Shoot him in the head, you idiots. I shouted, unable to hold back. I pulled out a knife. Using my claws would be far too obvious, and version with the costume might stop working, and sliced off the annoying appendage. Apparently, the enemy experienced a moment of cognitive dissonance, because he didn't immediately grab anyone else. I lunged forward. Let's blame it on the suit's acceleration. Maybe they'll believe that, and dodged a direct kick from the massive body. Wow, his speed isn't bad. Slower than Methank God, otherwise I'd have had to retreat. He would have won through sheer mass and resilience, but still very fast for something this large. I'm close now. Strike the side of his torso with my left hand, probing for the bulletproof vest. It dents slightly, but nothing more. Nemesis has already released another tentacle and tries to wrap it around me. I jump back, sever the tentacle with my knife, and at the same time notice 3 clear shots to the monster's head. Nemesis throws its head back and lets out a roar so powerful that the resulting shockwave actually knocks me off my feet. Wow, and I thought they were exaggerating in the cannon. While I was getting back up, Nemesis had already turned and, with a wide swing of its arm, sent their wannabe Schwarzenegger flying. The poor guy sailed about 10 meters through the air. He'd tried to come up from behind and stab Nemesis in the neck. He lost consciousness, but judging by the gestures of the biker, who rushed to check on their commander, he seems to be alive. I'm not sure about his condition, though, after a flight like that and considering the force of the blow. I leap toward Nemesis while it hasn't fully turned back and jump upward, plunging my knife straight into his head. I was counting on my own strength, acceleration, and gravity to crack his skull. But instead, there's the sound of metal striking metal. A steel skull. Original. And now it's obvious why he isn't afraid of gunfire. The vulnerable part is reinforced. The only casualty here is my knife. End of chapter. 39, Chapter 39. The monster turned around and decided to knock me down with a ramming strike of its arm, literally swatting me aside. I dove under it and, pushing off the monster's bent leg, struck again from above with my hands locked together. There was a dull clang and a direct blow to the chest. Something seemed to crunch. Damn it, what rotten luck. This time I flew all the way into the wall, though at least the flight was shorter, not as far to get back into hand-to-hand combat. Still, I really shouldn't be exposing myself to blows like that. The protection of my suit is, in truth, mostly nominal, and there's no real defense against something that hits like a crowbar swung by a truck. A couple more strikes like that and I'll be a flat pancake. And judging by the stiffness in my movements, my ribs are already seriously damaged. I slowly haul myself upright along the wall and turn, trying to bring my pistol to bear on him. No chance. He's already begun shielding himself with his arm, clearly afraid for his eyes. Shooting the rest of his body is pointless anyway, he's completely covered in body armor. So, after emptying a full magazine at his head, the few exposed parts and his partially uncovered arm, achieving absolutely nothing, I resort to the most effective course of action available. I go back into close combat. What else could I do? The mercenaries were retreating in a coordinated group. Jill and the blonde were keeping a low profile, trying not to draw attention. The group commander was out of action, and Four Eyes was in no hurry to intervene, apparently reasoning that she couldn't do anything to the monster, and that the people around didn't pose a threat to me yet. At least, that's what I'm hoping for. This time, though, I had a different objective. Darting toward the mutant look who's talking, I dodged its attempts to kick or crush me underfoot and slashed at the seam where the bulletproof vest joined, using what remained of my knife. No, this won't deal any serious damage by itself. I could hack at even ordinary zombies like this for 5 minutes without meaningful results. But 2 or 3 more strikes like that, and I can tear away the upper part of the vest. The fastenings are already compromised. I shift left, circling the carcass, and repeat the strike. Good. Now I just need to tear off the shoulder sections. I jump and, pushing off the monster's leg, manage to slash its left shoulder, but a tentacle bursts from its wrist, coils around me, and hurls me straight through a second-floor window of the nearest building. Rest in peace, unexpected helper, I hear the black man's voice. Not a chance, you damn African American. I snarl, vaulting back out the window. TCH. Something's wrong with my left leg. It isn't responding properly, and there's a noticeable delay. Did I sprain it? Tear something? I'm even glad I don't feel any pain, otherwise, I'd probably be howling in agony. Meanwhile, the skinny girl with the black ponytail, the last of their group, starts throwing grenades at the monster. Yeah, sure. The explosions do little more than shake it and make it angrier. Oh, no, that's not entirely true. The left side of the breastplate has shifted slightly. Looks like the final strap on that side finally gave up the ghost. Now the right side. The magazine I emptied while limping toward the target did nothing, even though I put almost every bullet straight into its heart. I'm honestly pleased with my accuracy, but the shots were ignored, just like the fire from the Special Forces' heavier calibers. TCH. What a bastard. It didn't even bother protecting its body, only covering its head with one arm when another grenade was thrown at him apparently. Before that, they were probably afraid of blowing up their volunteer assistant. Nemesis takes a step forward, and I seize the moment. My body feels better clearly, some of the damage has already healed. I rush in, strike him just below the knee, forcing his massive frame to lean on it, then jump onto his extended leg. Pushing off, dodging his snapping tentacles, I deliver the strongest kick I can to his jaw. He doesn't have lips, so I'm hoping his teeth will end up lodged in his throat. No such luck. His teeth withstand the impact of my leg, and for once, I don't break anything from the blow. Still, I'm airborne again, completely forgetting that dodging in midair is more wishful thinking than reality. So when that bastard grabbed me by the head and slams me down onto his knee back first, grinding my spine, all I can do is curse under my breath. No, there was no pain, as always, but the position alone is humiliating. Still, that one's on me. Deal with it. And just to make things perfect, the monster steps on me. You'll regret that. No longer caring about secrecy, my mask slips aside anyway, though there's a chance my hood still hides what I'm about to do. I wrap my arms around his leg, preventing him from lifting it and holding him in place, and sink my fangs into his ankle. Strange. I don't feel any particular difference compared to a liquor. It doesn't taste like the G-virus to me. I'm no expert, of course, but given that the taste of blood is one of the few sensations I can still experience, I'd expect something distinct. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 Power Stones. 40, Chapter 40. But my actions only made the monster freeze for a moment, though in that instant I managed to drink nearly a liter of blood, although in my opinion there's far more blood in this hulking thing than in an ordinary human. Unlike the Special Forces, who apparently did not notice my feint at all, since they did not stop firing for a second. Then this damn soccer player swung his leg, lifting it off the ground along with me, and before I could pull myself away, pushing off wouldn't have worked anyway. With my lower body refusing to cooperate, he hurled me into the building next to the one I'd already visited, straight through another second-floor window. Some Brazilian national team soccer player. All right. I'll lie here for half a minute, let the blood circulation patch up the damage, then slowly get back to my feet to the familiar sounds of gunfire, swearing, and explosions. And a helicopter? What the hell? I carefully approach the window and witness a scene that gives me a nervous tyke. At least mentally my half-dead body is immune to that sort of thing. The Echo 6 fighters certainly exchanged fire with the monster, and in precisely this context, but the main contribution was coming from a blonde individual whose appearance was already familiar to me. What a surprise. Answer me already. Someone's voice snapped over the intercom. Though why someone's? Only Yamada and I can use it. Kane here. Why did you take so long to intervene? I asked, since Four Eyes was now firing at the armed monster. And, judging by the container nearby, the weapon had been delivered by the helicopter flying over the city. Apparently, Umbrella had dumped the monster into the streets first and only then supplied it with hardware, or maybe the big guys noticed something and decided to arm it retroactively. What an armament. A real Gatling gun. What the hell is going on here? And how long was I gone? I asked the most important questions, deliberately ignoring the girl's reproachful tone. No more than 20 seconds, she replied. Though in our situation, that's quite a long time. The moment you were thrown somewhere into the building, or rather, a second before that, this unknown type of infected jumped down from the opposite side and immediately charged your attacker. And you know, either she got stronger, or she was holding back last time. But I suspect you're no match for her. She's tearing Nemesis's armor apart very efficiently, dodging attacks just as quickly, and deliberately drawing all the fire onto herself. She paused for a fraction of a second. Unfortunately, she was a little late with this. The first volley from the dropped weapon still hit those bumbling soldiers. So they lost that big bearded guy. And, in my opinion, it was a complete loss. Maybe we should retreat. And yes, sorry for not interfering earlier. I just needed to see what you were capable of. After all, laboratory data, especially from portable devices, is one thing. Real combat is another. I wouldn't want to go back into the lab with that monster, knowing there's someone nearby whom even ordinary titans would tear apart, Four Eyes admitted. I'm sorry, but you should understand my caution. What a pain. I ended up with a real stubborn one. But Nemesis's roar cut off my thoughts and any chance of responding. That blonde zombie finally finished my work by ripping off his remaining armor, but in the process, she caught almost a full burst of fire at point-blank range. Given the sheer power of the Gatling gun and the zombie's relatively fragile build, the round simply tore her in half. Before she could do anything, before she could even crawl away, Nemesis crushed her head under his boot and roared in triumph. And right before my eyes stands the last glance of that girl, who, a moment before her complete destruction, found my silhouette in the window and looked straight at me with a gaze I couldn't understand. What kind of nonsense is this? May feeling sorry for a zombie? And why do I have the distinct sense that it wasn't just an infected creature that died, but at least someone I knew well? My roof quietly slides off, empathizing with the death of an incomprehensible zombie, and then, from somewhere deep inside, a powerful rage surges upward. Meanwhile, Nemesis unleashed another burst at the squad opposite him, and not all of them managed to make it behind cover. He turned toward the position where Four Eyes had been firing her rifle. Run! I shouted into the radio. But all I got in response was a cry of pain. I'll kill you. You killed my scientist and I needed her. I'll tear you apart. I don't care if you're stronger. I leaped down, no longer caring about people or masking. Yes, the plan was mediocre from the very beginning, and I paid dearly for its failure. Now my consciousness began drifting back into the dark crimson void, just like the first time, when I encountered the dead dogs, when my body fought on its own and I didn't even remember anything afterward. Who cares? The only thing that matters now is killing. And right now, controlling myself is the last thing I'm interested in. Bonus chapter for 100 power stones. The next bonus chapter will be for 200 power stones. 41, chapter 41. I slowly open my eyes and sit up. Am I alive? Strange, and that's putting it mildly. Where am I? I look around, and judging by everything, I'm still in the same place. Nemesis's corpse is nowhere to be seen, and judging by the circumstances of my awakening, it must have assumed I was dead and simply moved on. Which makes sense, I am half dead by nature, and unconscious to boot. Yeah, surreal. Alright, Jill is nowhere to be found. Did she escape? Considering her phenomenal luck, she probably could have. Echo 6, on the other hand, is clearly no longer among the living. Not only are their bodies scattered nearby, drained of blood, which raises the question, is this from the oops section, but also the memories of these guys in me as well. Speaking of memories, I hit the jackpot again. That black guy was a virologist. Man, there I go again, saying, the black guy, his name was Lawrence, as my memory helpfully informs me. So it turns out I drank them. Not all of them, though. The blonde is clearly missing from the list of absorbed memories. At least the memories itself is faint this time. If they were as invasive as they were with Vector, I might not have woken up at all. I get to my feet and notice a torn piece of my suit nearby. Strange. I'm sure I was covered. At least, when I came to, I didn't notice the gleam of my pale skin. I look down, holy shit. Congratulations to me, I've definitely advanced to the next stage of mutation. Nemesis really beat me up badly, if I remember the transition conditions correctly. Now I'm skinny again, though not as much as when I first woke up. My body is still largely humanoid, but now it's anthracite black. Here we go. I approach the nearest first-floor window. It's cracked, but I'm not in the mood to hunt for a mirror. On the way, I notice that the individual Nemesis killed is also completely drained of blood. Maybe that's why transition had this effect on me. She was clearly not a normal zombie. Sienna Fowler, the blonde from the squaddy's still alive, judging by the faint glow. But not for long. Obviously, I didn't drink her blood, but she's been beaten pretty badly. Whether by me or not is unclear. And according to the memories of the other squad members, she was a hacker programmer and reasonably proficient with firearms. Nothing more. So she's of no particular interest to me. I study my reflection with curiosity. My eyes are completely red, both sclera and iris, with black dots at the center of the pupils. My cheekbones are more pronounced now, which likely means my jaw is stronger than before. A lean body packed with muscle, long claws at least 4 centimeters, minimum jet black like the rest of me, and completely non-retractable. My fangs have grown as well, now protruding slightly from beneath my upper lip. I've become a full-fledged vampire. Great. An overbite. Talking is going to be uncomfortable. I approach the unconscious blonde with the charming call sign party girl and crouch beside her, licking the blood. It's still warm, which means not much time has passed since I lost control. At least, that's what my newly acquired, or rather, sharpened instincts are telling me. If that's true, then I need to check on the 4 eyes. Maybe there's still a chance. I leap from where I'm standing and vault straight through the window where the girl had been earlier. On the opposite wall, I spot Yamada herself, a bloody streak trailing down the wall behind her. Apparently, she tried to retreat as well but didn't make it in time. And I was just about ready to accept her proposal to escape. So, what do we have here? A faint, barely perceptible but still visible glow. Is she alive? Looks like it. But I have no idea what to do. I'm a orderly, not a doctor, and I've never had to deal with gunshot wounds before. To hell with it. I remember she was talking to me about turning, or rather infecting, whatever, let her complain to me later. In my opinion, it's better to be half dead than fully dead. I lean over her, push aside her collar, and carefully bite into her neck. Thankfully, with my new fangs, it's easier than ever. I drift through her memories for a couple of minutes, then force myself to pull away. For some reason, it feels like something needs to remain within her for the process to succeed. Infection, I guess. Let it be so. At the same time, it finally clicks where I've seen that blonde zombie before. Although, she wasn't a zombie at all. I turned her myself. I just hope the 4 eyes doesn't end up the same kind of abomination. Otherwise, I'll have to kill her with my own hands, and I really wouldn't want that. Even with the memories of 2 scientists now weighing me down, there's a big difference between carrying dead knowledge and having the scientist himself nearby. I can't afford to lose a living source of information. Sorting through all this research on my own would take forever, constantly bogging me down as I dig through half-assimilated knowledge. 5 minutes pass in tense silence. I'm already considering just leaving, having first reliably killed the girl. Out of respect for her, she deserved at least that much, when a quiet sigh came from the girl, who had stopped glowing red. No, more like a hoarse wheeze. Okay, now let's get ready for something unclear. But it's more of a mental preparation, because physically, I crouched down next to her when she turned into a vampire, and I'm still sitting here. Nothing is leaking, and I won't feel any discomfort no matter how long I stay in this position. End of chapter. 42. Chapter 42. What? I'm alive, Kane, and you've changed, sire. What's wrong with me? 4 eyes immediately began to hysterically ramble. Well, that wouldn't. Hoff, she was understandable, having gone through so much over the past few days, especially the last half day. But the sobering slap had the opposite effect. I'm not in pain, I don't feel any pain. What have you done to me, you bastard? She jabbed me in the stomach with her rifle. I turned you. I had no choice, or rather, the choice was clearly not in your favor. It was either death, and considering the place of death, a subsequent existence as a regular zombie, or this. And you have to admit, this option isn't so bad, I replied philosophically. Not so bad. Are you aware that we're both now directly dependent on the serum with the G-virus? And Nemesis won't work for us. To be honest, I tricked you so you'd fight him without hesitation. That's why I said what I did last time. As it is, it's still the same T-virus. We either have to find the intact serum in the lab or fight a monster even stronger than Nemesis, who's already flattened everyone. She blurted it all out, though she was in no hurry to pull the trigger. If need be, we'll fight. There are 2 of us now, and we're both much stronger than humans. And I've clearly gone through my first evolution, so even someone as defective as me should have improved characteristics, I replied calmly. How easy it is for you to say. Do you understand that we're both monsters now, and ones that both humans and other infected will attack? And judging by what I called you and the fact that I can't shoot, believe me, I tried twice. Me transformation into an infected has somehow affected me. It was quite possible this was just banal imprinting, but it could also be something more complicated. You know, I understand your desire to keep a scientist by your side, but I don't want to be a monster. and now the muzzle of the rifle was pressed against her lower jaw. No, this wouldn't do. There is, of course, a way to stop a human woman's hysteria. And despite her physical changes, her consciousness should still be mostly human, so it might work. Or it might not. Lean forward and kiss the girl. She doesn't push me away and doesn't seem to resist at all, but she doesn't respond either. Which is understandable, roughly speaking, she was just kissed by a half-corpse. Still, it's definitely better than hysterics and depression. And most importantly, I felt her lips. What are you? Four Eyes said sluggishly, eyeing me warily as she moved back and pointed her weapon at me again. As for me, nothing, I was just digesting the experience, because aside from blood, it was the first time I'd felt anything. I just felt that kiss, damn, how I missed those feelings. I smiled happily, with my jaw and fangs, only the word grinned would be appropriate. But I didn't feel anything, and I even have a theory why. You drank my blood very recently, and when you consume human blood, you become me, as I already explained, conditionally alive, at least more alive than without blood. Without it at all, you risk becoming another infected, albeit with strange abilities. But as we saw, Nemesis would smear you across the wall. I didn't feel anything because my blood was inside you. In other words, my blood was already drunk, and no new blood has arrived yet. Damn it. Now I'll have to go on a hemoglobin diet too. At the end of this tirade, Four Eyes hit on the knee with the butt of her rifle. Knee cracked and seemed to break, and so did the rifle butt. Be more careful, Ulrug height. Otherwise, I think something like a fatherly instinct is awakening in me, or not quite fatherly, I said, helping the grumbling girl to her feet as she mourned the loss of her rifle, whose barrel was also bent. Someone had miscalculated their strength. Yeah, I understood her. I'd learned to control myself only after earning more than a dozen fractures. And yes, we can test your theory. There's a living representative of the government squad lying unconscious below us, and apparently no one has tried to eat her yet. I'm already fool over fool, judging by the feast down there. But you need it, especially the first time. Believe me, the first hunger really messes with your brain, I added. You want me to eat a human, drink blood? No. I've had to kill before, but to do that I'm a mercenary, not a crazy cannibal. Four Eyes said, though by the end her voice trembled. And you're not human. I'm sorry to remind you, but the sooner you come to terms with it, the easier it'll be for you, I said, looking her straight in the eye. I'm not okay. Let's at least go down first. She finally regenerated her leg and tried to climb onto me, but I stopped her with a gesture. And you can't do it yourself. Are you kidding? This is the 9th floor. She snapped, and only then did it dawn on her. Yes. Even if this height is a bit too much for your legs right now, first of all, this parameter will start to grow after injury, you said so yourself. And the main thing is not to fall headfirst. The rest is trivial, I replied, not bothering to mention another point. Unfortunately, I hadn't taken into account that my interlocutor was far from stupid. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 200 power stones. 43, chapter 43. Yeah, and you're even counting on me breaking something when I fall, because my reserves, already low after turning, will be spent on regeneration, so hunger itself will drive me toward a living snack. And you know that's not the worst option. It's much easier to accept that the first time was due to instincts, not cold calculation. Why are you looking at me like that? I am a scientist, after all, and I consider such possibilities. And keeping a cool head is a trait specific to this part of my profession, not to mercenaries. With that, she jumped out the window herself. Ouch! She exclaimed as she landed, and I followed, touching down calmly and leaving deep footprints in the asphalt. Yamada, however, broke both legs, and after that ouch more a reflex, since she didn't feel pain. The girl crawled toward Miss Fowler with a light, animalistic hiss. Bonaptit, and gather some information at the same time, newborn monster. By the way, I wonder if I've created anyone else besides the already dead blonde and Yamada. And then we'll have to wait and see about this party girl, in case she turns away from Four Eyes. But, as practice showed, she didn't turn, rather, she turned into a regular redhead. That suited me just fine. Some of the worries about the relatives who had suddenly shown up were gone, and at the same time I twisted the heads off the rest of the squad members. They clearly weren't going to turn, but why take the risk? That came later, though, and now. Now let's conduct the tests. Four Eyes said happily, walking toward me with the unsteady gait of a drunk. I didn't have time to ask what kind of tests she meant, because she suddenly sped up, knocked me to the ground, and did exactly what I'd done upstairs, interrupting her hysteria. You know, there really are sensations, she said, pulling away. I'm happy for you. Maybe you'll get off me now. I couldn't resist asking. Denied. I want to experience a more intense degree of pleasure while I still have fresh blood inside me. She licked her lips, very seductively, and her slight paleness didn't spoil the effect at all. I could state that after receiving the blood of a living person, I wasn't impotent at all, but in other cases, I feared it would be the opposite. Hey, we can't do that in the middle of a city full of dead people. I tried to reach Four Eyes, who was clearly drifting somewhere far away after her first meal and the new sensations. Yes, we should climb onto the roof and continue there. And don't look at me like that, I can tell you're not averse to it yourself. And no, if I say that I've fallen in love with you, all, kind and fluffy, it would be a lie. I suspect it's the same effect as with the previous turned one. After all, that blonde was her, you just didn't realize it yourself. She snorted. You know, your observation and quick wit are really getting on my nerves. Yes, she was my first convert, and I'm glad you didn't turn out the same way, I said, getting up with the girl still hanging on me. After all, I was stronger, and she'd only managed to knock me down because of the suddenness of her move, something I definitely hadn't expected. And I'm also glad that now we're definitely on the same side, I added with a smile. It's quite possible that this is only until we accept the normal G-virus, Yamada said, stunning me. And if not? I tilted my head slightly, as if thinking, but in reality I was moving my mouth out of reach of a cat that had started its march. If not, then I don't mind staying with you and being a pack predator. And I'm not just saying that because of my newfound instincts. The girl smiled. Okay, enough pestering. I give up. Let's go upstairs and take a break from everything that's going on, and then you can tell me what you found out from the victim's blood, I said. No problem, but you promised, Kane. The girl looked at me warningly. Well, my worldview was crumbling before my eyes. Two undead creatures on the verge of intercourse, yeah, we're doomed. However, contrary to expectations, after just half an hour we began examining the test results. Well, Four Eyes did. I understood some of it, but other parts required me to dwell on them for a long time, skipping the rest of the information, which was disadvantageous from our blood and from what Nemesis had left behind. And not because it was so interesting, it was, especially for my companion, but because after half an hour our sensitivity began to fade. I don't think I need to explain further, it was definitely a mockery by my creators drinking blood just to experience a truncated version of sensations that are always available to humans. So now we were studying the results in Four Eyes' frankly dying laboratory. Yeah, what can I say? For you, the question of obtaining the G-virus has become less urgent. You've bought some time by stabilizing your condition with this transition. But for me, this question is even more urgent than it was for you before. And judging by the data we've obtained, I'm far from your previous performance levels, and the processes are proceeding much more slowly. Apparently, there's a lower concentration of the virus in my blood. But it's unclear whether this is because you fed on infected people, or because I simply can't take a large dose into my body, Yamada said thoughtfully. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 200 power stones. 44, chapter 44. Honestly, I don't know. I'm still a layman in these matters, although I've definitely come to understand some things, I said, looking over her shoulder. I'm more concerned about the results of Nemesis's DNA. The T-virus is certainly more stable and all that, but damn, even now, he's head and shoulders above me in terms of physical characteristics. I somehow arrogantly decided that I could be his equal. And then there's the sheer mass of that carcass and its overall impenetrability. It's good that I'm undeniably faster now, I sighed. Yes, my earlier conclusion about the equality of forces had been incorrect, it was just that he'd been pulling the tentacle with far less force than he actually possessed. Well, now it's better for no one to meet him at all, because we could accidentally damage the parasite that controls him. And so I'm more surprised that even before meeting him, your data was comparable to that of the tyrants. Except that your size and weight let you down in some cases, so you couldn't be portrayed as an impenetrable monster. But now I'm sure it wasn't a mistake on the part of my laboratory, because an ordinary tyrant could do little against Nemesis. So we can consider the test a success, well, with some errors, but we only benefited from those. The scientist dismissed my ironic glance. In other words, we now have to break into the laboratory under the city and either search it for the virus or carefully drink Birkin's blood while staying alive ourselves. Fun. And how wonderful it would have been if the Nemesis option had been real. You deceived me cruelly, I sighed, climbing off the roof and heading toward its edge. Now, in principle, we didn't have to run across rooftops anymore, especially considering the umbrella helicopters. The ordinary infected below wouldn't react to us the way they had to Four Eyes before, and we could either outrun the rest or kill them even without weapons. Well, unless we ran into Nemesis again, of course, and even with 2 or 3 tyrants, no matter how strong we were unlikely to win. The same went for a dozen or even fewer hunters, and considering their natural armor, yeah, I was still as far from the title of the strongest monster as I was from the moon on foot. Never mind. I'll get there, I'll obtain a proper G-virus, and then we'll see who wins. By the way, the progenitor virus will serve us well too, Yamada said thoughtfully. No, how did you even find out about that? I flinched even physically thanks to conditioned reflexes. I told you I managed to rummage through the lab's database a little during my first visit, but why such a reaction? The girl asked in surprise. You know, I'd rather face Nemesis and Birkin in hand-to-hand combat than go after the only carrier of that virus. Lisa Trevor needs to be beaten not by just the 2 of us, but by a group of infected like Uzermed, at least to distract her at first, and supported by at least 50 infected. Yes, I'm talking about infected like us right now. Any fewer than that, and this monster will definitely kill us. I shuddered again. Even now, I rated Lisa's speed far higher than my own, and I wouldn't even mention her other abilities including her indestructibility. I see you've already encountered the carrier, Four Eyes chuckled. Yes. You should be hearing her call right now, I said. Call? Well yes, there is something barely perceptible. But before you mentioned it, I hardly felt it, the girl replied. What? But it's getting louder and more insistent with every passing hour. It's really getting on my nerves, you know. And after the evolution, it's like hang yourself. I know it's useless for me to hang myself, it was just an expression. I waved it off. Is that because the virus is more developed, or because you're more incorrectness as an infected individual? Still, as I said, I'm much more stable in this regard, if only because the processes of infection development in me are almost 3 times slower, and therefore less chaotic. As you can see, the rate of change in you hasn't slowed down at all only now, due to the new stage, the parameters are actively growing. But for how long, that's what I can't say. Not with this half-dead equipment, the scientist said sadly. For her, the destruction of the miracle suitcase was a greater blow than her own change of species. Why destruction? Well, she had taken some of Nemesis's bullets, and some of them had gone straight through her right where her trusty device was mounted on her back. It might have been shock-resistant, but it was clearly not anti-Gatling. As a result, it was already malfunctioning badly and discharging rapidly during our analyses, and when it finally analyzed Nemesis, it produced a result and then modestly died 2 minutes later. Okay, enough whining. That's exactly why we're going to the lab where, excuse the tautology, there are labs, I said, watching the utterly dejected expression on the face of my now definite partner as she stared at her smoking suitcase. It was a shame, of course, but I thought we'd be able to find a replacement. Let's go, I grunted, holding out my hand to her. Still, it would be better for me to jump off the building with her in my arms, otherwise she'd break something again. Let's go, the girl said, turning away from her pocket lab and offering me her hand. End of chapter. Hey, it's a new week. Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate Power Stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 Power Stones. 45, Chapter 45. I don't even know how to react to this, I said, standing beside the city sewer system and staring at the entrance to it, or rather, at what was left of the entrance. In any case, it just means the monster is already in the city. But it's actually better for us now that only standard samples remain near the laboratory. Well, somehow that's not comforting, for I said calmly, slightly mumbling the end of the sentence as she walked around the huge steel door lying on the ground, its surface gaping with deep dents. Yep, the door held but the fastenings didn't. And I'm not talking about myself, otherwise, it would be lying inside, not outside, and I seriously doubt my body could knock out this flimsy protection. More precisely, I'm certain I couldn't do it even now. No, let's assume I have enough raw strength, but my overall dimensions are clearly not on my side. And I seriously doubt I actually have enough strength for such a feat anyway. After all, if I understand correctly, the mutated Birkin himself who broke down this door, and even in his first stage, he can rival a tyrant in size. As for strength, the former scientist surpasses even Nemesis. And even then, the door was blown out, not torn apart, which says a lot. At best, my efforts against this same door while it was still closed might leave a few dents, nothing more. Pushing it inward would be completely unrealistic too. Okay, enough meditating over a piece of the laboratory complex, and they wouldn't spend this much on a simple sewer, so we're already on the verge of the lab. Let's go down, Four Eyes snorted. That's comforting, damn it. You know, your standard laboratory samples, you and I fit that description. I said, with a hint of sarcasm. Are you really worried? It seemed that today Yamada had fulfilled her monthly quota of sarcasm. At least, Vector's memories indicated that she was usually taciturn and reserved. However, referring to the same memory, only that of Four Eyes herself, she never really got along with her partners and always kept her distance from others, so it was entirely possible that this snarky little menace might actually be the real Yamada. Very much so. My previous memories of places like this have brought me nothing but what stands before you, I said, returning to my softer manner of speech. Yamada even flinched at the sudden change. Yes, presenting certain things under the sauce of this voice tends to unsettle people, even my companion. It's very effective. You slip something into the and may receive an answer to a question that the other person did not even intend to answer. Okay, we'll take our past actions into account and try not to repeat them. And how good it is that I can't smell anything, I said, jumping down into the sewer pipe. Yeah, ankle deep in all kinds of filth. It really is a blessing that I don't feel much disgust. I'm lying. There's something vague, but no direct revulsion, perhaps. And I don't smell anything either. Well, did we splash around? I laughed, imitating Vector's voice. Yamada, who had just started moving, nearly fell face first into the filth beneath our feet. Yes, she will definitely never get used to this. Damn ventriloquist. Four Eyes snapped, grabbing the edge of the doorway at the last moment and glaring at me. You'd better watch your step, I said, turning around and heading deeper into the fairly wide collector tunnel. It was wide enough that 5 people could walk in single file and there would still be room for a 6th. That's better, I said with satisfaction when, at the next bend, since the semicircular tunnel had no corner, saw dry area appeared along the left side of the passage. More precisely, it was something like a narrow path, raised slightly above the rest of the tunnel. Apparently, it was meant for sewer workers. After all, someone has to inspect the place, and few people would want to slog around ankle-deep in shit. Come on, even I find it disgusting. That's not even the word for it, Yamada sighed with relief, as walking through the waste products had clearly been even harder for her. Apparently, the place evoked unpleasant associations. After all, we couldn't smell anything. For the first time, I was grateful to fate for my current existence. Still, the girl grimaced almost constantly. But we didn't get the chance to tease each other. From a ventilation opening to our left, that is, from the side of the raised path we had just started walking along, we heard a scraping sound and saw what? Some kind of strange mass of insects, reminiscent of head crabs, only with much longer legs. And their bodies were encased in chitin. Oh, I really don't like this. But before Four Eyes or I could even fire a shot, the swarm of creatures quickly crawled out of the ventilation shaft or whatever this recess was. I'm not exactly well versed in sewer architecture, and just as quickly scurried off in the opposite direction. Huh, strange, I said, still staring after them in surprise. I thought all infected creatures, even insects and plants, became aggressive after mutation, not cowardly. End of chapter. Hey, don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 50 power stones. 46, chapter 46. Strange, I said, still staring after them in surprise. I thought all infected creatures, even insects and plants, became aggressive after mutation, not cowardly. Something's not right here. You're absolutely correct in your assessment. You and I are exceptions only partially, at that only prove the rule. And what's worse, while we received at least brief instructions before deployment, and some afterward, regarding the other known types, I have never encountered these ones at all. And I was overly curious back at the base, more than once narrowly avoiding trouble because of it. And I dislike it more and more. Four Eyes said this without any intention of lowering her rifle, staring tensely in the direction where the creatures had disappeared. Yeah, I can't argue with you. It's starting to smell bad, I replied, drawing a gun in addition to my knife. Vector's reflexes constantly assert themselves. I draw it at the slightest suspicion, completely automatically. At the same time, I glanced almost lovingly at the blade of the shorty. Yes, my old one broke on Nemesis. But I had an entire squad of government attack dogs at my disposal, so now I have a spare 5 of them, to be exact. Yeah, Vector had a genuine fetish for knives, and that particular trait clearly left its mark on me, especially considering that this is most likely a new creation. How I hate that word. I cringed inwardly, given that I myself was a new creation. Quiet. I think I hear something, Four Eyes said, listening intently. Yes, me too. It's coming from those insects, and what's worse, I can't see outlines the way I can with living creatures. I'm almost certain we'll have to scramble now. After all, these are hardly ordinary zombies, and only they ignore us, I said, mentally bracing myself. Not that I really need to tense my body. Being undead means I'm always physically ready for combat. If only my consciousness were just as cooperative, it would be perfect. I adjusted my grip on the knife under Yamada's sidelong glance. Yaha gesture more than familiar to her, thanks to one donor and my excessive greed. And then, around the corner, a wave of zombies burst out. No, not burst, more like rolled in. At first, I honestly thought there weren't that many of them, but after a couple of moments, when the stream showed no sign of thinning, I pulled myself up short. What's more, they were clearly moving in our direction. Nuthat's not right either. They were running. What's more, the swarm of insects we had encountered earlier had conveniently settled on their backs, their legs buried deep in the bodies of the dead, except for the upper ones, raised like a tarantula poised to jump. The fact that the zombies were reacting to Yuzin that they were running, despite being ordinary zombies rather than redheads, strongly suggested that these insects were controlling them. Peaceful creatures, yeah, right, I snorted, moving forward. Good thing Four Eyes could now shoot much faster and more accurately than a normal person. Her speed and reaction time had increased even compared to her already impressive parameters as a trained fighter. As for rushing into close combat, let's just say it would be unwise for the two of us to do that simultaneously, and in terms of raw combat skill, my current form clearly surpasses Yamada's, and Vector's experience pushes that even further. But Four Eyes is better with a rifle, and no one ever forbade me from using a pistol at close range. It's a pity we can't simply gun them all down. The zombies are already almost upon us, and if we shoot while retreating, they'll just force us back out of the sewer. There are too many of them. If the main wave crashes against me, we can deal with the rest at our leisure. A shot rings out, and a bullet whistles past me, piercing the head of one of the fastest runners and lodging itself in the shoulder of the next. Well, yes, it's not particularly difficult to punch through rotten flesh, and these guys have been marinating down here for a long time, so even at first glance they make an even sadder impression than their counterparts topside. I lunge forward and, ducking under the outstretched arms of another runner, simply cut them off, separating head from body with a reverse stroke. I pivot aside, letting the corpse of a zombie that failed to stop slide past me. These monsters are still terrible at controlling their bodies, otherwise, we'd be in real trouble. Speed is speed, but if their coordination were better, they could simply bury us under sheer mass. The insects either haven't fully settled and haven't adapted to their hosts yet, or they just have poor control over the dead. It won't be difficult to do what Four Eyes and I immediately thought of, though it's a shame to waste ammunition. On the other hand, the laboratory should have warehouses and a security room, so we'll restock soon enough. Yamada immediately drops a zombie that rushes past with her rifle, then switches weapons, grabbing a captured shotgun courtesy of the government's special forces. It's far more effective against a crowd at close, or relatively close, range, and reloading a rifle takes longer than picking up a pre-prepared shotgun. I spin fully and drive my knife to the hilt into the head of a new opponent, then raise my pistol and fire into another's throat. Shaking the blade from what is now definitely dead body as I pull the blade free, the skull cracks open. I step forward, slipping past grasping hands, and with an upward strike, split the face of the next opponent in half. A pity it's only the face and part of the skull, so, just to be safe, I finish the job with a reverse stroke, cleaving the head completely in two. Who knows? Maybe that wouldn't have been fatal for these controlled ones otherwise. End of chapter. 47, Chapter 47. I raise my hand with the pistol again, but there's no need to finish off the one that's already been shot. The bullet passed straight through and entered the top of the insect's head, and both of them seem to have gone quiet. Well, that works. I holster the pistol, it'll only get in the way now, and instead draw a second knife. Let's see how this goes. Of course, fighting a small group of opponents, as in Vector's memories, doesn't quite match the current situation, but it's worth trying. I step forward, severing the arms of two zombies reaching for me. Another step piercing the throats and heads of the next two. I spin in place, literally tearing the dead bodies impaled on my blades free and using their bodies to scatter the other zombies from the nearby rows. Yes, this technique requires tremendous strength. Your arms have to be spread in different directions and, ideally, shouldn't even tremble. Vector mastered it only by sheer miracle and promptly chose to forget it, because there were far too many variables that interfered with proper execution. For me, as someone not quite alive, holding my arms steady with opponents impaled on them was easy enough. And I'm certainly not lacking in strength, thanks to my current mutation stage. It was in the first form that it jumped around wildly, but now it seems to have stabilized. And if it changes again, it will only be for the better, I hope. A funny thing, I still feel Umbrella's touch on me, same as on their special projects. I've got my own mutation stages too. After all, the same Nemesis had 3 or more, I don't remember exactly, and Birkin, a pure carrier of the G-virus, definitely had at least 3. No, even more than that. It's a shame I don't remember everything. And now I'm already in the second stage, and I can only hope I won't end up as a piece of garbage like the 2 I mentioned. I really don't want to become a tentacled reservoir like Nemesis's final form, or something resembling a gigantic slug like Birkin. Although, I suppose that would be a fitting end for the monster I've become. Still, I do want to keep on living for a while, yet ideally in a humanoid form. But all of those thoughts stayed somewhere in the background while I was literally carving my way through the crowd of dead around me. There was something surreal about it, a dead man killing other dead men who, in turn, were hostile toward him. Back to the fight. I had to fully adhere to the demands of this method of combat, constant movement, and limiting myself to ideally 2 strikes per opponent. If I stayed in place, I'd be simply crushed. Even for me, there were too many of them, and lingering to deal with each individually would have led to the same outcome. So if I couldn't kill someone immediately, if I missed, or if the enemy shifted position too quickly, I had to ignore the wounded and trust Four Eyes to handle them. It's also worth noting that the idea of pompously fine, just proudly walking straight through the crowd didn't work. By the end, the dead were coming in dense, almost orderly rows. So I had to dart around in different directions throughout this crowd, constantly wielding 2 knives and occasionally adding my feet to the mix. At least Yamada was shooting accurately, and those wounded not packed tightly into the main mass, as well as those whose formation I'd disrupted by carving gaps, were quickly upgraded to the status of permanently dead. Kane, aim for the parasites. Many of them have separated from the bodies we've already killed. You can't see them from the center of the crowd, but I can clearly see how they retreat into the tunnel and then return riding new zombies. We definitely won't be able to clear the entire collector, so it's easier to eliminate the creatures controlling them, and the zombies themselves, which will remain in front, don't react to us, so that won't be our concern. For Isa's voice came through the internal comms. Thank God that connection had survived. Got it, I replied shortly and adjusted my tactics, trying to slip behind the living ones. Although their speed was higher than that of ordinary zombies, but still clearly within human limits. They weren't nearly as fast as the redheads, which were noticeably quicker. And that was good, very good. So now I focused on getting behind the dead and driving the blade straight into the parasite itself. Still, I didn't abandon my previous fighting style entirely. It wasn't always possible to get behind them, not with such a dense crowd. But everything has a tendency to come to an end, so 10 minutes later, and that's under acceleration, the last insect was killed. Phew. That was a real test of this new form. No, of course there was no shortness of breath or other signs of physical fatigue typical of the living. Where would those come from in a corpse? But mentally, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief. Roughly 60 to 70 meters of the tunnel at a glance were carpeted with zombie corpses, with the smaller insect bodies starkly visible among them. Yes, there were definitely far fewer of the latter. How much more work had I done? Still, it was good that Yamada had noticed all of this from the sidelines. That, too, was part of the plan. One of us engages the enemy directly, in full contact, while the other observes from a distance and identifies weaknesses. 48. Chapter 48. Is that all? I asked Four Eyes, who was collecting samples from the zombie carriers and the insects themselves just in case. Yes, I remembered that her laboratory had died a brave death, but the syringe guns and ampoules for them had survived. So, as she told me, this unfortunate scientist hopes to use the laboratory equipment for analysis. Yes, the samples have been collected. I can't wait for us to finally get to the lab itself, the girl replied, straightening up and slipping another ampoule into her belt pouch. I nodded silently and moved a little farther ahead, gun and knife at the ready. Precautions would not be superfluous here, even if you are a bioorganic weapon. So we continued on our way in tense silence, slowly, more precisely, cautiously advancing with our weapons raised. After about 50 meters, we reached an intersection where our tunnel crossed another. Which way now? Still straight ahead? I asked. As I'd already said, I didn't really know myself, and Vector was more focused on monitoring the situation, relying on his teammates for navigation. Because of that, I had almost no memory of the route through the sewers. To the left, Four Eyes replied, pointing her rifle in that direction. Got it, I smirked, once again mimicking Vector. We turned and came face to face with a few ordinary zombies. As expected, they didn't pay us any attention, so none of our small but proud company saw any reason to waste ammunition on them. After passing by relatively calmly, we found ourselves in front of a new door thicker than the last, which, just like the first one, lay torn out along with its frame and sprawled across the floor. I tried to remember whether Birkin had gone outside according to canon, and what exactly he'd gone out there for. Somehow, I couldn't recall anything clearly. Only a vague image of a police station surfaced, and I had no desire whatsoever to go there. So, leaving that as a last resort, I decided to squeeze as much as possible out of this place for now. Maybe I'd even get the virus here. Shall we go in? Four Eyes asked, pulling me out of my light reverie. Ladies first, I said, making an inviting gesture. Who knew what might be waiting in the very first room? I really wanted to keep living, even if in this form, or especially in this form. It was hard to say whether I would have agreed to remain just human now, having assessed my new capabilities. Ugh, damn gentlemen, the girl muttered under her breath, but she still entered the passage first, and nothing fatal seemed to happen to her. I followed and looked around the fairly large hangar, which now stood empty. And more importantly, it was clean. Well, more accurately, there was no filth underfoot. There were bloodstains and traces, not too many but enough, yet the floor was dry. Hey, what are you doing? I snapped my fingers in front of Four Eyes' face, because she had frozen strangely, staring at the nearest bloodstain, her nostrils flaring predatorily. Oh, what an idiot I was. One person clearly hadn't been enough for her, and she apparently disdained feeding on zombies, especially sewer zombies, even though her hunger must have intensified considerably by now. I'll be right back, I said to the girl, who had already come to her senses from my actions. I jumped back into the sewer and grabbed the nearest zombie, which was standing there like a statue. What are you doing? Yamada asked in surprise when I dragged the unresisting infected into the room, where Four Eyes once again cast interested, hungry glances at the bloodstains. Eat. And don't argue, you need it. I can already see how hunger is getting the better of you, and to endure it. I don't want to discover at some wonderful moment that you've lost control and are trying to bite me with relish. No, I understood that she was unlikely to attack me, but that was still unconfirmed information, and I definitely had no desire to expose myself to unnecessary danger. With a quick motion, I chopped off the zombie's head, not cleanly enough for it to fall off, but enough for blood to gush out. A pity they weren't fresh, of course, but I knew from experience that even such a dish was quite edible. Four Eyes either couldn't fight her instincts and thirst for long, or simply didn't want to. After all, she'd accepted her new condition even more easily than I had at first. Within 10 seconds, she was bent over the zombie, which didn't even react until it was far too late. A biological weapon that reacted only to the living, thank God for that. Otherwise, Yamada and I would have stood no chance at all, neither in our plan nor in the city as a whole. While my partner satisfied her thirst for blood, I found myself pondering an interesting question. Why, immediately after my evolution, had I still not felt even a hint of this thirst? Had the interval I could go without a fresh blood supply increased, or had my body finally stopped its constant restructuring? Oh, how useful a pocket lab would be right now. But because of my decision to fight Nemesis, it had been lost forever. Then again, if not for that decision, I would still be lugging around a weak human on my shoulders, in every sense stuck at the first stage of evolution and plagued by constant bloodlust. In other words, even if I had the chance to replay everything, I would still choose the same path. No, I might tweak a few minor details, but overall, I was satisfied with the outcome. End of chapter. Hey, Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 power stones. 49, chapter 49. You're a bastard but thank you, 4 Eyes said, straightening up. Just drank. So things worked a little differently for her. I'd even eaten my first victims. Though, then again, our first victims hadn't been the same too. I'd started with dogs or rather, Cerberuses, since that's what they were called. Feeling better? I snorted in response. Looks like it. She put the oxygen mask from her suit back in place, refusing to throw it away, even though her body couldn't possibly be harmed by anything like that. On the other hand, she could still pass for human better than I could, because I couldn't even pass for a black guy now unless I wore a deep hood. Then where do we go from here? I sighed. This time, the passage was intact. And closed. Exactly where your eyes keep drifting, Yamada replied with a sly chuckle, clearly refreshed after her snack, heading toward the right wall or more precisely, toward the panel and door there. What now? I asked, following her. Stopping beside the door's control panel, Yamada rummaged through her bag, silencing me with a brief gesture. Then she pulled out a small device. I would have called it a smartphone, but it didn't really look like one and, extending a cable, connected it to the lock. After a couple of minutes of fiddling, the combination lock beeped and turned green, and in front of us opened an elevator door. Well, down we go. And I had already forgotten about 4 Eyes' gadgets, despite Vector's memories and even her own, though the latter had only been skimmed, and I had focused too much on her scientific skills. My mistake. Even back when she was still human, up on the roof and preparing to sleep, she'd demonstrated me a lockpick, and in the squad she'd been responsible for opening anything that required breaking in. We went down in a matter of minutes and emerged into a somewhat dark but fairly stylish corridor, though marked with signs of devastation. Off to the side, we found what passed for a reception desk, predictably devoid of any staff. I'd have been shocked if it weren't. With a quick glance again courtesy of Vector and Special Forces instincts, I spotted a gun that clearly no longer needed its owner. A USP Compact, a good old model used by police and special forces, or rather its improved variant designed for suppressor use. Strange that it wasn't the corporation's standard in-house model, specifically Umbrella's modification of the same old USP used by mercenaries and Umbrella employees. But never mind. This one would do just fine, especially since the ammunition was compatible with mine. After all, the only real difference between the modifications was the increased rate of fire. I picked it up and, just in case, kept my original pistol as well. Better to have 2 weapons ready for a fight than one, even if that one comes with extra magazines. Damn it. 4 Eyes slammed her fist down on the desk in irritation and, not realizing her newfound strength, broke it. What's wrong, Miss Vandal? I turned toward her, preparing for a fight just in case. Who knew what had set her off? Although I didn't hear anything and didn't see anyone nearby. The computer is dead. They smashed it to hell, those bastards. No, I understand that mercenaries in our squad were here a few days ago, and that at least one G-virus carrier and a group of zombies passed through, but I still hoped no one would have needed the computer. We, for example, fled in a hurry, and I think the other survivors did the same. And it's unlikely anyone but survivors would be interested in the electronics here. I'm sorry, but you and I are the only real anomalies. Everyone else, even Birkin, wasn't exactly known for brilliance. But no, there's clearly been damage here. Most likely accidental, but still infuriating. I would like to get the information I need from here. 4 Eyes frowned deeply. I see, I replied calmly. I hadn't expected things to be that easy, but Yamada was unusually emotional right now. According to Vector's memories, she hadn't been like this before. At least not to this extent. And don't look at me like that. I wasn't expecting to find everything I needed just to figure out where their lab department for sample analysis is. And don't give me that look too, I'm not some kind of extremist scientist. Yamada caught my whisper instantly. Alright, already, how long are you planning to hover around that lifeless hunk of steel? I said, already walking farther down the corridor. Fortunately, it was short and ended in a single compartment apart from the ascent upwards on the left. Go on, go on. You can't open the door without me anyway, Yamada said, deliberately lagging behind. And she was right. The door wasn't as imposing as the earlier ones, but it was also made of steel and well reinforced. Maybe I could deal with it, but not instantly. After a brief struggle, a large room opened up before us, half hangar, half laboratory. We found ourselves on the second level, which curved around the room from above. In places, bridges crossed the hangar, along with wide platforms, but, roughly speaking, it wasn't a full floor. About 60% of it was missing, not due to damage. Everything here seemed to be steel, and nothing appeared broken, but simply because of the structure itself. At least, that was my unbiased opinion as a complete idiot in such matters. But it wasn't fate or even the number of corpses in the room, real corpses, without even a hint of pseudo-life, that caught my attention first. It wasn't the shattered tanks either, with some kind of solution that had solidified into a greenish sludge across the floor. My gaze locked directly onto the face of a hunter, standing one step away from me on the opposite side. This is what you call oops. End of chapter. Hey, Don't forget, your support is very important. Please donate power stones, write reviews, and leave comments. It will be a huge help. Bonus chapter at 100 power stones. 50, chapter 50. We stand, we watch, we remain silent. Had the third point been the opposite, one could well commit suicide, for a talking hunter would be far too much for any deviation of the Resident Evil world, and death of the psyche would be guaranteed. The first to speak, or rather, to hiss after a couple of seconds, was the monster standing opposite me. He was echoed by at least 3 more similar sounds from around the room, but his reaction speed was clearly slower than mine. I'm not sure about the 4 eyes, but I think that even in the worst-case scenario, they would be equal in speed. The raised paw with powerful claws moved as if through thick water, so with a direct kick, I sent his carcass into the room before his attack had even reached halfway. Deciding that success should be consolidated rather than standing idle at the threshold, I rushed after him, firing a couple of shots at my victim as I moved. Imagine my surprise when I realized that even though I was slower than the bullets, I could see them flying, and, if I wanted to, I could now easily dodge them in a shootout, if there ever was one in this dead city, instead of relying on my immortality. Clearly, the advantages of my new form greatly outweigh the disadvantages, and the only disadvantage is that I look a little less human, which isn't so bad. The strange thing is that I didn't notice this during the battle with the zombies infected by those parasitic insects. Perhaps it was because of the hustle and bustle and the general crowding around me, but putting aside unnecessary thoughts, I decided to figure it out later or strain my mad scientist, and continued moving toward Hunter. At the same time, I examined the effect of the shots. As expected, the caliber of the pistol bullets couldn't penetrate even the thin scales on its belly. Too bad, I'll have to open this can by hand. I finished my movement already right up against Hunter and struck from the bottom up with the knife I had grabbed a moment before. The resistance was terrible, and all I achieved was a small scratch on the skin, from which blood reluctantly emerged. What are you made of? Maybe you weren't created by crossing human and lizard genes, but by crossing a lizard and a Terminator. I said heartily, looking at the knife blade and noticing that it was all nicked. A couple more blows and -1 knife. And I already have so few by my standards. The knife went back into its sheath. Let's see how you like my claws. Behind me, I heard commotion and slow gunshots. A quick glance back. Yes, it was 4 eyes who had opened fire with a rifle at the second hunter approaching us. How fortunate that the room we're in has 2 floors, the second being a mezzanine and that we're on it. The hunters clearly cannot accurately calculate the power of their jumps, which even I consider to be powerful, so now, of the 4 enemies here, we only have real problems with 2, while the others are unable to jump up to us properly. I dodged a clumsy blow, noting at the same time that 4 eyes, who had clearly come to the same conclusions, was moving at the same level as the hunters. I need to finish this quickly and help the scientist, who is not only my partner but also a very useful member in the laboratory complex. As soon as the hunter's paw, missing me, slammed into the floor, digging its claws into the steel surface, I immediately took 2 steps forward, almost pressing myself against the hunter. At the same time, I used the acceleration from my movement to strike with my bent arm, finally piercing the monster's abdominal scales. Yes, my claws are definitely good. At the same time, I smashed Hunter's face from the side with my left elbow, causing it to sway from side to side. With a split-second difference, I took another step, stomping on a limb that had not yet been pulled out of the floor. There was no crunch, and the paw was not torn off, although the monster howled in pain. Not only is its armor strong, its bones are, too, bad. Continuing my movement, I pushed off from the enemy's paw, adding to its pain, and, sticking out my knee, jumped up, smashing into its long-suffering face and forcing it to jerk upward. Given the structure of its humpbacked skeleton, this was almost more painful than the episode with the arm. But then my own leg made a suspicious crunching sound. Looks like I can kiss my kneecap goodbye. Strange that I didn't tear anything on its sharp skin. End of chapter.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.